Hello everyone. If you are new to my channel, then consider liking and subscribing. It will make me feel wonderful if you do it, thanks. By the way, I also have a Luffy fan fiction channel. If you are interested, the link is in the description. A New Life by the Ethereal Lord. After a shocking discovery during his battle with Kaguya, Naruto gets transported into the DC universe with an unlikely companion in tow. Now he has to adapt to a world of caped heroes and villains, one of whom he may even know. I don't own anything adios.
Seated on the patio of one of the many safe houses he had procured since his arrival on this world, Naruto again found himself thinking over what Donna had shared during his little meeting with herself and Calder. While she didn't just come out and say it, she heavily implied that Superboy's allegiances aren't quite what we thought them to be. Her words were, "Is it not a bit too convenient that the Project Cur simply defied its ingrained programming to join your merry band of child soldiers? Surely someone on your team has noticed that the criminals have suddenly become just a little bit smarter and are now leading you all by the nose. I hate to even think of it, but is it possible that she was right?" That was the question. While he considered himself an excellent judge of people's characters, Naruto was nowhere near deluded enough to think that he was infallible. Back home, Ino had told him of nearly a dozen different non-coercive ways to create spies simply by implanting thoughts into their subconscious, some of which he had used since his arrival on this world. Of that number, only 5 had been her clan techniques and, of the other 6, he had personally seen the aftermath of one. Sasori's spy, Yura. In this world, he had already experienced the vicious sting of a telepathic assault as well as what felt like a soul possession attempt. That already meant that there were at least 2 ways to subjugate another being's mind to one's desires, and he suspected that some of the methods Ino had told him of were in use here as well. With Connor having been raised by Cadmus and their Genomorphs, creatures that he knew via first-hand experience were capable of telepathic subjugation, the possibility that he was an enemy plant, willing or otherwise, was too great to be ignored. Yet, Naruto found that he was hesitant to simply categorize the boy as a spy. Though Calder had been the one to point it out during their meeting, his mind had already been on the same line of thought. Why was Donna's clone so eager to paint her fellow clone as a mole? As far as Naruto was concerned, blowing the cover of a deep cover asset like that only made sense if Cadmus had deemed the team unworthy of their covert surveillance, so to speak, and the shinobi was dead certain that Cadmus did not operate that way. If they wanted to pull surveillance back, they'd find a way to recall their agent, or they'd simply forget to activate them until they required the spy's service in the future. According to Kennedy's reports, Cadmus personified the phrase, "waste not, what not," and this ploy stank to high heaven of a waste. However, as Kaguya had pointed out when he turned to her for a different opinion, it was possible that Connor wasn't a spy and that Donna's clone had simply thrown those words at her progenitor simply to play mind games on the young Amazon. A few moments after mulling it over, he had come to what they both agreed was the most likely scenario. Donna's clone had thrown those words to sow seeds of dissension in the team while simultaneously hiding the identity of the actual plant. It was a particularly bothersome line of thought, particularly because, while he had long suspected the possibility that there was a mole on the team, this left a pool of suspects that was simply too large to. "Boss?" He glanced upward, shielding his eyes with a hand, to see Chloe standing by his shoulder. "You guys ready?" "Yup." The blonde in charge of extending his network into some of the seedier sections of Gotham held out a hand and, when he took it, helped him up. "Michael and Kakashi are in there, as are our hosts." "That's good to know." He nodded as they walked to the living room. The building they were in served as Shiho and Shikamaru's home and was a nice little bungalow that was no different from the others on the street. "Anything else?" "Besides us wondering where Kaguya is?" she asked, clearly fishing for information. He wasn't quite ready to break the news of his impending date with the princess to them, though portions of him are not. He was still terribly worried about how the day would go and, as far as he was concerned, he needed to keep this as low-key as possible. "She's out with Isaac today. They're finalizing the change of name process as well as a couple other formal details in preparation for the book launch." The blonde whistled softly. "You're prepped for a launch already? Awesome. I'm just hoping the book sells well." Naruto sighed, revealing a bit of his worry about the whole endeavor. "It would be a pretty harsh setback if I can't get this little piece of the old perv out into the world." "Don't sweat it, boss." Chloe grinned in a manner that was eerily reminiscent to his. "I'm damn certain that this will be the start of a famous career for you." "Let's hope so." Though his tone seemed more foreboding than anything else, deep inside, Naruto found himself feeling reinvigorated by the absolute confidence in her words, and he couldn't help but wonder if that was what it felt like to be on the receiving end of one of his "make your damned heart soar" speeches, as Anko had so hilariously put it. "Yo boss. Are we kicking things off or what?" Michael asked as they walked into the living room. The raven-haired pseudo-human was seated opposite the scowling form of a half-asleep Shikamaru. A shit-eating grin plastered across his face. Judging by the bits of balled-up paper strewn around the pineapple-haired guy, the tattered sheet of A4 in Michael's hands and the barely suppressed grins of Kakashi and Shiho, Naruto knew precisely why the pseudo-human based off his Nara friend was scowling. Fun as it would have been for him to poke fun at the Nara, though, there was a purpose to this get-together and it was time they kicked things off. Wait. Where's Kennedy? Dunno. Michael shrugged as he flicked another ball, this time at Kakashi, who simply redirected the shot back to Shikamaru. Maybe he got busy. It wasn't so far out of the realm of possibility. Unlike most of them, the pseudo-human had a full-time job at Cadmus, an organization that would likely not care for its employee personal lives. If a meeting had come up suddenly, then it was entirely possible that Kennedy was too occupied to make it out without a fuss. Alright then, we'll begin without him, Naruto stated, preparing himself for the meeting ahead, only to stop when the doors slammed open and a red-faced, gasping brunette came tumbling in. Ah shit. The brunette winced as he noticed the arched looks he was getting from everyone else. I'm late, aren't I? You are, Kennedy. Mind telling us why? Sorry about that, boss. Kennedy sighed. Things have been a tad hectic at Cadmus over the past few days. Heck, I'm just a clone of Ken. The real me has been in a meeting for the past 4 hours. That bit of news had everyone sitting up, even the more laid-back Michael, who asked, what's got them so spooked? The real me figured you'd want to know that, so he only created me 2 hours into the big meeting. The Kennedy clone stated as it took a seat at the table with the rest of them. Desmond, the guy in charge of Cadmus, got a call some time ago that greenlit Project Derzad. Hold on. Chloe frowned as she gestured for him to stop. I've been out of the loop for a while, so please refresh my memory. What the hell is Project Derzad? From what Kennedy's been able to gather, Project Derzad is one of 3 clone projects carried out by Cadmus to create a being that could replace Superman were he to fall in battle. While the first 2 created results that were deemed subpar, Project Match had all the power and no mind to speak of, while Project Kerr, Superboy as we know him, was inferior in terms of physical ability. Project Derzad possesses the potential to match Superman's power while retaining his mind, Shiho explained. Derzad's personality is a bit odd. In fact, Dr. Sumitha Banerjee considers them something of an imperfection. Kennedy added, having the memories of what his progenitor had seen of the 3rd Kryptonian Claude. Extremely shy and almost terrified of facing large crowds. Wait, something doesn't quite make sense here. Chloe interrupted with a frown. You said the project was just green-lit. How the hell is it already prepped and ready to go? The thing with Project Derzad is that it isn't like its predecessors, Kennedy said before launching into an explanation. The aim of Match was to see if it was possible to even clone a Kryptonian. Sure, they had plans on what they could do with it if it was perfect, but they were pretty certain that it wouldn't, so it didn't change much. Project Kerr was different. They wanted to see what would happen if they modified Superman's DNA. Would it take or not? Would there be any complications, stuff like that. So Connor isn't a true clone of Superman? Shikamaru asked, a visible crease on his forehead. Kennedy nodded. I haven't figured out what secondary modifications they made to him, but I know he's not all Kryptonian. But Derzad is? As far as I've discovered, yes. Anyway, while Project Kerr was to see if Kryptonian could be modified, Derzad is something far more troubling. He was created specifically to act as a replacement for Superman, Kennedy revealed. Well, that's not ominous at all. Shikamaru snorted, his words punctuated by a lazy eye roll. What, do they also have a Project Godkiller on the side too? Though he said it with a nonchalant drawl, everyone in the room understood the true meaning of Shikamaru's words. Kennedy, however, wasn't done yet. You think that's scary? Wait till you hear this. They've had a look-alike on site living a pretty normal life for the past year. Shiho dropped her tab in shock, all thoughts of note taking forgotten in the wake of that little landmine. Around the room, equally stunned looks were present on just about every face. They've had a plant in place for a year? It wasn't too difficult to understand their shock. In general, the success rate of infiltration missions often depended on how seamlessly one could blend into their new environment. One of the best ways to accomplish this was to build up a persona that, when injected into the field, would simply exist as though it was meant to be there. What Cadmus had done, thanks to their cloning capabilities, was to plant an inactive agent in the field long enough to have it build up ties to its community that, when the real agent was swapped in, the groundwork was already done and they would have no need to waste time cultivating social ties. This is what scares me the most about Cadmus. Naruto sighed as he pinched the bridge of his nose. Ever since Kennedy's been in their organization, I've come to discover that their foresight and planning is far beyond almost anything I've ever gone up against. They all knew that he wasn't joking. There were probably only 2 people that they knew who could have outthought an organization like Cadmus, and Naruto had created one of his pseudo-humans based off one of them. Foresight wasn't really their thing. Drop them into a combat situation and they'd find a way to make it out alive while dealing terrible damage onto their opponents, yes, but Naruto and his creations were more reactionary than proactive. Going up against Cadmus is just going to suck balls, isn't it? Kakashi sighed, already dreading the game of chess they had inadvertently stumbled upon and were now forced to play. Let's not sink into depression just yet, Chloe cautioned. I mean, if nothing else we are on to Cadmus and, far as we know, they don't know shit about us. That's gotta count for something, right? Chloe is right. Shiho agreed. After all, thanks to Kennedy, we can keep abreast of whatever steps they're taking. Sure, we might be forced to play catch up on most of it, but we should be able to cut them off before they do too much damage. In the meantime, I'll keep an ear open for any clues regarding the Cadmus board. Kennedy added. If not for anything, talking to a screen of amorphous silhouettes has gotten really old. I'll feed the pertinent aspects of our investigations to the League through Canary and the team. Naruto stated, adding his contribution to the ongoing line of action. Calder's made contact with her and she's willing to meet for a discussion. She may be playing you for Batman, Chloe warned, to which he nodded. I already thought of that. I'll be sending in a clone to hold the meeting. If I so much as think she's lying, I'll pull away and stick to working with Calder and the gang. Well, that's good and all, but some of us don't play a major part of the Cadmus Justice League arc. Shikamaru pointed out, thus drawing the curtain on that conversation. Kakashi, you said that Jinx gave the Nirvana core to someone? The spiky-haired pseudo-human nodded. She did. I was present for the handoff which, by the way, allowed me to meet our mysterious handler. That drew everyone's attention as, ever since his induction into Jinx's little crew, he had been unable to meet the group's handler who communicated exclusively with Jinx and Gizmo, and even then, it was only ever via electronic methods. So who's our mystery man? Simone, with a P. The telepath? Shiho asked with a frown, recalling the boss's conversation with her regarding the team's and Kaguya's fateful encounter with the mind controller. I thought he was a Bielian acid. How the hell is he connected to this? Kakashi wasn't through, though. You think that's bad? Wait till you hear who showed up with him, Mercy Graves. For the first few seconds, it seemed as though the silver-haired pseudo-human had dropped a deuce, and it was not surprising. After all, the name, Mercy Graves, wasn't one they had dealt with very often. However, one of them soon made the connection, and the sheer amount of astonishment in Shikamaru's tone as he yelped out, Luther's personal assistant, brought their thought processes to a grinding halt. Okay, what the hell have we stumbled onto here? Michael asked, sounding completely serious for once. There's the Cadmus situation, the developing Durzad situation, the whole Vlothaven thing we haven't figured out yet, the Bielian connection through Simone, the League of Assassins thing with Cheshire, and now Lex fucking Luthor. What the actual hell are we going up against? We're stuck playing a solve the puzzle game. Shikamaru sighed as he rubbed his temples. Except we don't have all the pieces. We don't know the picture we're supposed to be working toward. We don't know the stakes. We don't have a fucking clue if there's a time limit, and we're only now realizing that we're even in a game in the first place. Now isn't this just perfect? This is the mystery we need to unravel. Naruto stated firmly, taking command of the room. Sure, it seems pretty dire, but like Shiho pointed out, we've got the element of surprise with us. The game masters don't know that we're onto them. Hell, they don't even know that we're participating in their little game, so we're going to use that to our advantage. We'll pit the League against them while we shake things up from the shadows to see what comes loose and follow it up. The team will be notified of pertinent information and, where necessary, we'll support them as is required. He stared at each of them, determination visible in his eyes. Anybody with me? Each and every one of them sported a grin that harked back to the glory days of the prankster king from hell, as statements like, you had to ask, all in, and, let's fuck shit up, rang clearly through the room. Good. Anything else? Well, we've got to figure out what to do about Paula and Pamela, Shiho said as they settled down, flipping through her notes for a specific entry. You gotta pick out a new base of ops now that Happy Harbor and Gotham are too hot for you to stick around much longer, and, if you choose to stay with the hero thing, Chloe, Michael and I have a few costume options for you to pick from. Oh, and we're tracking the movement of the Perdita shipment. That definitely drew Naruto's attention. How is it? Well, it's a match and have run most every possible test to determine if her body will accept it. Everything's come back green. So she'll get it, within the week. Shiho confirmed and Naruto released a breath of relief. As far as other issues are concerned, we've got nothing major. Alright then, let's kick things off with Paula. Now that she's got her legs back, she's been hinting at leaving Gotham to find a place to stay. Michael started. She'll also want to keep herself occupied, so she'll need a job as well. Any suggestions? About an hour later, only Naruto and Shiho were left in the house, with most of the others having departed to return to their assignments, while Shikamaru headed out to restock on groceries because different genetic templates are not. The house had been filled with 7 versions of Naruto, and that meant a lot of food was consumed fast. So, you'll look into properties around Bloodhaven then? Naruto asked as he prepared to leave as well. Only after Paula agrees to it. The bespectacled woman replied. Michael may have picked up a bit from her, but I don't think we should get fully invested until she gives the green light. I hope she's agreeable to it, then, if nothing else. It'll free Michael up to really focus on Pamela, he said before shrugging. Oh well, I'm pretty sure we'll figure something out regardless of whatever she decides. Anyway, I'll see you. Actually, there's something I need to talk to you about, boss. When she saw that she had his complete attention, she continued. You need to up your training. Naruto frowned in confusion. Explain. Your fights against Trigon, Darkseid and to a lesser extent Black Adam have all revealed a chink in our armor so to speak. They're all capable of dealing physically stronger blows than we are. I know that. It's a huge part of why I used the 6 binding pillars of light seal against Adam. I need something to take people like that out where ninjutsu and taijutsu will fail. Yes, but what happens when fuinjutsu fails? She asked, unknowingly hitting a point he had struggled with over the past few weeks. The binding pillars is extremely useful, but what happens when it doesn't work? What if we're faced with an enemy we can't bait into the sealing matrix? Fuinjutsu is dead useful boss, but we both know its biggest flaw. He did. For all that the sealing arts opened up virtually unlimited possibilities thanks to the very nature of seals being jiraiya put it, the key to hacking reality. Fuinjutsu had one critical flaw. Once a seal was written out, it could not be altered without cleaning the slate so to speak, leaving the sealing arts to be as rigid in their direct applications as they were fluid in their creation. The structural similarities between the gravity seal and the weight increase seal may have been great, but that only mattered at the point of their conception. Once scripted out, a gravity seal couldn't be used interchangeably with a weight increase seal, and Naruto knew that very intimately. He hadn't forgotten how he'd nearly killed himself testing that same rule after all. I'm guessing you have a suggestion better than train harder. Yeah, you need to broaden the scope of your training, boss. Seeing that he was interested, she continued. To this point, you've primarily worked with the same set of skills we had as at the time we got the powers of the sage and only sparingly used the powers Sasuke gave us. More to the point, though, you haven't really experimented with the powers of the biju you have running through you, in this case. Kokuo's steam release. He finished as the answer dawned on him. Han used it to increase his speed and strength to insane levels. Exactly. I've been running simulations and I'm pretty sure you can triple your striking strength if you use the steam release to enhance yourself, and that's just the beginning. She explained, unable to hide the excitement she was feeling. Thanks to the rinnegan and the sage's added mastery over chakra boost, we've got access to every chakra-based bloodline, so can you imagine if you were to combine the steam release boost with a precisely timed burst of explosion release at the point of contact? Or if you were to combine the two with Bachan's strength enhancement technique while you're in the 6-path sage mode? Much like the scientist he had based her personality off, Shiho's growing excitement was palpable, so much so that she didn't notice the way Naruto froze as she spoke. It probably won't be enough to make you the strongest out there, but this will definitely make you a top contender. Your striking strength would be catastrophic. He stated blankly, his mind instantly recalling the moments on the Nirvana platform when his mind was under the vicious assault of the curse. Power wasn't the problem, and Shiho's suggestion would certainly come in handy if he needed to slug it out with Trigon again, yet having that much power easily meant that he was a dangerous threat should he ever get possessed by a malicious entity. The pros and cons of what she was suggesting were evenly balanced, as it were. Boss, turning to her, he nearly winced at the way she seemed to draw back into herself, and he quickly placed a hand on her shoulder to assure her that he wasn't upset. Not at her, at least. Sorry for that, I was just thinking about what would happen if I could do all that and the Nirvana curse had taken control of me. The way her eyes widened in dawning horror told him that she understood. That being said, though, you were right. Having that kind of boost to my strength may just come in handy sometime in the future, so here's what we'll do. You'll prepare a dossier on everything you just suggested. Simulations, applications, the works. Send it over when it's ready and I'll familiarize myself with it. Meanwhile, I'll impose restrictions on its use on myself. He was already considering using the Sharingan to delve into his own mind and set up a series of mental blocks that would restrict even the knowledge of such applications of his abilities to only reveal itself if he was forced to utilize the full might of the 6-path sage mode is. Should anything push him that far, then added firepower would only be welcome. After that, I'll stash the dossier aside in case it is ever needed in the future. Got it, boss. It'll be with you in 2 days. Thank you. He smiled as he prepared to teleport away. Let me know when it's ready and I'll be by to pick it up. Sure thing, boss. And good luck on your date tonight. Shiho grinned mischievously as she saw the look of shock on his features an instant before he flashed away. Thank you, Cammy, for nervous princesses. Gotham, Mom, the least you could do is tell me how you got your legs back, Artemis yelled before clapping her hands over her eyes. Oh God. Why the hell is this so difficult for you to understand? Maybe it's because my daughter, who should be happy that I can walk again, is more concerned with grilling me like I'm a teenager who repeatedly comes in after curfew, Paula shot back in annoyance. How does that matter here? You're suddenly walking again. This is too good to be true, Mom. Artemis just couldn't seem to figure out why her mother couldn't see it from her perspective. In their experience, nothing came without strains. Whoever it was that had healed her mother likely didn't do it out of the generosity of their heart. Her mom was an accomplished thief in her heyday, and she knew that the older Nguyen still had enough contacts in the criminal underground that she could easily slip back into the huntress persona. Goddammit, Mom. If Dad was even remotely connected to this. You consider me that much of a fool then? Paula's tone was almost acidic. You think I would trade my soul away simply to be able to walk again? The sound of her palm striking the table was as a gunshot, leaving an uncomfortable silence in its wake. I thought you would be happy for me, Artemis. Paula stated as she stood up. I guess I was wrong. The little apartment was still, unnaturally silent as the blonde archer dropped her head into her hands, fighting to stave off the tears that threatened to fall until she simply couldn't stand the overbearing silence. The last thing Paula heard before the door slammed shut was her daughter's furiously whispered, "Damn it, Mom," leaving the woman to slump to the ground in defeat. While her mom wondered how things between them had devolved to where they could barely have dinner without a fight, Artemis had stomped her way through a Zeta tube and into the living area of Mount Justice, fuming all the way at her mother's inability to see things as she did. I mean, how hard can it be to see that not even walking's worth the cost of going back into? You realize that I'm here, right? The blonde archer bolted out of the sofa she had just collapsed into, her body subconsciously falling into a defensive stance as her eyes settled on the form of the speaker. Just like that, her body sagged as the tension drained out to be replaced by mortification. Oh, you have got to be shitting me. Hey, language, Wally chided, suddenly wishing he'd kept his mouth shut and allowed her to finish talking. Her typically snarky manner aside, his nice, good Samaritan gesture had just made him miss out on a touchdown. It's not my fault you didn't look around when you stomped in. Not your fault. Not your fault. What are you even doing here? It's a weekend. On some level, Artemis realized that she was overreacting to a situation that had nothing to do with the redhead seated the next couch over, calmly watching what seemed to be a game between the Detroit Dashers and the Central City Cavs, but the rest of her simply didn't care. He was around and he'd made himself a target. Far as she was concerned, that made him fair game. Well, I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't know you wanted the house to yourself. It was quite unfortunate for her that for all his genius in the fields of science, Wally could be incredibly obtuse about emotional matters. Besides, you're here too, so why shouldn't I be? With the mountain void of anyone else, Artemis knew that the chances of a neutral party showing up to help calm things down were next to zero. As such, she was forced to take a step back, suck in a huge gulp of air and try to calm things down herself. Wally, you basically never show up on the weekends because it's your chance to spend time with your parents and catch up with your friends and stuff, so why is today different? Geez, Artemis, you actually care. Who'd have thunk it? When Wally glanced up and saw the incredibly strained look on her face though, he quickly eased up on the jokes. Look, Artemis, my parents had to attend some meeting or the other and I really wasn't feeling up to having fun times with the gang. Not with Calder, McGann, Connor and heading into Bialia again. He added, his normally exuberant features darkening when he mentioned the Middle Eastern country. For the first time ever, Artemis found that she couldn't argue with him. Much like him, she had been on edge since the Dark Knight had revealed that he sent those three into Queen Bee's territory again, and not even the presence of Raven and Donna aboard the hovering bioship had granted her any respite. With those five on the mission, Donna having returned to the Mysteria for the weekend and Cyborg and Canary away on some urgent league meeting, their home away from home was empty, which was why she had sought to take refuge in its silent halls. Guess I wasn't the only one to think of that, she thought to herself before exhaling tiredly. Yeah, I know how you're feeling. Sorry for snapping at you and whatever. I'll be somewhere else. On pretty much any other day, Wally would have shrugged and let her go do whatever pleased her. However, as he stared at her retreating form, he found himself replaying the look on her face when she had stomped in. There was a lot of anger in there, yes, but beneath it was something he had only seen once before when Barry had nearly beaten up Iris under Gorilla Grodd's psychic influence. Self-loathing. The Artemis he knew was snarky, stubborn and proud as all get out. Self-loathing was not one of her many negatives. All of this was processed within the time it took for her to take a single step toward the door, yet it wasn't until she was nearly out of the room that he finally called out to her. Yeah, if he wasn't convinced that what he was doing was right, the sudden exhaustion that he could hear in her voice did enough to tell him otherwise. You mind taking a seat here? What do you want, Wally? Deciding that he couldn't continue talking to her skull, he sped over to stand in front of her. Look, I know we aren't exactly the best of friends. I think you're annoying and you think I'm a jerk. I get that. But whether I like it or not, you're one of the stronger women I know and… What? I'm not worthy of being the strongest. Not unless you can finally beat Canary in a fight. He quipped back and much to his surprise felt a happy thrill when she smiled. Artemis, strange as it may sound, I actually give a damn about you, so seeing you like this it's just wrong. Focusing on mustering as much sincerity into his words as he could, Wally stared into her eyes. Talk to me, Artemis. Tell me what's wrong. Even in the future, years down the line, whenever she looked back on this moment, Artemis would be unable to tell exactly why she chose to go back into the living room, take a seat and pour out her heart to him. With a few alterations to the truth as was necessary, of course. Maybe it was the sincerity in his tone. Or it could just have been that she was much more bothered by all the burdens she bore than she wanted to admit. Whatever the case, she did pour out her heart to him. And, to her everlasting shock, he showed that he cared. Gotham for what was probably the 20th time. Naruto found himself checking his appearance in the nearest reflective surface, the hazy reflection of the inactive TV serving his purpose this time to ensure that he hadn't suddenly been doused in chocolate sauce, grease, or any one of 1,000 possible things that could mess up his clothes. Dark gray jeans. Check. Black dress shirt with the collar button undone and the sleeves rolled up to just beneath the elbows? Check. Socks? Check. Plain black shoes? Check. Seen yet again that all was well and not a hair was out of place. He sighed and rubbed his palms together, anxiety clearly written all over his features as he paced the length of their living room. Goddammit Uzumaki. Man the fuck up. You faced down just about every version of Madara in existence and the Jubi. A date should not have you so worked up, he thought to himself, trying to psych himself up for the event that now loomed so terrifyingly before him. All you gotta do is take her out, eat dinner and talk about yourself with her. Just have a nice time. How hard can that be? It can be very hard, another part of himself argued back. Kaguya's a princess. She's probably used to the best things life has to offer, guys and dates inclusive. Don't you dare wuss out on me. You saying you're not the best guy on the planet? No, but, you're the best damn guy on this planet and you'll take her on a date that'll blow her mind. Easy for you to say, you're just a figment of my imagination. Oh please. Think of it this way. What would Naruto? His mind instantly focused on his surroundings, and then he went slack-jawed. Standing before him was Kaguya as he had never seen her before. Her clothes, like his, were pretty casual. A pale white, sleeveless ankle-length gown with a dark gray jacket thrown over it. Around her neck was a simple string of pearls with matching earrings. On her wrist was a silver watch he'd bought for her months ago and she had on a pair of stylish pumps. She had applied little makeup yet, in his eyes, she radiated a beauty he had never seen before. You look stunning, Tori consciously realized it, but he had no regrets about them. They were the truth after all. Though her cheeks slowly colored, Kaguya waved his compliment away. I doubt I look much different than usual. I mean it, though. Naruto reiterated as he stood up and walked to her. You're stunning and I'm dead certain I'll have to beat people off to keep you to myself tonight. Well, we should head out and test that theory, shouldn't we? She replied teasingly with a little, after you, gesture. Though I'm sure many young ladies today won't be able to keep their focus with you out. He barked out a laugh at her words as he grabbed the car keys off the table and escorted her to the garage, skipping ahead to ensure that he had the passenger door open for her by the time she got there. A few minutes later, they were on the road, Naruto maneuvering the Audi through the evening traffic. So, how'd the meeting go today? Toad Sage Publishing is officially live and Isaac's actually excited about the upcoming launch of Crystalline Heart. Kaguya replied, pulling out her phone and searching through her mail. Ah, here it is. The cover design came in just before I left. She moved the phone to the dash so he could see it. Oh wow, Sunil outdid himself on that, didn't he? The background was light blue with his pseudonym, Namikaze Minato, taking up the top half in large, stylized silver font. The lower half of the page featured the picture of a red pillow lying in a glass case and, lying on the pillow, a beautiful heart-shaped crystal. I'm so glad I left some of these decisions up to Isaac. I'm pretty sure I couldn't have found a better designer. Yeah well, Sunil isn't the only one who's been working. From what I saw, Karima's been pulling overnighters coordinating the digital media teams. They've overhauled the company website, changed the social media handles and have now begun advertising the book launch. Looks like I've got to prepare a thank you package for these guys. Kaguya smiled as she recalled watching the young woman holding a brainstorming session with her teams earlier that day. They deserve it. Then, she turned to him as he stopped at a red light. So, how'd your meeting go? I can't tell you. The white-haired woman cocked her head quizzically. You can't tell me? I can't, he replied with a mischievous grin. We can talk business after dinner. She blinked a few times. You cannot be serious. As a heart attack, he said as the lights changed and he moved on. You'll hear all about it tomorrow. If he had taken his eyes off the road to glance at her, he'd have met a frosty violet glare. If you're trying to impress me on this date, I can tell you that you've already taken a wrong step. Still not talking, he sang as they approached their destination, the sun having sunk behind the city's skyline. He knew when someone was calling his bluff and, judging by the fact that she couldn't completely suppress her odd gasp as she took in the scenic sight of the meandering Gotham River, he knew she hadn't meant a word of what she had just said. Well, here we are. Welcome to the Grey Gull, he said as he put the engine out, having found a space to park. This is beautiful, she admitted with a soft smile before turning to him. You've got good taste, Uzumaki. He did his best to retain his composure while his heart pulled off an impressive number of flips. Chloe pointed it out a while back for when we need to have semi-formal business meetings. It's already been prepped with a barrier seal that'll respond to either of us should we choose to activate them. Privacy and energy signature concealment were two functions of that barrier that he fully intended to activate as soon as they were seated. It wouldn't do to have their special day ruined by the Batman and his associates after all. So, my lady, shall we? Watchtower so far above the Earth as to be mistaken for a satellite hovered a uniquely designed orbital platform simply called the Watchtower. This space-dwelling structure had no affiliations with any governments, nor was it owned by a private organization. Not an official one, at least. Known simply as the Watchtower, this orbital platform was the Justice League's primary base of operations in the aftermath of the Apocalyptian invasion, serving as a meeting point for the Earth's most powerful heroes as well as an early detection system designed to notify said heroes of any approaching objects to the planet they defended. At the moment, the Watchtower was serving the first function. "We're all set up and ready to go, Superman," Cyborg stated as he verified the status of their secure connections around the world. Of the 47 heroes directly affiliated with the Justice League, 44 had made themselves available for this meeting, 12 on the Watchtower. The rest in their respective cities on Earth. Only Mera, Aquaman and John Constantine were absent. "Thank you all for taking the time to honor this meeting," Superman started, his words carried across the world in real time thanks to Cyborg's uniquely set up communications network. "I know that some of our cities are still reeling from the Injustice League's assault, so, to begin with, I would like to ask if anyone here requires any assistance with the reconstruction work." No one said a word, and Cyborg found that he wasn't particularly surprised. Though it wasn't particularly obvious, the League did in fact have a flaw. No member of the Justice League would willingly admit that they were in need of assistance if they could avoid it. He didn't know if it was born out of a sense of individual pride or simply the fact that the League hadn't been around long enough for everyone to simply trust each other implicitly, but that flaw was there all the same. Diana, having noted the silence as he did, spoke up. "We have primarily stuck to our own cities so far to honor our pact of non-interference *, but I feel this is an opportunity to show the world that we are united in our efforts to help." She paused and glanced around and, reading the atmosphere in the room to be positive, forged on. "While we have often showed the people of the world that we are united in protecting them, we should not project an image of being there for their protection alone. We are here to help, and rebuilding is a part of that." Batman, noting the slight hesitance on the faces of some of their Earthbound allies, stepped up to the metaphorical plate. "Most of central Gotham has been cleared, but the city needs help laying the foundations for the new buildings they plan on constructing." His words brought quite a number of raised eyebrows. It was a well-known fact that, whether he needed help or not, the Bat was adamant on protecting his city himself. However, his words build on what Wonder Woman had said. Protecting one's city was only one aspect of helping. Pride would only be a barrier to achieving that, and so, one after the other, more and more of the heroes present indicated their need for help, and, within moments, a plan of action was drawn up according to their needs. When that was concluded, Superman spoke up again. "With that taken care of, we'll move on to the main issue. Green Lantern, the floor is yours." Hal rose up from his spot between Shazam and Black Lightning while inclining his head respectfully towards Superman. "Before I begin, I'd like to once again thank each and every one of you for taking the time to be available for this meeting. I understand that we all have our responsibilities calling for our attention, so I'll try to make this as brief as I can. I will need to take an extended leave of absence from the League." Many of the heroes present sat up and focused. This was a first-time occurrence for the League, though it had been discussed during the founding. Whether due to grave injuries suffered in the field or something as wonderful as an impending birth, the Justice League Pact had left provision for its members to take leaves as was required, yet, much like with Batman asking for help, this was CE. "If you don't mind my asking, may we know why?" a curious Vixen asked, voicing the thoughts on just about everyone's minds. "The Guardians of the Universe, the head honcho types of the Green Lantern Corps," Hal quickly clarified before any questions came up, "have drafted me onto a team of lanterns that'll be investigating some disturbing occurrences in a different space sector." "Hold on. You're leaving this sector?" Shazam asked. No trace of the child he really was visible on his stern features. "I thought you said you were the only lantern assigned to this sector?" "No offense, but not all of us understand the whole sector thing." The question, one of the Earthbound heroes, interrupted, with a slight frown knotting his forehead. "Mind dumbing it down for us?" Hal nodded. The Green Lantern Corps began thanks to the Guardians of the Universe who, having seen the myriad dangers across the vast expanses of space, came together to form a body that would police the universe, providing help where necessary to keep the peace. The Guardians divided the universe into sectors and drafted a lantern to police each sector. After a while, they realized that certain sectors need more lanterns than others, and so they responded accordingly. "Our little slice of space has been pretty peaceful on an intergalactic scale, so they decided that just one lantern was sufficient." "So what's that got to do with you leaving, man?" Elongated Man asked. His question followed up by Vixen's. "Wouldn't that mean this sector will be left without a lantern?" "I'll start with your question, Elongated Man. In recent times, there has been an upsurge of, let's call it, unsavory actions going on in a formerly peaceful sector. The Guardians have decided to send in a group of lanterns to check it out and determine whether or not said sector will need additional lanterns to help keep the peace." Hal explained. "As it stands, I'm a member of that group, which means I'll be away from here for at our best guess at least a year." Now, to answer Vixen's question. There's a new lantern for this space sector. I just learned about it myself, but she's been in training. Shazam interrupted with an arched eyebrow. I thought you guys were a boys' brigade. Hal rolled his eyes at the thinly veiled Barb. The Guardians are forward thinkers and the rings don't work on gender requirements. If you've got what it takes, you're in. That's simple. I'm just glad to hear that we'll have another woman to join us. Supergirl pointed out with a tiny grin. No offense, but it's good to know that this place isn't just a boys' club. Everyone shared a chuckle at that before Hal continued. Anyway, Jessica's been training for the past month and she's getting ready to fully take up the mantle. She'll be wrapping up on Oa in about 3 weeks, so you can expect her to arrive in a month's time. The Green Lantern turned to Superman and nodded before taking his seat. That's good to know, Hal. Thank you for the heads up. Superman continued. Before we leave, though, there's something you all need to know. Analysis of the Injustice League's attacks against the criminal records of the members of said league points to the possibility that the Injustice League was merely a figurehead for a larger organization. A tangible sense of unease ran through the gathered league members, both those physically present and otherwise. Cyborg understood the feeling. It had chilled him to the core when Calder, Donna and had presented the idea to himself, Batman and Black Canary 3 days prior. The fact that their reasoning was sound and the facts checked out, at least for now, certainly drove the apprehension deeper. No offense, Superman, but are you sure about that? Captain Atom asked, understandably doubtful. We saw the devastation that the Injustice League wreaked on the world and their motive was blatantly made known. That motive is just one of the reasons the Injustice League makes no sense. Batman countered. Holding the world hostage for $1 trillion ransom might sound like a solid motive, but when you consider the members of that group, it doesn't add up. A slight gesture to Cyborg had a separate hollow screen appear, bearing the profile of each member of the Injustice League. Black Adam and Woden have never cared about money, and Cheetah is more invested in her vendetta against Wonder Woman than monetary gains. And while the Floronic Man and the Scarecrow might have been in it for the money, the Joker only cares about the chaos he can cause. And that's not taking into account the fact that the plants they used were enhanced with Cobra venom. Cyborg added. They don't have the resources required to have engineered those things or enough funds to have bought that much Cobra venom. Maybe they took a loan from the metaphorical bank of evil? The icon asked, partially amused at his own question. The metaphorical bank wouldn't ever invest in a plot that isn't certain to provide profits. Batman replied coldly. This plan ended in a total failure on the Injustice League's end, meaning whatever resources went into it went down the drain. Unless the plan was never to make off with the money, Cyborg reiterated. No one said a thing for a few moments as the possibility truly sank in. When Vixen spoke, her voice wavered just the slightest bit. I don't know, guys. The idea that a secret group exists that can afford to create a group as powerful as the Injustice League and fund such an insane plan just to draw attention away from themselves? That's downright terrifying. It is. Wonder Woman conceded. Like Cyborg, she fully understood what the young woman meant after all. That being said, we might have a slight advantage here. If we are right and the Injustice League was meant as a diversion, then the mere fact that we even suspect as much means we have the element of awareness on our side. Wonder Woman is right. Superman continued. We can keep an eye out for anything suspicious and work together as a unit, pulling our knowledge and resources to maintain a tight search for whoever's pulling the strings here. I take it that you have a list of suspects? The Huntress asked. A second later, each of them received a single mail over their communicators. I guess that answers it. We'll need to tread carefully, but I believe in us and what we stand for, Superman declared, his determination visible for all to see. We'll get to the bottom of this. Gotham the Grey Gull, I'm just saying, there's very little on this planet that's worse than Lee and Guy's bromance. Naruto laughed between bites of his steak. Not even Sai could stomach it, and he was stripped of his ability to feel emotions. I don't think they could be as bad as you're making them seem, Naruto. Kagaya replied, her tone brimming with amusement at the blonde's words. Certainly not as bad as Grey was. I mean, they keep their clothes on, don't they? They had been at the Gull for over half an hour by this point, enjoying drinks in the evening nighttime ambience as they simply talked about their lives. Their conversations had run the gamut, from talks about their parents to Kagaya telling him about her younger brother and Naruto regaling her with somewhat exaggerated tales of his exploits as Konoha's prankster king from hell. The discussion had turned to hobbies and eccentricities, and, by the time their dinners had been served, they were waist deep in a game of 20 questions. Whatever awkwardness or self-consciousness they might have felt about this date had vanished as they talked, simply taking each other as a friend and flowing on from there. It certainly helped that the little disillusionment matrix in the barrier seal saved them from getting gawked at by overly hormonal people who would certainly have put a damper on things. Look, I get it. Repeatedly watching your cousin perform a striptease and seeing his junk may have been somewhat mortifying, but watching Guy and Lee pull off the sunset of youth thing in Speedos. Naruto shuddered. Fateful mission that had him return to Wave Country. And having Anko making sausage jokes about it just made it worse. The image of the two hugging in super tight undergarments had Kagaya re-evaluating her stance. Let's table that for now. She ignored the smug grin on his face and continued. How about your most embarrassing moment? Pass. He shook his head with a rueful smile as he reached for his glass of wine. Sorry, but I'm not about to relive one of the most humiliatingly traumatic experiences of my life. Oh come on, you're being a wimp here. Yes. Yes I am. Naruto nodded sagely. Next question please. I will get an answer to that. She swore while shooting a light glare at him. Count on it. You'll try. He fired back teasingly. But like all others before, you'll end up losing. This is the way. We'll see about that. Their conversation stalled for a while after that, both simply enjoying the other's presence and the ambience of such a beautiful night on the banks of the Gotham River until Naruto spoke up. Want to take a walk along the waterfront? You're not trying to make me forget my vow, are you? She teased as she pushed away from the table, indicating her agreement, because a waterfront walk won't cut it. We'll see about that. He shot back as he subtly deactivated the privacy field around them. A few minutes later, they were out of the gull and on the waterfront, joining the few others who were enjoying the night. So, what are our plans going forward? Naruto shook his head slightly and turned to her. Sorry, I didn't quite catch that. You were saying? I was asking what our plans for the future are. She replied. I remember you telling me that you're not one to stand on the sidelines if you can help it, and I'm pretty certain this topic came up during the meeting earlier today, so I guess you could say that I'm curious. What was that thing about curiosity and cats again? He smiled teasingly. Besides, I already said no business talk tonight, didn't I? You only said not during dinner. Kagaya smirked, knowing that she had him there. And, since we're not eating now and that's the only topic I'm actually interested in discussing, I'm afraid you'll just have to spill. Unless you're trying to prove that you're not a gentleman? Being a gentleman has nothing to do with this. The blonde griped as he realized that his own words had come back to bite him in the ass. So you say, but we both know that's not very true, she rejoined smugly. Besides, you've already used up your conversation pass tonight. Unless, of course, you're willing to tell me precisely what was so traumatizing for you. Checkmate. The blonde shinobi thought ruefully as he cast an incredibly weak glare at his white-haired partner. Alright, you win this one. He studiously ignored her victorious fist pump. It's actually quite funny really. For all that I'd usually prefer to be in the thick of things, it turns out that right now, being the center stage performer is not a good idea. I'll share the meatier details at home, but for now, we've decided to move to the backstage, so to speak. Kagaya easily understood what he meant. So, just like with the Cadmus Injustice thing, we'll root whatever we find through the team and onto the league. Yep. We're hoping to keep any hints of our involvement in this down to the absolute minimum. That should help us stay under the radar of Cadmus bosses and give us enough space to really wreak havoc on their plans. Kagaya nodded her approval. Sounds good. I take it there'll be no more heroics after this? Honestly, I haven't decided yet. He shrugged. I mean, I'll always be ready to help wherever I can, but with this Cadmus investigation going on, I'm not sure putting on a mask will help. Well, I for one think you should maintain the Maelstrom identity. Kagaya stated. Cadmus knows the Maelstrom persona and will be expecting to see you try to hinder their plans. If you simply drop off the radar, they might get suspicious. Well, that's true. Naruto's words tapered off when he noticed a dully glowing disc hovering in the air above a high-rise building in the distance. Kagaya. I see it. She replied immediately, her Byakugan already active as she tried to understand what she was seeing. It's just a disc of energy. I can't see any disturbance. Wait, there's something coming through. What? It's a girl non-human by the energy I'm sensing from her. Kagaya reported, her tone low enough to ensure that only her partner would hear her. Something's coming through. Aliens by the look of them, and they're armed. A spatial portal? Fuck, Naruto swore beneath his breath before turning to her, a pleading look in his eyes. I know I said no hero and villains thing, but I already told you. Dinner's over. With her consent given, the two off-worlders vanished into the night just as the more observant humans around noticed the flashes of green light in the distance. 6 miles from the waterfront, Naruto and Kagaya reappeared atop a big belly burger in a swirl of wind. Eyes narrowed as they observed the scene before them, both geared up in their heroic outfits. Whoever the girl is, she's a pretty decent fighter, Naruto stated as he watched the orange-skinned alien girl battle her way past a trio of craggy-faced aliens, using precise control over the green bolts of energy from her hands to parry the glowing energy axes that were raised against her. She's up against 20 of those green-skinned things and she's keeping them on their toes. True, but she's getting tired. Kagaya noted, with her Byakugan active, she much more than he could. From the profuse sweating to the short gasps she took as she flew to the desperate look in the girl's eyes. It painted a clear picture. She's not going to last much longer. As though they were awaiting those very words, the girl's flowing hair was caught by one of her pursuers and she let out a tortured scream as she was violently yanked back only to get smashed across the face so hard with the butt of an axe that she plummeted into the road below. That's our cue, Naruto said, a clone appearing by his side a moment before he vanished in a burst of speed, Kagaya not too far behind him. The aliens, believing that their mission had been accomplished, had decided to take their time recovering their quarry. It was a mistake they would live to regret. As the largest of them reached down to grab hold of the girl's foot, it was suddenly blasted upward by an unseen force, the impact trailed by a resounding crack of bone striking flesh. The other alien creatures clearly weren't prepared for the abrupt assault on their leader if the stupefied expressions on their ugly faces were any indication, and Naruto was only too happy to capitalize on the moment, using the shunshin to reappear within the personal space of the two closest to the unconscious girl and repeating, sending them flying with twin blows to their jaws. Kagaya was directly behind him, moving in a blur to get the girl out of harm's way even as her partner took off after the others. To say that it was a fight was a misnomer, as that would have implied that either side had an equal chance at a victory. No, the reality was much simpler. Naruto destroyed them. While he pulled his punches to ensure that he didn't accidentally kill any of them, he was in Gotham. There was no need to act in a manner that could be read as being spiteful to the Dark Knight. He made sure that each strike would hurt the ugly bastards, and, judging by their garbled cries after every hit, he was succeeding. "We've got more of them coming in fast," Kagaya yelled at him as she joined the fray, having left a clone of herself to stand guard over the former hostage. She had reverted to speaking their native tongue, a heavily accented Japanese dialect, to anyone else in order to keep their conversations private. "We need to deal with that portal. Any ideas? Besides blowing shit up?" Naruto asked as he ducked beneath a swinging arm before coming in to grab the overextended arm and smashing his fist into the elbow joint, forcing a tortured scream out of the alien. "I don't have anything, sorry. Hyperspatial crossings are not my field of specialty." "No, pyrokinetics are." Kagaya replied with a wry smile as she sidled up to another alien and delivered 2 punches to its gut, grabbing its chest plate to drag it downward and then unloading a powerful uppercut into its jaw. However, blowing shit up, as you so eloquently put it, might very well be the solution. "You think so? Portals like these usually require a stable field of exotic energy to keep them open," she stated, drawing on some of her memories from her time as the avatar of the Jubi. "A strong enough injection of energy into the field will typically destabilize that field and lead to a cascading failure at the portal's boundaries. Which equals bye-bye portal." Naruto finished with a predatory grin as he kicked the closest alien away before shooting upward with a single flex of his muscles. "Well then. One powerful injection of exotic energy coming right up." Naruto. Wait, the Uzumaki didn't hear her. By the time he was done talking, he had whipped up a mini Bijudama in his hands, and by the time she called out, he was already flinging his arm upward. The baseball-sized purple orb of super-condensed chakra was all but invisible as it shot toward the portal, only to detonate in a crimson blast a scant few millimeters away from entering the portal. Naruto's victorious grin was abruptly cut off when, instead of simply eating itself as he had expected, the center of the portal suddenly shattered inward like glass and began exerting a powerful suction force on everything within its range, including his still airborne body. "What the? That's why I was calling you back, moron," Kagaya growled, staring down at his prone form, having just utilized a quick shunshin to get him out of harm's way. She was now kneeling over him with both hands on either side of his head. Attached via chakra to the rooftop, she had whisked them over to. Destabilizing a portal in such a manner generally results in the creation of a temporary vacuum. Naruto's eyes widened, not particularly due to her words but the fact that, because she was resting her butt smack dab on his groin, a fact she didn't quite seem to notice. "I'm sorry?" Kaguya's glare intensified as she stared down at him, absently noting that the violent suction from the portal had died out. A quick Byakugan verification confirmed that said portal had, in fact, closed up, though, to the blonde pinned by her glare it seemed far more terrifying. "You don't sound very sorry." "Probably because you're essentially grinding on him," her clone stated in a dry tone as it approached with the still unconscious girl in its arms. "Do try to be more aware of your surroundings regardless of your state of mind." Kagaya glared at her clone, annoyed by the cold, dispassionate look it sent her way and wondering why her clones always seemed to take on a more militaristic disposition. "What the hell are you babbling on about now?" Kagaya?" Naruto sounded more sheepish than she had ever heard him. "Do you mind, getting off?" She glanced at him, her mind finally calming down enough to process her clone's words before abruptly glancing downward, finally taking in their position. Her shocked and partly embarrassed shriek nearly punctured Naruto's eardrums as she swiftly leapt off him, taking a few chunks of roof attached to her knees and hands with her as she moved. "I am so sorry, I swear I didn't realize our positioning, I just reacted to get you out of the way." "Oh please." Her clone rolled its eyes as it carefully rested the alien girl on the ground. "He clearly isn't upset, so there's really no need to apologize," its piece said. The clone dispelled itself, leaving the white-haired princess with a crystal-clear image of exactly how they had looked. To say that she blushed would have been the understatement of the year. "Kagaya? Are you okay?" Naruto asked. switching back to English since he couldn't sense any potential eavesdroppers around. Sorry about. Lene's Fomara, Kagaya and Naruto exchanged startled glances before staring at the alien girl who was now struggling to her feet, her body tensed as she glared at them. Renis Farish Gordanians? I'm guessing that you're confused and bothered by the unfamiliarity of your surrounding. Kagaya stated calmly, slowly raising her hands to show that she was unarmed at least, in a manner of speaking. Naruto, she was pleased to note, had followed her lead and was presenting himself as harmlessly as he could. Please trust that, unless given reason, we won't hurt you. The girl frowned, clearly unable to understand their words, yet she made no move to attack. Renis Farish Gordanians. Kagaya shook her head slowly, I do not understand. The girl let out a low growl that the two chakra users noted was more out of frustration than anger. Carolo Shibasi. The question, this time, was punctuated by a cautious step forward. Clearly, the girl wanted to know if she could approach them. Kagaya smiled and nodded. The girl moved forward, taking slow steps and keeping her eyes on both of them until she was standing face to face with the white-haired princess, Basarilo. And then, to their absolute shock, the alien girl kissed Kagaya. Well, I did not see that coming, Naruto finally said, feeling his cheeks burn as the two women separated from each other. Neither did I, Kagaya admitted, her mind still somewhat addled by what had turned out to be a steamy kiss. It was probably for that same reason that she angled a sly smile at Naruto before saying, "You'd better be a damn genius kisser, Uzumaki, because the standard just shot up." I apologize if my behavior was too forward. Both Naruto and Kagaya blinked synchronously before turning to the girl who was now speaking perfect Japanese. It was not my wish to cause any dispute between you. Us. Nah, don't worry. No harm done, right? Naruto waved dismissively. Now, no offense, but how are you speaking our language all of a sudden? You were speaking what sounded like gibberish a few seconds ago. The girl smiled hesitantly. I am Coriander of Tamarin. My people are gifted with the ability to learn other species' native language through direct mucosal contact. Naruto whistled and even Kagaya seemed impressed. That's one hell of a way to gain a linguistics expertise. And the tongue action too. Kaguya's fading blush returned with a vengeance. Zip it, idiot. The girl Coriander seemed baffled by their byplay before focusing on a crucial detail. Where are the Gordanians? The ugly shits that tried to kidnap you. When she nodded, Naruto simply shrugged. We convinced them to return nicely. Kagaya glared at him and smacked him on the shoulder. This moron blew a hole in their portal, forcibly sending them packing. So, they're not here anymore. Coriander hugged herself as if cold, but both chakra wielders recognized it as something deeper. She was trying not to seem overly agitated. They aren't, Kagaya confirmed with a gentle smile. I don't expect them to return for a while. We should head out too, Naruto added, noting the presence of the emergency service personnel at work on the streets below. This place is gonna get busy soon. He returned his gaze to the girl. Would you like to come with us? Watchtower. While Naruto stared in shock at the lip-locked duo before him, the members of the Justice League that had remained aboard the Watchtower were dealing with their own alien encounter. She has wings, Barry. Literal wings, Shazam stated to the Scarlet Speedster, his tone sounding more like his childish self than his godlike form. She is a human-ish woman with wings. Sure. They're brown rather than the traditional white you'd expect to see, but me calling her an angel was just me being literal. Not with that dreamy tone, it wasn't. The Flash replied, watching Cyborg run Dooman, who had literally smacked into the Watchtower. It had happened less than 20 minutes prior. Their meeting over, the League members aboard the Watchtower had spent a few minutes bidding Green Lantern adieu before watching him take off in a streak of emerald light. They had scarcely turned away from the hangar when the Watchtower shuddered harshly, its proximity alarms blaring. Cyborg, who had a direct connection to the systems, had swiftly identified the cause. A spaceship had blown up less than 200 meters away, spewing debris into the space around their orbital platform. Having decided to clear up the debris after closing their secondary meeting, the League found themselves stunned when they walked into their conference hall and found, splayed across the large viewport looking out of the hall, an angel. Superman had made first contact, so to speak, having brought the unconscious woman into one of their medical observation rooms, allowing Cyborg to check up on the woman while the rest of them watched from the outside. Barry, let the squirt be, will you? Dinah sighed as she moved over to join the two. Much like the Scarlet Speedster, she was one of the few that had chosen to look past the deception Billy Batson had played on them in favor of seeing the hero the young man had proven himself to be. That didn't mean she was going to simply ignore the revelation that the world's mightiest mortal was a high school kid, though. Let him have his crush. It's an important part of a child's development, you know? Come on, Dinah. Not you too. Seriously, though, do you guys think she's an alien like Jean? Barry asked, his tone more subdued. Because, save the wings, she looks like your average tanned, red-headed girl down on Earth. It's possible. Dinah nodded slowly, though she wasn't quite sure what to believe yet. I didn't really get up close with her when Clark brought her in, but from the little I felt and what I've seen now that Vic's gotten her out of that armor, I'd say that she's a fighter. Yeah, she's got the muscle definition for it. Billy added, his tone more mature as the wisdom of Solomon spoke through him. Though he could be overthinking this. She could simply be a fitness trainer of some sort. Maybe one that's in high demand? Barry rolled his eyes at the very Billy comment. Speculations aside, you guys realize that we'll need to bear the cost of housing her, right? True, unless she can somehow pull those wings into herself, there's no way she can stay in the more populated areas on Earth. Dinah mused. I'm pretty sure Ollie's got a farmhouse he can spare somewhere around. While that's a good suggestion, we will have to monitor her, Bruce Wayne stated, injecting himself into the conversation. And nearly giving poor Billy a heart attack. I was thinking she could stay in the Hall of Justice. Barry rubbed his chin and thought. Not bad. You'll get to keep an eye on her electronically speaking, and she'll be close enough for us to check out her well-being from time to time. And if she doesn't like it there, Dinah asked, an eyebrow arched at the two men. Because the two of you are just going on like she'll accept your offer right off the bat. She's in a new world, likely one that she doesn't know. Bruce stated simply. She's not likely to turn down this offer. I guess I can't argue with that. The blonde heroine conceded. Let's just hope she wakes up soon. Naruto having access to every chakra-based bloodline seems pretty easy to explain. Rinnegan grants mastery over the 5 chakra natures yin, yang natures. The Sage Boost grants Naruto an innate understanding of the mechanics of chakra. Put together, Naruto can replicate any purely chakra-based bloodline, i.e. nature releases, unique chakra forms etc. He does not have physiological bloodlines like the Byakugan or the body-stretching thing from Kabuto's Chunin exam teammate, though. The events of this chapter occur while a modified version of episode 21, Image, takes place. In this case, they are sent by the Bad to check the resurgence of powerful energy readings that are somewhat similar to Apocalyptian readings. The events of the episode are modified to fit into this new perspective, but it ends with Queen Bee maintaining her blackmail material over McGann and Garfield getting his shot of the green cells. While the League will still end up with its 100-member list, I felt having something a bit smaller in their starting years is pretty reasonable. The Pact of Non-Interference is my headcanon reason for Soups not just popping over in Gotham or Flash regularly clocking in National City hours. The League has an agreement that, unless specifically requested or deemed crucial by the majority, no member of the League will act in another city. 14,000 words, this chapter, essentially the season finale of what we've had so far, covers quite a number of points. On the plus side, I think I've done a decent job of wrapping up most everything that needed to be wrapped up while leaving enough out there for you to want to see what happens next. For those who requested it way back when, Starfire has arrived, and stolen Kaguya's first kiss XD. Also, Shayera Hole is here too, and Jessica Cruz is on her way. To recap, canon episodes 1 through to 11 are all fitted into these 22 chapters plus episodes 14, Revelation, 19, Misplaced, and, referenced in this chapter, episode 21, Image. That's slightly over half the canon season 1 episodes spaced out, and thrown about to fit my timeline. It has been a great journey so far, and I hope to have you all along for the rest of this ride. P.S. I've got a Pat Rian page. Portrait on the Ethereal Award. Please remember to remove the spaces. Post A, End Scene, California. Courtney, look at me. The young blonde shyly looked up at the motherly image of her boss. What's happening up there? I'm sorry Granny, it's just, every time I get up there, I just remember that I'm here in front of all these cameras and I don't want to mess up, but I just, midway through, she broke down and sobbed, fearing the worst from the woman before her. Granny sighed and brought the girl into a warm embrace. A quick glance at the studio manager had the cast and crew of Good World's latest project dispersing after being issued a 15-minute break. Gradually, all the background noise faded, leaving just the two of them in the middle of a large set. Courtney's shoulders still heaved, but she had gone silent and was now being directed to the bar on the set. Take a seat, my dear, Granny said kindly, helping the girl onto a bar stool before doing the same. Do you remember when you auditioned? Courtney sniffled and nodded. Of course she did. If she had been ecstatic when she had received the mail that she would get to audition at one of Good World's revered casting calls, then words would forever remain inadequate to quantify her joy at actually auditioning. The day of her audition was forever branded into her memory. Do you know what I saw that day, when I saw you on that stage? The blonde shook her head. I saw errors. The poor girl's heart shattered. Unfortunately, the elderly woman wasn't done yet. Your dialogue was choppy, your body language was off, and you were obviously stiff in your movements. Forget a shattered heart. Courtney wanted nothing more than to simply die right there. However, I overrode Jacinta's thoughts and I hired you. Since then, I've done my best to be available during every scene you've been in. Do you know why? Rather than wait for an answer that the distraught girl would likely never give, the elderly woman forged on. Because you, Courtney Whitmore, possess something the other girls didn't have, something the other girls didn't have nearly as much as you do. Potential. The downcast blonde slowly looked up at the gray-haired woman, confusion visible on her features. "Granny, what do you mean?" Granny smiled. "My dear Courtney, your mistakes on that day might have been terribly appalling bhe potential to become America's next heartthrob. Yes, you made mistakes. Ask any jeweler and they'll tell you that sometimes, the roughest rocks can hide the finest gems. It's just a question of putting in a little extra work. The question now is this. Are you willing to put in the extra work to become a radiant jewel?" Just before she answered, the studio manager came in with a phone. A little frown of worry etched onto her forehead. "Madam Good, it's Mr. Saad." The aged woman sighed before turning to Courtney. "The best way to answer that question, dear girl, is to show me that you're putting in the work. Do you understand?" "I do, Granny." The blonde gratefully hugged the elderly woman, her tears dried up and filled with a renewed sense of determination. "Thank you." "That's all right. Now run along. I have to take this." As soon as the girl was out of sight, Granny leveled an utterly terrifying glare at the young woman standing before her. The look, filled with derision and disdain, was so at odds with the motherly aura she had given off scant seconds ago that, had any of her aspiring actors seen her, they would have sworn that they'd seen someone else. Gretchen Good, Granny Goodness as she was sometimes referred to by the media, was a gentle soul who had built up a media empire on a foundation of care, compassion and hard work. She had not a single evil bone in her body, they would gladly swear. The studio manager, Orly, was one of a select few that knew the truth. "What does that wretched scientist want now?" Gretchen growled lowly as she snatched the phone out of her trainee's hand, annoyed by the mere fact that Desaad had even thought of calling her. "What do you want you?" "Be silent." Granny Goodness went deathly still, her body subconsciously straightening up as though the speaker was before her and not on a separate plane of existence. "My lord," Orly's eyes grew wide, stricken to her core as she realized precisely whom her commander spoke to. That was not the self-styled god of torture. That was the god of apocalypse himself. "I see you still remember whom you speak to, Goodness. I had feared your time away from me had sundered your loyalty." "Never, my lord." It took less than a second for the aged woman to break a portion of her consciousness away from her body and send it hurtling through the cosmos to appear before her god in the glory of his throne room. The astral projection prostrated herself before the dread lord of apocalypse, basking in the might of his presence. "I am yours and yours alone to command." "So you say," the new god sat back and watched the woman before him, searching for a trace of deceit. As always, he found none. Unlike Desaad, whose very being was suffused with treachery, Goodness had always ever remained loyal to him. There was a reason she had been chosen to plant the seeds of his eventual subjugation of the earth after all. "Report." She straightened up and clasped her hands behind herself immediately before doing as he had commanded. Every little victory, every minor failure, the progression of the overarching goal toward completion, all of it was laid bare before him. Interesting, so young Vandal begins to make his plays. Darkseid's expression could have been mistaken for amusement were such foolish emotions banished from Apocalypse. Still, the new god couldn't help but think over that development. Vandal Savage was a cunning being who preferred to outthink his foes rather than simply throw brute force at them. He was also one of the only beings on Earth that knew that Apocalypse's most recent invasion was not the first such occurrence. "Keep an eye on him, Goodness." Darkseid ordered. "He is a dangerous foe." "As you command, my lord." Goodness nodded firmly, already wondering how best to carry out that order. While one of her furies was already in place thanks to Savage's daughter's sexual predilections, the aged woman decided that it would be better to have more than one eye on the immortal. It was not every day that the Dread Lord deemed another a dangerous foe, after all. Her thoughts were broken, however, when she noted her lord rising from his throne. "Come, Goodness, your expertise is needed." The aged warrior walked in the wake of her lord, thoughts filled with plans and contingencies regarding Vandal Savage until she noted exactly where she was being led. A slightly sour look crossed her features, though it cleared out seconds later. If there was one place on Apocalypse she despised, it was here, the laboratories. It had nothing to do with the tortured cries that cloaked the area like a fog or the sense of despondence that clung to every corner that upset her. No, it was the one who held sway over these areas that set her blood ablaze. "Welcome to my quarters, my lord. Ah, I see that we have a guest as well." The obsequious voice of the god of torture grated on Goodness' ears. "Granny Goodness, what a pleasant surprise." "Desaad. You look well." She sneered at him, irritated by the sycophant's fawning words. Darkseid ignored their byplay and addressed his chief scientist. "How far have you proceeded with your task?" "My lord, the creature daily proves itself to be the greatest weapon ever forged upon our world." Goodness bristled at the scientist's words, recognizing them for the veiled insult that they were. She had created the greatest warriors of their lord. Her furies were often enough to bring down worlds for Darkseid without any support from the rest of Apocalypse's vast war machine. The idea that a mere scientist, least of all a spineless coward such as Desaad, could produce something superior to her efforts. It was galling. Academicians tend to call any straggling creature that throws a fist a warrior, she stated coolly, not letting a bit of her ire shine through. Only one tested in war may deem another to be such. Which is where you come in, goodness. Darkseid stated. Desaad might sing praises of his creation, but you have not only been tested in war, you have trained some of my finest warriors. You, not Desaad, will determine the worth of this creature. It shall be as you have commanded, my lord. Smug did not begin to describe how she was feeling as a boom tube swallowed them up. The next moment, the three new gods were hovering over a barren wasteland that goodness recognized as Varusha. It was a savage world with some truly powerful beasts that had evolved to survive the extremely harsh world. Though they trained there often, few of her furies ever left this world without injury. Yet, to her shock, a creature even now ravaged through the lands, leaving nothing but broken carcasses in its wake. When she returned to her physical form, her eyes were filled with black rage. Orally, the studio manager recognized the tone. The woman she stood before was no longer Gretchen Good, Granny Goodness. Lord Darkseid's elite general and commander of the female Furies was in the seat. Commander. Summon your sisters. Starting now, your training will be tripled. The dark-haired Fury was too well trained to even think of questioning her commander. Understood. The moment she was alone, Goodness unleashed a snarl of hatred. Loath as she was to admit it, Desaad's creation was exactly as it had been touted. The greatest weapon Apocalypse had ever created. Born of Kryptonian blood and apocalyptian techno-sorcery, that creature was sure to bring about the doom of the Justice League. Nothing could have been more insulting, 1 month ago. Mount Justice, look, I'm just saying that you should try listening more, Wally advised, a rarely seen serious expression on his face. You don't realize it, Artemis, but you're usually so opinionated that you just try to talk over everyone else. And if the bulldozer method doesn't work, then you switch to retreat mode. Normally, the blonde archer would have snapped at the speedster for his comments. However, after close to 2 hours of really getting to know each other, Artemis realized that he was trying to help her. As such, though she would have preferred to ignore him, she chose to nod. A nod's not going to cut it, Artemis. He waggled his finger, to her irritation. Do you promise to try to be more of a listener? You're an asshole, you know that, she stated with an annoyed glare, one that he matched with an infuriating smirk until she gave in with a sigh. Fine, I'll try to be more of a listener. It's a promise. Just before he could try to crow victoriously, though, her frown turned into a vicious grin. However, to balance the scales out, I'll have to be an even bigger pain in your ass than before. Wait. What? Her grin just grew wider. Oh yes. I think there's a scientific law that backs me up here, in fact. Let me see, she paused, as if trying to remember something. Then, just as he was about to regain his wits and fire off a comeback, she snapped her fingers right under his nose. Aha. The law of consequence. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. How the heck does that? You want to make me a good listener? That's an action, Buster, and there's gotta be an equal and opposite reaction. So congratulations, you're my new chew toy. That makes no sense, the redhead shouted, his face reddening in indignation. That's science, Wallman. She smirked as she pushed herself onto her feet, and this is me heading home. The sound of him sputtering in shocked outrage was music to her ears. By the time she turned onto her block in Gotham, though, thoughts of the time she had just spent with a certain speedster had all but vanished, replaced by a harsh critiquing of all her interactions with her mom since what she had come to refer to as the miracle. When lifted to the light of her discussion with Wally, she saw just how unfair she had been on her mother. Mom was right. I'm treating her like she's my age and I'm her. She slapped a palm to her face and groaned, ah hell. No wonder she was so upset. She moved her hands to the sides of her head and massaged her temples. Worse, I'm letting myself react to mom because of the shit dad's pulled in the paw. What the? She yelped as she found herself yanked into an alley a few meters away from her home. The instant she felt her feet touch the ground, she swiftly pushed herself away from where she felt her assailant would be, her body swiftly tensing up for a fight. When her eyes fell on said assailant, though, she tensed for a completely different reason. What do you want? Ah, and here I wanted a little chat with my baby sister. Her assailant, garbed in a form-fitting green kimono with a slightly tattered hem, was an assassin known to the general world as Cheshire. To the emerald-eyed archer, though, the dark-eyed girl opposite her was simply Jade. Her older sister. Cut the shit, Jade. If you just wanted to talk you could have snuck into the room as you usually do. Artemis scowled angrily. Yanking me into an alley? That's more a Cheshire, stooge of Ra's al Ghul thing. And usually you'd be right, sister dear. The lithe, raven-haired young woman smirked as she pulled off her mask to reveal a face that was an almost perfect copy of their mother's. However, a usual night involves mom sleeping in her bed with her wheelchair beside her bed. A usual night does not involve her waking up and simply walking over to the bathroom to take a leak and then walking right back to bed. Are you catching my drift? Not unless it's a snowdrift. Artemis shot back testily as she fought to conceal a shiver and mentally cursed Gotham's ever-changing climate. Now what the hell do you want? Well, someone's upset. Jade flashed a lopsided grin at her sister. Which of your PJ Masks friends was it this time, I wonder? Suddenly, the dark-haired girl's features hardened and Artemis absently noted the way Jade's features seemed more like their father's whenever she was pissed off. It's your turn to cut the shit, sis. You're a lot of things but I don't consider you an idiot. Geez, throwing insults now, the blonde sneered though she knew that her sister was inching closer than ever to finding an answer to her question. You don't tell me shit all and then you jump and say. So you don't know. The response was simple yet sharp and it shut the archer up. You're with her, playing caretaker and all that and you don't know how she's suddenly able to walk again? With the truth out, Artemis sagged and her voice contained more than a hint of frustration in it when next she spoke. I can't always be with her school, social life. You mean the PJ Masks? Jade scoffed before pinching the bridge of her nose. Of course. Just, please tell me he had nothing to do with this. It wasn't, thank God. The venom in the assassin's tone could have killed an elephant yet Artemis just brushed it aside with a small sigh. I sincerely doubt if Mom would ever go that far. Whatever the case is, we need to figure out how Paul is suddenly back up on her feet again and if the mystery miracle worker is trying anything untoward, we'll just have to scare them off. Now it was Artemis' turn to scoff. I'm sorry, because I remember a certain someone saying that, it's every girl for themselves. Oh, that only applies where dad's concerned, sister dear. Jade grinned as she stepped away from her sister and into the darker areas of the alley, her mask covering her face as she went. Now remember to keep an eye on Mom, will you? A second later, the assassin was gone, leaving the blonde archer alone in the alley. Now, Seattle, Juliet? It's Naruto. Naruto asked as he stepped out of his car and walked into the Virginia Mason Hospital. I just got into the hospital. What next? Wait in the lobby, I'll come get you. The line went dead immediately after that, prompting the blonde to roll his eyes as he found an empty seat and searched for another number. He was in no way offended by her action as he had come to expect such behavior from her. Juliet Butler was a consummate professional, one of the best in her line of work in fact, but somewhere along the line she had gained a somewhat abrasive nature. It probably made working with her difficult for most people but to Naruto who had worked with the likes of Sai, Karui and Ebisu, it was little more than a fly on the wall. It also helped that he knew that the hard-ass routine was a mask. Having found the number he was looking for, the blonde punched the call button and listened to the dial tone. Naruto, hey Kaguya. Just wanted to let you know that I've arrived at the hospital. Oh, well, that was certainly quicker than I anticipated. Are you with Perdita now? No, I'm at the lobby now, waiting for Miss Butler to show me in. Ah, protocol. Exactly. He sat back and smiled. So, how goes the moving? Swimming. Corey's been a busy bee, supervising the painting, watching the workmen couple the cabinets, sorting everything out. The ex-princess laughed. I swear, I'm getting tired just watching her go. Man, sounds like you two are having a blast. I wish I was there. Well, with Perdita going into surgery and a few hours you missing out on a few hours of fun chaos to keep an eye on her seems more than fair to me. Kaguya replied teasingly. Don't worry, you'll have lots of time to explore the many mysteries of Jump City when you get back. I guess I will. He laughed. So, I take it that Corey's settling in okay? Believe me, she's having a blast here. Saving me all the trouble of actually doing anything. Kaguya said Befis. Really, though, she's a lot more relaxed now than I've ever seen her be. She still goes into defense mode when startled but she's recovering quicker and her interactions with the movers has been less stilted than it was in her first 2 weeks with us. That's good. He sighed, thinking of the skittish girl they had welcomed into their lives a month prior. It's good to see that she's getting over the scars those damn slavers inflicted. It is. I'm hoping to get her to talk to me about her life before the Gordanians got to her but I don't want to push too quickly. Yeah, that could easily have her clamming up again. He sighed. Just be sure to. Naruto. He jerked his head up and turned to the direction of the call to see a green-eyed blonde staring right at him. Without another word, she turned sharply and headed down the hallway behind her. Naruto was up in an instant, swiftly chasing after her. Kaguya? Juliet's here so I gotta go. I'll talk to you later, alright? Sure. Yeah. Bye. Yeah, bye. He winced at the utterly lame ending to their conversation as the line went dead. Though himself and Kaguya had grown much closer over the past month, there was still an air of uncertainty between them regarding precisely what they were to each other that stifled any real sense of romance. He knew she was interested, much as she knew that he was interested but neither of them were willing to go out on a limb and say it, creating a unique sort of tension whenever they were around each other. Seeking an excuse to not think over his mildly confusing relationship with the ex-princess, Naruto turned his attention to the stoic-looking blonde beside him before frowning. He had come to know Perdita's head of security/personal bodyguard quite well, thanks to his occasional visits and while he'd never claimed the ability to read her like a book, he could sense the heavy feeling of unease that roiled beneath her stoic visage. Juliet? What do you want? You're a lot more tense than usual, he asked, a concerned frown on his face as they walked into the elevator. Is the queen okay? Perdita's fine, she stated, punching in the button for the top floor. She said nothing more till the elevator doors slid shut. I'm glad you're here, Naruto. So something is wrong, he muttered as he instantly began to think up plans for getting Perdita out of the medical center. I'm afraid it's not so clear yet, she sighed as she leaned in a corner of the elevator. The Count is here. That brought his scheming to a grinding halt. What does he want? The blonde arched an eyebrow at him in surprise. You're not wondering why he isn't locked up after that injustice fiasco? Naruto shook his head. According to Perdita, he had an airtight alibi before, during and after the injustice debacle. That right there is enough to stall any investigations. Add that to the fact that there's a number of villains capable of adopting another person's identity and the case is all but out the window. Nail on the head, she nodded. What do you think? About his supposed involvement? When she nodded again, he continued. I'm certain he has connections to the Injustice League. Was he present for their little publicity stunt? No idea. Juliet sighed, having expected the answer. Well, he's here now and he's entrenched himself. Nothing short of a direct order from Perdita will shake him. It's a good plan, Naruto admitted as he mulled it over. His alibi is solid since he's here, meaning if he wants her dead then he's playing it subtle rather than over. I agree, she added. If nothing else, we're certain that he's not plotting a missile strike or something along those lines. Then she frowned again. Of course, that just makes things no difficult. An attempt on the heart before it gets here. An attempt on sabotaging the surgery or a post-op attempt. Naruto counted off. I kept an eye on the heart in transit so the chances he got to it are slim. Not even we were able to, I've got connections, he stated, glossing over that little tidbit. The post-op might be difficult depending on how things go, so he wouldn't want to risk that. His best bet would be to tamper with the surgery. The elevator dinged as they arrived at the top floor of the hospital and both swiftly climbed up. They both understood the point he was driving at anyway. The best way to tamper with the surgery would be to tamper with one of the surgeons. Either the Count had bribed one of the doctors on call or more likely he was blackmailing them. Well, if nothing else, I'm sure Perdita will be glad to see you, Juliet said as they walked into the hallway. You'll be the first author she's ever met. Oh please. He rolled his eyes even as he expanded his sensory range to encompass the hospital and the block it sat on. You're forgetting that she talks to me. Do the words, Vlatavan Art Society, ring a bell? Okay, so you'll be the first non-Vlatavan author, she replied, undeterred. You're becoming quite the sensation, you know? It took a moment for him to hold back the blush that threatened to color his face. For all his fears regarding the publication of his first novel, the last thing he had expected was for Crystal and Heart to be a runaway hit. To say that he was still adjusting was an understatement. He had been shying away from even showing up at Toad Sage's office. Well, here we are, Juliet said, drawing him out of his thoughts. After you. With a nod, the shinobi walked into the hospital room, instantly cataloging the locations of every object and person in the room. 2 guards. 3 paces from the door and another in the farthest corner before setting his gaze on the reason for his visit. Sitting up in the hospital bed in her scrubs, the young queen of Vlatava struck a regal figure as she perused through the Vlatavan reports over the past week. Good morning, your majesty, he greeted with a bow at the foot of her bed. He had positioned himself to ensure that, while he wouldn't be stepping on any toes by not showing the proper respect demanded by one of her station, his face was angled up enough for her to identify him whenever she looked up. The young queen, who was quite engrossed in her work, glanced up, ready to exchange the perfunctory greeting with yet another noble who came to wish her good health, only to gasp in shock when she noted the bowing blonde. Naruto. So excited was she to see him that she almost leapt out of her bed to hug him, only beating down that urge when felt the slight tug of the IV on her arm. You came. Of course I did, he said with a soft smile as he moved over to sit beside her. You thought I'd let you go in for the surgery without showing up? Reaching out, he took one of her hands in his and noted how thin her fingers were. Once again, he swore to protect the girl in whatever way he could. So, how are you feeling? I am itching to return home, she replied instantly, her seemingly unending enthusiasm unfettered by the frailty of her body. I miss my homeland, and while my uncle has done an excellent job in my stead, I feel isolated from my people. Geez, you're quite the responsible one, aren't you? But of course. Her smile vanished like mist and her radiant features became more somber. I am not a ceremonial puppet whose sole purpose is to be a figurehead. I am the queen of Vlatava. I am responsible for the safety, well-being and growth of my people and our land. She maintained the somber look for a few more seconds before her smile returned and she leaned forward to stage whisper. I'm just tired going to bed with the cloying smell of disinfectant every night. Filing away the mild spike of annoyance he sensed from the door, the shinobi sniffed deeply before shaking his head. I don't smell anything. The nurses only spray it at night so that my uncle never has to smell it, she replied, her eyes glinting with mischief. I think they do it to impress him. I'll see if I can't impress it upon them to stop, he said before they broke apart in positions. In the corner of his eye, He noted the tiny smile playing at the lips of the guard in the corner. So, I noticed a certain someone chose to spend the last few hours before her surgery reading through reports, Of course. My current state is no excuse to be completely sidelined from my own duties. She said with a shrug, not realizing how much she amazed him with her single-minded strength. He wasn't the only one impressed by her display either, if the twin spikes of pride he felt from the guards were any indication. My uncle has always been a great leader and I respect his decisions, but certain actions cannot be put into motion without my approval, and it wouldn't do to not verify what I am asked to approve. You really are impressive, you know that? He smiled gently as she carefully returned the reports she had been perusing into their folder. So, where's your uncle anyway? I've heard so much about him and I'd like to finally meet him. I'm not very certain, Perdita answered. He told me that he wanted to check on something and then he left. The Lord Regent decided to run final checks on the medical staff and equipment that will be used later today. One of the guards supplied helpfully. He was particular about meeting the others. Others? Naruto asked, feigning only a passing interest in the topic. What do you mean? The guard beside the door took over. Of the 5 doctors in charge of Her Majesty's operation, only 2 of them are resident at this hospital. The other 3 were flown in 2 nights ago on the Count's orders. I see. He nodded his thanks to the guard before returning his gaze to Perdita. Your uncle must be working overtime running the country while ensuring you receive only the best of treatments. I wish I could meet him even more. I'm sure you will, she said. I just wish this day would be over soon. You really are anxious to get back to work, Naruto grinned as he patted her hand. Well, He paused as he heard his phone chime from his pocket. After taking a moment to slip it out and glance at the screen, he turned to the queen. I'm sorry, my queen, but it's an important call. May I? Of course. Permission granted, the shinobi gently let go of her hand before swiftly walking out of the room. On the other side of the door, Juliet cut the call as soon as the door shut behind him. Which of them do you think it is? Has to be one of the locals, he replied instantly, all traces of humor gone from his face. If anything goes wrong after the surgery and fingers are pointed toward him, the first place anyone would look would be the doctors the Count brought in. For that very reason, he won't do a thing to them. Everything will be on the up and up with them. Exactly. He nodded. The resident doctors are a subtler option. We'll check all 5, of course, but my money's on the residents. So we have 2 hours to find the guilty party and convince them to not sabotage Perdita. And also convince them to testify against the Count. Naruto added as he dialed a number from his memory. Get me their names. I'll get us a detective. Nodding once, Juliet took off down the hall, searching for a hospital attendant that could point her in the direction of the information she needed. Meanwhile, Naruto strolled toward an alcove in the hall and stared out the window to the bustling city, casually leaning a hand on the wall beside him. A seemingly random series of squiggles shot out from the spot his hand touched, the whole thing hidden by the bulk of his body. Confident that his conversation wouldn't be overheard, the blonde focused on his call. Calder? You there, man? Forgive me, Naruto. Things have been a bit tense here all day. A concerned frown knotted his brows. What's wrong? The Batman has not been particularly subtle about his suspicions regarding possible communication between yourself and the team. Even over the phone, the Atlantean sounded weary and Naruto wondered if his decision wasn't the wrong one. As though he had listened in on the blonde's thoughts, Calder continued. The team is fully in support of you in this, however, and the Black Canary has been invaluable to getting him to back off. I guess I owe Canary-sensei, don't I? He chuckled, though there was a clear tone of relief in his words. And how I'd taken all this. You haven't been apprehended by the Dark Knight yet, have you? The question triggered another burst of laughter from the shinobi, one that Calder readily joined in on. Really, Naruto, have some faith in us. I do, Calder. I'm sorry if I made it seem otherwise. It's just, I know it can't be easy for him, for any of you, really to lie to his mentor like this. It hasn't been. Calder admitted. However, you haven't given us reason to doubt you, Naruto, and we stand by our own. Thank you, Calder. After a moment, he continued. I'm sorry, but this isn't a social call. I suspected as much, my friend. What do you need? Is the base clear? It is. Only McGann, myself and Raven are present. Good. I'll need you at the hub. There are a number of files I'll need you to access. I'll also need you to get in contact with. I'll need his brain on this case. I'm on my way to the hub now. Calder stated. What's going on, Naruto? Mind if I tell you when joins us? That way we won't have to repeat things. Understood. He'll be with us in a minute. Thanks, man. Naruto set the phone on the windowsill and, after a swift but thorough glance around to ensure that he was in the clear, he created a single shadow clone that vanished a split second after its appearance. That done, he picked the phone up and waited for Calder's confirmation. Exactly 56 seconds later, Calder spoke up again. I'm at the hub now. Good for you, Calder. I, on the other hand, am stuck in the toilet. Groaned, having been patched through by the Atlantean. Yo, Fishcake. I love you like a brother and all, but you have the absolute worst timing. Tempting as it is to hit back at you for the fish cake thing, I'm afraid a little girl's life depends on how quickly we can find her would-be killer. That sobered the young boy up quick. You guys remember my little side mission involving a member of Lataban royalty? You mean when you stopped the attempted assassination on Queen Perdita of Vla? Wait, you're with her right now? I am. Her bodyguard, and I have reason to believe that there will be another attempt on her life sometime today. Possibly within the next 12 hours. That's a very specific timeline, my friend. What makes you certain that it'll be today? Calder asked. The Queen's heart surgery begins in 2 hours. Yeah, that's a pretty solid timeline. Admitted. What kind of attack are you expecting? Electronic? Physical? Sabotage via medical personnel. Naruto answered before explaining how himself and Juliet had come to that conclusion. Do you have the names of the doctors on duty? Calder asked. Not yet. Juliet's on it, though. I'm expecting her to show up any minute. Do you have any countermeasures against electronic warfare? What? You know, EMPs and such. I mean, if the Count really wants to play things close to the vest, he could just have someone set off an EMP somewhere close. Maybe stage a robbery or something, so it seems like that's the cause, while the actual goal would be to shut the hospital down midway through the surgery. Naruto froze, his mind racing through a plethora of scenarios before coming to a shuddering halt. Son of a dammit. He could almost hear and Calder wince at his language even as the boy wonder quietly asked, I'm guessing you didn't think of that? It hadn't, and that revelation terrified him. When next he spoke, Naruto's tone was flinty. Is there any way you can locate possible EMPs or anything of their sort? I might be able to pull something off whatever satellites are around you now, but that's dependent on if they're running or not. You might have to cover some ground. Don't worry about the Grow had handled, he stated, creating a clone that vanished faster than the eye could see. We're at the Virginia Mason Medical Center, Seattle. Did you get that? I did. I'll have satellite cover in 3 minutes. Good. Calder, I'll get the personnel files to you as soon as I have them. Run background checks on them and see if there's anything pointing toward possible bribery, blackmail or coercion. I'll do what I can. While Naruto worked to identify the Count's most likely method of attack, his clone moved through the medical center, a ghost on a mission. The point had brought up was one of the many blind spots he had unknowingly gained upon arrival on this world. For all that he had appeared knowledgeable to the team, he had information gaps that seemed basic to natives. In this case, the electronic approach hadn't occurred to him for a second for a reason so simple it was almost laughable. Electronic warfare didn't exist on his world. Sure, they had their fair share of electronics and electrical appliances, but very few of those were used in positions of power, rendering such forms of sabotage moot. Techniques that could emulate the effects of EMPs existed, of course, but the concept of electronic warfare was limited to lightning-style attacks. In a world that leaned almost entirely on electronics, a world where all the equipment needed to perform a surgery had an electronic component, Perdita could have died. Its job was simple. Secure the center in whatever manner it deemed necessary. Naruto had remained vague on setting any limits on what the clone could not do, and the clone took to the task with the single-minded determination that its creator was well known for. Seals, traps, additional clones and disguises for as long as it would not endanger the lives of the other innocent souls in the medical center, the clone did it. It had intended on commandeering the medical center security room, a necessity in a complex as large as this to maintain an overview of things, when it had stumbled upon this present scene. A hard-eyed, lithe, raven-haired youth whose features bore much more than a passing resemblance to Paula Croc was seated at the control console, garbed in plain, repairman coveralls. Strewn across the floor were the barely breathing bodies of the medical center security personnel. The clone, hidden from sight by Jiraiya's infamous light-bending technique, watched with narrowed eyes as the girl fiddled with the dials and slowly but surely ensured that not a single camera had the medical center's generators in sight. Task complete, she tapped on her communicator. Hook, Spider, the cameras are down. Plant the EMP and get out of there. She paused, listening to something from her accomplices. Then, the procedure begins precisely 1 hour 27 minutes, so set it to go off 20 minutes in. Another pause as she pulled out a few sticks of what seemed like incense as well as a lighter from the pouch slung onto her waist. I'll be through in 10 minutes, tops. Cheshire out. What she did next seemed to have come straight out of a ritual handbook. First, she dragged each of the security guards' bodies to lay shoulder to shoulder. Then, she set 3 uniform incense sticks at angles to each other, essential trapping the men in a triangular barrier. After setting that up, she took the last stick of incense, a long, dark brown stick, a contrast to the shorter, thicker white sticks that she had set up earlier, and passed it beneath the nostril of each guard. Whatever compound the dark stick was made of, it seemed like a preferable option to smelling salts, because where the salts would trigger almost violent reactions in those it was used upon, the incense roused the guards slowly, returning them to consciousness in an almost docile manner. Too docile. The clone corrected, a frown etched onto its features. The guards, though they had clearly been roused from unconsciousness, seemed to be stuck in a daze. Not one of them questioned why they were on the ground or even attempted to speak to the young girl who swiftly lit the 3 white incense sticks. Within seconds, a cloyingly sweet smell had filled the room. It had taken just one sniff for the clone to identify the scent. Vitura. A powerful hallucinogen that left its victims highly susceptible to suggestions, so it exists on this world as well. As soon as I snap my fingers, you will all return to your seats. You will not remember my presence in this room, nor will you recall ever seeing me. Her voice was soft but her tone, firm. In exactly 5 minutes, you will return to full consciousness and go about your regular activities. You will not question the passage of time because you have been here all the while and have not left. She paused for a few moments, then snapped her fingers. In almost perfect sync, the guard rose and walked to their seats, each one taking up a specific seat out of the 4 in the room. Confident that her commands had taken root, Cheshire tapped on her communicator again. Is it done? A pause. Good. I'll be out in 3 minutes. Her fingers flew across the console, undoing the changes she had made to the generator room's cameras before reaching beneath the console and unplugging a USB drive from the console. The clone wasn't certain of the purpose for the drive, but it suspected that it had something to do with altering the medical center's digital records. Her task complete, she walked out of the room, confident that the rest of her instructions would take hold in her absence, and swiftly moved toward the rendezvous point her team had picked out. She had no clue that she was being followed. 6 hours later, Werner Vertigo had always been an unusually calm person. Even as a child, he was well known among his peers in the royal houses for his unflappability. It didn't matter the challenge physically demanding, mentally tasking or emotionally draining, he maintained an aloof air to it all. As such, he found himself surprised by the strength of the trepidation in his heart. It was understandable, of course, from a purely objective standpoint at least. Here he sat, on the verge of victory after nearly 3 decades of scheming and plotting. Political maneuvers, socially engineered relationships, financial plays and hidden meetings with powers in high, low and hidden places. All of it led to this moment and the future beyond it. It was almost enough to put a smile on his face. He had an image to uphold, though, and had long decided that the celebratory party could begin when he was with those he trusted intimately. The young woman pacing tirelessly before him was not among those privileged few. For fear of sounding like a broken record, I would again suggest that you settle down, he murmured, not taking his eyes off the novel he was reading. Tiring yourself out does nothing to help my young niece. The blonde paused mid-step, flicking her eyes toward the chairs before sighing. My deepest apologies, my Lord Regent. I am simply worried about the Queen. It has been well past an hour since the nurses spoke to us of the complications they encountered in Her Majesty's procedures. And you are worried, an emotion I can assure you that I am intimately familiar with. He interrupted, though not harshly. His mask had to remain intact after all. However, no amount of worries will guarantee my niece's safety. Let us have faith in these doctors. They are the best at what they do after all. She seemed to struggle for a few moments, torn between 2 thoughts before sighing again and moving to take a seat. Scarce had she sat down, however, than the doctors came trooping out, their faces devoid of any emotions. The Count forcefully suppressed the growing excitement in his heart, a task that became much more difficult when his little helper locked gazes with him and nodded imperceptibly. My Lord Regent, Lady Butler, I'm afraid the Queen did not make it. The look of astonishment morphing into one of heartfelt pain on the butler woman's face was one of expressions he had seen in a long while, and the Count enjoyed it oh so much. However, he knew precisely how delicate things were at this stage and how much appearances mattered. As such, he snapped his book shut and rose in a single, fluid motion that drew every eye in the waiting room. Dr. Armand, you assured me that my niece was in good hands not even an hour ago and that she would certainly make it through this procedure. His words were softly spoken yet icy, as though a snake had been given a voice. So explain to me, Doctor, why the devil you stand before me now telling me that my niece is dead? The sudden shout, combined with the fury visible in his eyes, had the doctors scrambling for an explanation. He let them squabble and squawk for a few moments before barreling right through them, making a beeline for the theater. Let's put on a show, shall we? He smirked internally as he barged through the doors before drawing up to a halt, as though he had just run into a wall. Drawing in a shaky breath, he walked up to the covered body on the operating table and slowly drew the cloth back. It was Perdita. As he fell by her side, weeping quietly, his heart soared in triumph. With Perdita dead, he could ascend to the throne and take what he had deemed his own. No longer would he have to serve a member of the royal family. With her death, he had become the royal family, and his associates at Cadmus had assured him a lengthy spell on the throne. All through the final preparations for Perdita to be returned to Vltava, his heart skipped and danced within him, his joy growing to such a degree that by the time he returned to his car to be transported to the Vltavan embassy, he couldn't hold back his laughter. It worked out well, my lord? His driver asked tentatively, prompting another round of laughter from the Count. It worked out perfectly. The Count grinned as he poured out a glass of wine for himself. The good doctor fulfilled her end of the bargain. In fact, I am expecting to hear from her at any moment now. Right on cue, the chirp of a cell phone rang through the car. After letting it go on for a few more moments, the Count pulled out a small, disposable phone from the inner lining of his jacket and accepted the call. Dr. Wah. What a pleasant surprise. I did what you asked. Where are my children? My, doctor. And here I was about to compliment you on a job well done. You didn't even need the cover I promised to complete your task. That had annoyed him. He had hired the League of Shadows to knock out the hospital's electricity supply to provide the doctor with a measure of cover. To say that the shadows had failed would have been an understatement. The lights had never so much as flickered. I don't care about that. Just return my children to me, she shouted, her desperation bleeding through as her control over her emotions splintered. That wouldn't do, though. She was speaking to a king now and kings demanded respect. I would watch my tone if I were you. After all, you just committed regicide. On your orders, you kidnapped my children and held them hostage. You forced me to kill Queen Perdita to get them back. I did. He admitted with nary a care in the world. However, you have no proof, my dear doctor, of my involvement in my dear niece's death. It's my word against yours and, unfortunately for you, I have a nation on my side. Not anymore, uncle. The Count froze. No, it couldn't be. He had seen her lying on the operating table, body strewn with blood, and had seen her face resting in deathly stillness. She was dead. When my advisors warned me of your treacherous ways, I often denounced them and stood up for you. When Juliet told me to be wary of you, I told her there was nothing to fear, that you would always stand by me and would never willingly harm me. I can see that I owe them all my sincerest apologies. 30 years of plots and schemes, of engineered actions and planned propaganda, all gone in a flash. Consider your diplomatic immunity revoked and your freedom taken away. The Vltavan security forces descended on his SUV and within moment, had him trundled up and headed toward a life behind bars. Through it all, Werner Vertigo wondered how it had all gone so terribly wrong. Well, color me impressed. Juliet commented as he joined her on the sidewalk outside the medical center. Your plan worked. We were lucky. Naruto replied as they watched the Vltavan royal security team drive off. If we hadn't found Dr. Hua's kids in time, we wouldn't have been able to take away the Count's leverage, and she almost certainly wouldn't have done a thing to help us. His clone's discovery and subsequent capture of the Shadow's assassins had been more crucial than it had expected, as it turned out that while Cheshire and Hook worked on planting the EMP, their third teammate, Black Spider, kidnapped the doctor's children. Honestly, I'm just glad that Perdita was strong enough to keep him on the line for your teams to get set up. Yeah, she exhaled tiredly. The nature of their plan meant that Juliet had been unable to sit in with the Queen following the grueling, 5-hour operation, and though she had vouched for Naruto to remain with Perdita while she handled the mobilization of the security team, the blonde still felt bothered that she hadn't remained by her charge's side. How is she? The doctors put her under as soon as you confirmed that the Count was in your custody. That aside, she's going to be okay. Like Dr. Armand said earlier, the surgery was completed without complications, so she's expected to make a full recovery. He decided to keep mum on the fact that he had sped along the recovery process during his time beside the young queen with an infusion of healing chakra. While the doctors were expecting the recovery process to take up to 8 months, his actions ensured that she'd be back to full health in half that time. They sent some of the scans and other medical details to the embassy so that your medical staff know what to do. Good. That's good. She paused, worrying away at her lower lip before asking, how's she taking all this? She took note of the way his shoulders tensed and immediately thought the worst. Damn it, I should have been there with her. Hey, calm down, okay? Naruto stated gently, placing a hand on her shoulder to keep her from storming off. Perdita's strong, probably more than we can imagine. Yes, her facing the reality of her uncle's character has been jarring. Right after her surgery, Juliet, I know it seems bad, but I trust Perdita. She will pull through this. His voice was quiet but confident, leaving her to wonder exactly where all that confidence came from. In the end, she decided that she didn't need to know. What mattered was that he believed in Perdita. I guess I need a shot of whatever confidence booster you're having, she said with a small smile. God knows I'll need it in the next few months. Naruto waved dismissively, a relaxed grin on his face. You're Juliet Butler. That's all the confidence you'll need. National City. No, I'm serious, Alex. You need to take time off. Stop being the poster girl for studious researchers and get out more. Kara said as she searched through her fridge. I know I left it here somewhere. No, I'm looking for the ice cream Wen brought this afternoon. Yeah, I'm actually waiting for the pizza guy right now. Wait. I think he's here. She pulled away from the refrigerator but hadn't cleared the upper half before pivoting upward, resulting in her smacking her head on the unopened freezer. With nary a wince, she yelled, coming toward the door, and swiftly dashed around her apartment, searching for her purse, her phone still firmly held to her ear. Alex, I love you, but take it from me, you cannot hide yourself away for your research. You need to get out and have fun. I mean, your Facebook wall's about as boring as Wen's was till last year. Spotting her purse beneath a pile of cushions on her sofa, she snatched a spot and walked to the door. Okay, so maybe you aren't that bad. Kara amended as she unlocked the door. You're still a role model for most nerds, and Connor, pleasantly surprised at the presence of the young man at her doorway. The blonde temporarily forgot about her sister and threw her arms around him. I wasn't expecting you. The Kryptonian clone blushed at the affection showed toward him and tentatively returned the hug. Hi Kara. I'm sorry for not calling ahead and… Don't worry about that, she casually waved his apology away as she drew back from the hug, her face radiating happiness. You're welcome anytime. Come on in. As she moved to grant him access to her abode, she remembered her call and quickly brought her phone up to her again, gesturing for him to make himself comfortable. Sorry Alex, I have a guest. What? No, he is not my boyfriend. Both Kryptonians shuddered in sync at the thought. He's my brother on the big S side. Well, I would have told you if you weren't in some weird no-phone research zone. She rolled her eyes and stuck her tongue out as if her sister was physically present. Look, Alex, I'll tell you about Connor later, okay? Like I could ever replace you. Love you. I'm not bothering. You'll my… Connor asked stiffly, clearly uneasy in her apartment. I could leave if you're busy or… Nah. Kara shook her head as she tossed her phone onto the couch beside him. You're not leaving until you've told me how the past month has been. Is Maelstrom back? Did you figure out what those energy signatures Sphere found in Bialia meant? Though still hesitant, Connor felt more at ease with her clear interest in his life, and so he sat back a bit and nodded. Yeah, it's been a lot different without Maelstrom and Shard on the team, and Batman hasn't exactly been very subtle about his suspicions that we're still in contact with him, so there's that too. He paused as she moved to sit beside him, then smiled just a bit at the way she visibly perked up at the sound of the doorbell. Were you, expecting someone?
I'm pretty sure that's the pizza guy, she said over her shoulder as she bounded over to the door, purse in hand. Hope you like pepperoni and anchovies.
If it tastes good, I'm up for it. The words were out of his mouth before he realized it, but he found himself feeling happy at the slip. He was no black canary, but he supposed it meant that his subconscious was relaxing in her presence or something along those lines. He was still figuring that out when she returned, wreathed in the belly-warming aroma of perfectly done pizza and arms laden with 4 large boxes of the good stuff. My sister, Alex. She was the one I was talking to when you came in. She introduced me to this little pizzeria on the corner of Di Stefano and Johnson that makes these masterpieces, she said as she set them down on her center table. Let me know what you think. I'll get us drinks. She padded off to the kitchen and, stomach growling thanks to the exerting activities he had engaged in earlier that evening, he found himself opening the first box and reaching in. By the time Kara returned, he was on his 5th slice, cheeks bulging as he chomped away in gastronomic delight, prompting a laugh from the blonde, who quickly set down her cargo, a bottle of wine for herself and 3 sodas for him, and joined him. That good, huh? This is amazing, he said after polishing off the 5th slice and reaching out for a 6th. I mean, Megan's food tastes awesome, but this is definitely a close second. Oh, so who's this Megan I'm just hearing about? Kara asked, her tone teasing. Unfortunately, her teasing flew right over Connor's head, the young man's mind still too focused on food for him to notice. She's my teammate, the Martian Manhunter's niece. Oh, and her name's Megan, not Megan. Though we do call her Megan when we're, not at the base. The older Kryptonian would not be deterred, though, and, with her teasing smile still plastered on her face, she asked him to describe Megan. What followed was a 5-minute dissertation on the amazingness of Megan. By the time the 6th minute rolled by, Kara was only barely holding back her laughter. So, you like her? The flat look he shot at her just screamed, well duh. Which prompted a round of giggles from her before she reiterated, I mean, do you like her? Does the word, like, have a meaning I don't know about? He asked confusedly as he popped the tab off the soda can. Kara simply giggled again as she slung an arm over his shoulder and leaned on him. To be young and in love. That was when the actual meaning of her words hit him, leaving him stunned for the first few seconds before he blushed up a storm, furiously blustering and sputtering denials, Kara's laughter making him blush even harder until her gave up and pouted sulkily. Go on and laugh, why don't you? Oh, relax Connor. If I don't tease my little brother, then I'm not doing a good job of being the big sister, Kara said as she reached out for her wine glass. I mean, that's what family's for, right? To advise, help and tease. Yeah, I guess that's what we're here for, he said hesitantly, to which she nodded encouragingly. Yet again, Connor silently wondered if he wasn't actually a clone of the blonde beside him, with his other half being a weird Superman lookalike, because she was a lot more accepting of him than his supposed progenitor. So, what's new? You haven't told me about those new energy readings you found in Bialia last month. Thankful for the avenue she had just opened, Connor said. That's actually a part of why I'm here. Well, that and the thing with family. He paused as she shifted to sit facing him before continuing. I think I found another Kryptonian. Kara's eyes grew almost comically wide upon hearing that, and she quickly downed her wine before setting the glass on the table and focusing entirely on him. Details please. Seeing the overly excited look in her eyes, Connor quickly launched into the tale. Beginning with a recap of the team's mission to Bielia and subsequent meeting with the Logan family, Sphere's discovery of a faint echoes of energy signatures that closely matched its own, and moving on to his meeting with the Forever People, the altercation with Bruno Mannheim's Intergon crew, and ending with his and Sphere's battle with the corrupted Infinity Man. So this guy, Valor, he interrupted, supplying her with the new Kryptonian's alter ego, to which she nodded and corrected herself. So Valor jumps into the fight with you and helps Sphere get into position to flush this Dassault guy's brainwashing thingy? Yeah. After the Forever People left, we got talking. He told me his name and I told him mine. He got it a bit mixed up though. Between the Connor and this, he tapped on the symbol on his chest. He sorta thought I was related to you. The, in Superman, bit was left unspoken. He called me Con-El. Con-El, Kara hummed in thought before jumping to her feet, yanking him along. Take a knee, good sir. Kara? What? Connor, trust me. Okay. There was an odd mix of mirth, determination and seriousness in her eyes that seemed to resonate with him, and, before he realized it, he had taken a knee in a very knightly manner. I, Kara Danvers, of the House of L, on this night stand before you. Connor Danvers. On my honor as Kara Zor-El, last daughter of the House of L, I name you Con-El, son of El, and brother of mine. Rise, Con-El. May you bear the name well and bring honor to our house. For the first moments, nothing happened and Kara wondered if she had said something to offend him. Though she had gone a little too in-depth in her faux knighting rite, she truly meant every word she had said and felt he deserved to be a member of the family. It was as she bent over to speak to him that she realized what was really happening. He was crying. While Kara couldn't possibly understand it, her somewhat teasing words carried far greater weight to the your words were proof that he was truly accepted. While the team would always be his first friends, to them, he was just Connor, no last name. During her little speech, however, Kara had called him Connor Danvers, giving him a family name for the first time in his life, and then, moments later, she had christened him with a Kryptonian name that equally welcomed him into her family. The name may not have been her idea, but Kara's wide-open acceptance and non-judgmental attitude had moved her to a position that very few would ever attain in his heart. With tears still rolling down his cheeks, he reached forward and pulled her into a hug, repeatedly whispering his gratitude. Chapter 24. Gotham, you realize I know precisely where you're standing, right? Pamela stated without taking her eye off the microscope she was peering into. You're not nearly as stealthy as you think. She was bluffing, of course. At least regarding her second statement. To say that he was like a shadow would be a terrible underestimation of his ability to move about undetected. As it stood, the only reason she could locate him so easily was tied to how she could tell that her warden, Michael, was some sort of creation of his. He was touched by the green. For his part, Naruto took her words in stride as he seemingly melted out of the shadows in the corner of her laboratory/house. Taking in the neatly arranged setup with appraising eyes. Michael's out? He mumbled something about cards before slipping out. The redhead shrugged, making the collar of the oversized brown tee she had on slide down her shoulder. It is quite surprising you don't know where your dog wandered off to. Careless much? Pretty sure he'd feel hurt if he heard you talk about him like that. The blonde rejoined as he strolled past a wall of blooming flowers. Would it kill you to be nice to him? I'm a prisoner and he's my warden. Niceness is a rare commodity in such a setup. She shifted slightly and looked into the reflective surface of the stainless steel tray hanging on the wall before her, trying to catch a glimpse of his expression to gauge his response to her thinly veiled barb. To her chagrin, the young man's features bore a faint, nostalgic smile on them, his eyes clouded for just a moment by a watery film. Her mind raced to try to understand that expression as the knowledge born from her years of people watching came to the forefront of her thoughts. That look, it's like something I said, triggered a memory, possibly a bittersweet one. She swiftly played back her own words to see if she could find any clues, but she was left with more questions than ever. Prisoner, warden and niceness were the only keywords from what I said, but that makes no sense. He couldn't possibly have been a captive, could he? The moment passed before she could come to a conclusion as he locked eyes with her through the reflection and said, well, you may not care about him, but I can tell that he's come to see you as less his charge and more as a mildly annoying friend. That's gotta count for something, right? Oh, how sweet, her response took the phrase, sickeningly sweet, to the max. From the falsetto voice to the fluttering of widely innocent eyes, she even clutched her hands together above her heart. Geez, sarcastic much? Though he rolled his eyes every bit as dramatically as she did, he got the point and dropped the topic, leaving them in an almost comfortable silence. While she returned to whatever it was that she was working on, Naruto continued his leisurely stroll around the botanical wonder she had created and called home. The air was perhaps a touch more humid than it should have been, but that little discomfort was easily overlooked by the beauty and serenity of the environment. Flowers of various kinds were in full bloom. Their natural fragrances filled his nose with myriad scents, even as his mind tingled from being in such close proximity to her plants. Yet, for all the beauty of the place, he was aware of the hidden ugliness. More than 3/4 of the flora were used in creating one poison or another.
The sweet-smelling fragrances of the flowers could easily move from pleasing to sleep-inducing to paralyzing based on the concentration of some plants' fragrances in the air, and then there were the thick vines that supported the entire thing. With a simple thought, the baggy jeans and t-shirt wearing redhead could turn her home into a death trap. Though most if not all her attacks would fail should she try, it still remained a sobering thought.
Good thing Michael tightened her seal after the whole injustice debacle. Shaking his head, the blonde turned to her. New batch for Bane? Yes. She paused to jot down her observations before turning to him as he leaned against her table, a clear look of interest on his features. His last 2 raids have led him to a location holding a cache of cobra venom. Sounds like he's been busy. He crossed his arms across his chest and peered at her inquisitively. I'm surprised, though, about your little partnership with Bane.
What's so surprising about that? She asked, her eyebrow arched questioningly.
Bane is a known element. A dangerously intelligent, cunning, perhaps even psychotic element, but a known element nonetheless that keeps his venom to himself and utilizes its enhancements to his own ends. Cobra, however, is an unknown who wants to sell his significantly better product to whoever shows interest.
You're not an idiot, you realize the implications of Cobra's actions. Everyone with sufficient funds, from gangs like the Triads and the Mafia to government organizations, will have a drug that gives their grunts superhuman abilities.
The entire reason it took the Justice League so long to get rid of those twisted plant abominations was because the Injustice League's grunts held them off while hopped up on this drug. Getting it off the market as quickly as possible should be everyone's priority.
Naruto hummed noncommittally as he walked away, clearly not believing her but not challenging her either. Instead, he switched topics. I wanted to ask you something, if you don't mind. Would it change anything if I said that mine did?
Probably not. He admitted before continuing. The green, I know it exists. After talking to Yggdrasil I'd be an idiot not to accept its existence, but knowing about something isn't the same as understanding it. It was something of a bother, honestly. On his world, his training with the toads of Myobokuzen had attuned him to more than just the power of nature. Thanks to Fukasaku, Shima and even the great toad sage himself, he had come to understand the personality of his world. The world was sentient and he had come to know it intimately. Things weren't quite the same on this world, though. While it was sentient, its personality felt divided. He hadn't understood why until his conversation with the World Tree all those months ago, and even then, he knew that he had barely scratched the surface. If he had learned anything from his experience at the Virginia Mason Center, it was that he couldn't afford to have gaps in his knowledge base. I was wondering if you could help me with that. No, Pamela didn't even think over his words before replying. She had watched him fight off Black Adam through the eyes of the plants in the swamp and had seen him kill the Joker before her warden had reinforced whatever it was that minimized her connection to the green. He was more powerful than quite a number of heroes, and where the heroes maintained a uniform moral code, he seemed to operate on a completely separate one. Helping him, someone who already had some manner of accessing the power of the green, understand its secrets could very well be akin to opening a Pandora's box of problems in the future. That was a risk she was not willing to take. Not yet, at least. Washington, D.C., Cat, you know me. Normally I'm not one to praise these costumed crusaders on their destructive paths through our cities. Which is exactly what has me wondering, Gordon. You've never exactly hidden your ahem distaste for heroes, so what makes this valor so impressive? Well, for one thing, he doesn't stand around waving at his fawning fanbase every time he gets a cat out of a tree like a certain Big Blue is wont to. Hey now, no throwing shades in my studio, Gordon. My apologies, Cat, but I'm certain you caught my drift, yes? When the dark-skinned reporter went silent, Gordon continued. Look, Cat, I understand that my decision to stand by Valor seems incongruous considering my track record, but when you watch him in action, you understand why he's on track to becoming a household name. Valor does not wreck half his city in the Nov past month. He has fought off the Atomic Skull and helped stop the activities of Bruno Mannheim's Intergon with next to no property damage. The last time Superman raided Intergon, Metropolis lost thousands of dollars of taxpayers' money as a result. And don't get me started on his last clash with the Skull. Well, I can't argue with facts, exactly, Cat, facts. The simple fact here is that Valor is showing himself to be a lot less of a disruption in the lives of so many compared to the vast majority of the heroes we have running about today, and I'm clearly not the only one that's noticed. Social media metrics have noted that Valor has been one of the most talked about topics in recent weeks. Hell, Cat, the only topic that's trended more than his takedown of Intergang this past week has been the whole Vlathaven scandal. People are taking notice, Cat, because they're getting tired of watching their hard-earned money get squandered on avoidable. The television went silent, turned off by a visibly disgusted blonde. How is it that people parade themselves as being the higher life forms when most are nothing but sheep? Now, what's got you feeling so philosophical this evening? Her companion asked from the kitchen of their shared apartment. You're not one to give a shit about humanity in general. You're right. I don't really care. She shrugged as she walked up to the kitchen where he was busy preparing their dinner. But come on, Kay. It is almost disgusting that so many people are so easily deceived. I mean, It's only been a month since Project Derzad was released and look how many people are throwing their support behind him. You do remember that most of this support has been engineered, right? Kennedy, K, as she had referred to him, replied with a slightly amused look. I mean, I know you weren't on the social engineering team, but I'm pretty sure we looked over their reports together 4 nights ago. Of course I know that. She rolled her eyes, scowl still firmly in place. But you have to admit that, even with our people working to generate a lot of buzz about him, he's still a relatively unknown figure, so there should be a lot less engagements. We're just getting past the 1-month mark since his release, and he's been on the top 10 trending topics in the past 2 weeks? Kennedy hummed as he mulled over her words for a minute. Okay, first off, you're not wrong. Most humans are sheep. Very herd-minded. Really. If those they consider the leaders of the herd move in a direction, chances are fairly certain that they'll do the same. Tara adjusted her position, a victorious smirk on her face, so I was right. Not quite. The smirk vanished. While you're not wrong about people generally maintaining a sheep-like reaction to things, a lot more than you expect do retain the presence of mind to not simply follow the pack. Take Project Derzad's social media success. While the figures are accurate, they don't tell an accurate tale of the nature of these engagements. He paused to put aside the now finely chopped celery and move on to dicing carrots. Sure, our valor topics may have hit the social media stage like a whirlwind, but most of the engagements have been questions about his origins, his motives. Hell, nearly a third of the chatter has been Superman and Wonder Woman fans swearing that our boy's not half the hero those two are. He turned to her, his hands never stopping their continuous motion. Gordon's doing a good job of painting things in the way we want them to be seen, but the truth is that we simply don't have the attention we really want. We're on track, of course, but we're not there yet. Tara's scowl deepened, almost burning a hole through the man currently preparing her dinner. She had not trawled through whatever chats he had been through to gather those facts of his having not seen the benefits of such, but she doubted that he would lie to her just to prove a point. He had never lied to her after all. But the numbers don't lie, Kay. If we've already gotten so many hits in the past month, then we're on our way to getting what we want. And I'm not denying that. He shrugged before flashing a blinding grin at her. Just saying that your little assessment of humanity isn't quite as spot on as you'd like. He was saved from what would have been a truly nasty retort by the simultaneous chimes of their phones. They exchanged a quick glance before he gestured at his busy hands. The blonde rolled her eyes as she pulled her phone out, tapped the receiver and put the call on loudspeaker. Boss? Kennedy's there with you. I'm here, boss. What's up? The Count has arrived. We'll need to get him up to speed and prepare a collection plan for him. You want us to come in now? No, I've convinced him to wait till the bloody sun comes up. Kennedy shared an amused glance with his partner before speaking up. You sound tense, boss. Take it the Count's being a bother? Like you wouldn't believe. Desmond sighed, his annoyance ringing clearly through the speakers. He's taking his anger at being outsmarted by a 10-year-old out on whoever's within hearing distance. Tara snorted at the thought. Yeah? Well, he'd better keep his anger to himself when I'm around, cause I'm not afraid to smack an old man around. ND, that's why I don't piss you off. Her partner stated with an amused eye roll. Much as I wouldn't mind being a fly on the wall when that happens, the board has made it clear that they have plans for him, so maybe you shouldn't hit him too hard. Ignoring Tara's muttered I make no promises, Kennedy asked, will 7 be alright then? It should be fine. Desmond replied. Hopefully I haven't sicked a few G-trolls on him by then. We'll be there, boss, Tara stated. Anything else? Yes. The humor drained out of Desmond's tone, and both his assistants knew that the man was in full business mode. With Vertigo now fully with us, the board is ready to move on to Phase 3. As such, we'll be getting a visit from a few members of the board. The look of silent astonishment on Kennedy and Tara's faces was a testament to how unexpected that little announcement was, though Tara was able to rein in her emotions quickly enough to ask who they were to be expecting. I haven't the slightest clue, so I'll need both of you to bring in your A game. We cannot afford anything less than a stellar performance tomorrow. The line went dead, leaving the blonde and the brunette staring at each other for a few moments longer. Overtime? Kennedy asked. Overtime. Tara nodded before dashing into her room for a change of clothes while he packed things up in the kitchen. Jump City, well, I can't argue with facts. Exactly, Cat. Facts. The simple fact here is that Valor is showing himself to be a lot less of a disruption in the lives of so many compared to the vast majority of the heroes we have running about today, and I'm clearly not the only one that's noticed. Social media metrics have noted that Valor has been one of the most talked about topics in recent weeks. Hell, Cat. The only topic that's trended more than his takedown of Intergang this past week has been the whole Vlathaven scandal. While Cat Grant and Gordon Godfrey exchanged banter, the basement of the Uzumaki residence was filled with the sound of clashing weapons. Kaguya's ash-colored bone spikes were gripped tightly in her pale hands as she battled to find her way past Cory's blistering defense, the silver staff in the Tamaranian's hands appearing as little more than a silver disc in the air thanks to how swiftly it spun. Rather than stand firm against the white-haired princess's assault, Kori continually ceded ground to her opponent, allowing herself to be pushed back at every chance before taking an abrupt step forward, angling her staff in such a way that Kaguya's leading spike simply glanced harmlessly off to the side. Taking advantage of her opponent's shaky stance, Kori dropped low, lashing out with a spinning kick that swept Kaguya's feet off the ground and slamming the butt of her staff into the older woman's belly.
It took all that she had for Kaguya not to retch violently at the explosive pain in her gut as she tumbled ass over tea kettle before adjusting herself to land in a somewhat shaky stance. She knew that couldn't focus on the pain. Their rules of combat were the same as always, allowing neither party to stop until the other surrendered.
Considering how she had lost every single spar against the smiling alien before her, Kaguya desperately wanted to notch up a victory before Kori's wins hit triple digits. Gripping her weapons tightly, she slowly stalked around the wide sparring ring, keeping her opponent in view at all times as she moved. Kori, on the other hand, stood in a loose stance, her staff held lightly in her hands, making only the slightest of adjustments in response to Kaguya's ever-changing position. Suddenly, she took a step to the left and brought her staff up to block up Kaguya's lunging left-hand strike before shifting her left foot just the slightest bit to adjust her body's profile so that the second strike slipped past her waist. Kaguya had anticipated this reaction from the auburn-haired alien thanks to a series of painful learning experiences and was able to react swiftly, crashing her forehead into the bridge of Kori's nose before kicking off the ground and twisting over the girl. Ignoring the flare of pain in her belly, the white-haired princess spun on a dime, bringing the butt of the bone spike in her left hand up to smack into Kori's temple. Her hand whooshed through the air, not finding its target. In the next second, Kaguya was forced to cry out in pain when Kori's elbow dug harshly into her belly. The alien girl had weathered through the disorienting pain of having her nose smacked in enough to note where her opponent was going to land. From there, it was almost too easy to duck beneath the horribly telegraphed slash and counter with an elbow jab into Kaguya's exposed midsection. She was already spinning to deliver a nasty palm strike to her jaw when the older female croaked out of pain. "You win." Again. Kori immediately converted her rising spin from an attack to allow her to hold on to the swaying Kaguya. "What a wonderful spar, Miss Kaguya. How the hell are you so bloody good at this?" Kaguya groaned as she was led to the couch at the far end of the basement. She knew the answer she would receive, of course. After 42 straight losses, the words were all but engraved onto her memory. Kori certainly didn't disappoint. The warlords of Okara are excellent warriors and they pride themselves on training only the best. "Yeah, well, at this point I'm definitely a believer." She groaned as she slumped onto the couch, head thrown back as she tried to catch her breath yet again. Though she wasn't one to brag, Kaguya had often thought of herself as a proficient close-quarter fighter, having been trained by many of her father's guards, so the continuous painful reminder that she was subpar compared to the alien princess was somewhat jarring. "Damn, I'm sore in places I didn't know I had. Please tell me it was worth it." "Of course you are getting better, Kaguya-san." Kori's smile was completely honest, revealing her joy at her friend's performance. "You are able to react better in spite of the pain and your reflexes are much sharper than when we first sparred. You also lasted longer than before this time." "Yay me." Though she had spoken sarcastically, Kaguya couldn't hold back her smile when she caught sight of Kori's beaming face. For all that the alien girl had spent the last 5 years a captive of the Gordanian slave masters at the whims of her power-crazed sister, Coriander had retained much of her almost childlike innocence. It had taken a while for them to gain her trust, but, as they slowly made progress on getting her to open up, both Naruto and Kaguya had come to appreciate the Tamarinian's cheerful demeanor. "Alright, I think I feel a little less like a mass of bruises now. Let's head upstairs and clean up." "Can we have the pizza for dinner again?" the auburn-haired girl asked, her eyes practically shining in excitement. "The one with the pineapples and the anchovies?" Kaguya could not repress a shudder of revulsion when she heard that. If there was anything at all that spoke of Kori's alien nature, it was her love for the most horrendous combination of tastes. It didn't matter that her eyes were solid green orbs with no visible distinction between her pupils and her cornea, nor did it matter that her skin was a natural dark orange. The moment she called out for pineapple, garlic and anchovy pizza, or wheatgrass, mint and eggplant smoothies, the reality of her alien nature just made itself known again. Asterisk. How is it that you can stomach that and utterly detest regular pepperoni pizza? "I'm sorry, but the pepperoni pizza just tastes wrong." Kori shrugged as they returned to the house. "The combination of the fruity pineapple and the tingle of the garlic make the anchovy taste so good. It is so much like a dish my mother would often prepare for me." Kaguya winced as the auburn-haired girl trailed off. For all that she had opened up to herself and Naruto, stories of her life on Tamarin were few and far between, and on the rare occasion that something did slip out, occasions like this, for example, the younger girl would often go silent, her mind lost in a deluge of painful memories. She had no idea why Commander had changed so much according to the scraps they had been able to glean. Corey's sister had been just as innocent as herself before they were said to train at the feet of the Okaran warlords *, but Kagaya knew that she wasn't alone in her desire to pound the girl into a pulp for what she had done to Coriander. If anything, Naruto was even more eager to lay his hands on the other girl. That aside, Kagaya knew that she had to get her friend's spirits back up, and so she slung her arm around the girl's shoulders and smiled. Well then, I'm pretty sure we can convince Sticky Joe to get us a couple of extra large, extra cheesy pizzas loaded with as much garlic, pineapples and anchovies a growing Tamaranian could need in a sitting. What do you say? It was a somewhat weak attempt at cheering her up, but Corey, used to being belittled and denied by the Gordanians, was all too appreciative of the thought. Thank you, Kagaya-san. Upon getting to the main house, they split up. Kagaya headed to her room to take a shower and make a call for pizza, while Corey headed to the laundry to get the clothes she'd started on earlier in the day out of the dryer before going into her room for a shower. They had just converged in the living area when the doorbell rang. I'll get it, Corey said as she flew over to the door, remembering at the last second to keep her feet on the ground. Kagaya, on the other hand, headed into the kitchen to grab a pair of disposable plates and 2 bottles of Sprite. She was on her way back when she heard a shrill, excited cry of Naruto-san.
Her head instantly jerked toward the doorway, a soft smile finding its way to her lips as she heard him exchange greetings with their young friend. Deciding to wait for them, she returned to the kitchen to grab another plate and a Coke before setting them up beside the stack of pizza boxes on the coffee table. When she realized that they weren't in by the time she was done, the white-haired princess's forehead nodded. It shouldn't have taken them so long to get inside, now should it?
Deciding to check up on them, she swiftly made her way over to the door that led into the garage. Just before she could push it open, though, the door was pulled inward and she found herself staring into a familiar pair of blue eyes. Canary? Kagaya. The blonde heroine reached forward, embracing her old friend/ward. It's so good to see you again. It's good to see you too, she replied as they pulled apart, allowing her to take in her friend's appearance. Her usual attire had been replaced by something far less eye-catching. A snug paw, fashionable rips in them, plus a baggy AC/DC t-shirt and sneakers, her hair bound up in a low ponytail. A more casual outfit, yes, but the older woman still made it look dead SXY. This is quite the surprise, I know. I was just checking up on a few things here when Naruto pulled up beside me. The heroine explained. Also, it's Dinah now. I'm not in my work clothes, so I prefer you call me by my name.
No problem. I just ordered pizza, so I hope you don't mind that.
Kagaya still can't cook to save her life, so she has to live on takeout when I'm out of the house. Naruto chortled as they moved toward the living room. It's half the reason I don't leave her side. Please ignore him, Kagaya said with an exaggerated eye roll. His inner attention whore is getting antsy that he isn't the center of attention. She is right about the attention thing. Canary smirked at her fellow blonde, prompting him to sulk most impressively. I'm going to sulk in the kitchen and prepare a big bowl of ramen to bury my miseries in. He pouted before shuffling off.
While herself and Canary shared a laugh at his antics, Kagaya couldn't help but notice how Corey had subtly slowed down, allowing herself and Dinah to pull further ahead while remaining unusually quiet, a startling contrast to her initial excitement at Naruto's arrival. It wasn't much of a surprise considering what the younger girl had been through, but Kagaya had come to consider Dinah as a cherished friend and she wanted the Tamaranian girl to get to know her as well.
Moving subtly, Kagaya shifted her position as herself and Dinah conversed until it seemed perfectly excusable for her to enact her plan. Corey, have you met Dinah yet? From her position, she could see the way the younger girl froze, her eyes darting towards her with a silent plea. Don't bring me into this. And while she might have acquiesced to that plea in any other scenario, this time, Kagaya chose to turn a blind eye to it. Don't be shy, now, come on. Dinah had, in fact, noticed the new addition to her friend's home from the moment Naruto had parked the car. The girl was quite hard to miss, considering how she had bounded out of the house with a visible aura of joy only to shrink back when she noticed her presence. She had planned to talk to her friends about it at a later time, but now she decided to take the opportunity Kagaya had just provided. Smiling reassuringly at the timidly approaching girl, Dinah stretched her arm out for a handshake. Hi. I'm Dinah. Coriander of Tamarin. The girl replied stiffly as she gingerly shook the proffered hand. It's nice to meet you. Though the response came out sounding more like a question, Dinah took no offense. From what she had observed earlier, it was clear that the girl had gone through experiences that had hardened her against simply trusting people at first glance. Heck, it was obvious that she had only listened to Kagaya and come to greet her as a mark of respect for the white-haired princess. It's nice to meet you too, Coriander. I will return to my room now. She nodded and walked away, her posture not easing up for a second. Dinah waited until the alien's retreating figure disappeared around a corner before asking quietly. She's been through a lot, hasn't she? More than one would think. Her companion sighed, slumping into her seat. Her sister tricked her into a life of slavery to an alien race in exchange for the resources required to usurp their father's throne. By the time we found her a month ago, she'd been a slave for over 5 years. She didn't need to look at her to see the raw expression of rage and sympathy on Dinah's face. She has opened up to us quite a bit over the past month, but it's clear that the scars are still there. What's she like? Dinah asked, forcing her mind away from the simmering rage building up inside. Yes, she would have liked nothing more than to beat the ever-loving shit out of Coriander's sister for her actions, but there was little to no chance of that happening soon, so it was pointless to focus on that anger anyway. I mean, she seemed so excited when she flew out to greet Naruto earlier before shutting down when she noticed me. Yeah, I kind of suspected that would be the case. Kagaya exhaled tiredly. As to what she's like, well, she's a normal teenager. Maybe a bit more Megan than, say, Raven. She's charming, easily excited. Smile that can light up a room? Dinah smiled, thinking of her Martian charge. Exactly. The two women laughed, imagining what it would be like if the two girls ever met. They could easily be best friends if Cory would let Megan in. It's Megan, isn't it? Dinah smirked. If she could worm her way into Connor's heart, then I'm pretty sure she could do the same here. Whatever you say, Doc. Kagaya rolled her eyes at the blonde's comment, though she admitted that she couldn't quite deny the truth in those words. So, how have things been at the mountain? Honestly, I don't know. Dinah shrugged. I haven't been there in a while, probably over 2 weeks now. I'm not sure. Point still stands, though. I haven't been to the mountain in a bit. I'm guessing Batman's at the center of it, and your guess is wrong. Dinah replied with a proud smirk. Things have changed since you left, you know? Seeing that the blonde was not joking, Kagaya sat up. Okay, what have we missed? Well, for one thing, the team now operates with a lot more autonomy than before. Wonder Woman pulled a fast one on Bats and granted them the freedom to investigate cases of their own choosing. There are a few guidelines, of course, can't risk them accidentally lighting a political powder keg, but they can go on missions of their own choosing in addition to whatever the League has for them. Bats has been harrying them about any connections to you, but he's only putting enough pressure to make them sweat. Well, that's quite sneaky of you, Naruto said as he finally joined them, a half-empty can of soda in his hand. Though I'm pretty sure the Batman's intensity is not quite as put on as you're thinking. Which is why they've got yours truly to cut him off before he goes overboard, Dinah replied. And where have you been? Checking up on something, he answered as he took a seat opposite Kagaya. I sent a clone to check up on Miss Isley and it just reported in. He didn't say a word of the second conversation he had just concluded with Kennedy over the Heart Link seal regarding Cadmus' new movements, having decided to wait until they knew precisely what was going on. She's been quite the busy bee. Batman said something along those lines. Dinah nodded. Something about Bane's campaign against Cobra Venom. She's been supplying him with the KV antidote. Though she hadn't known about it beforehand, it wasn't a particularly difficult deduction for the white-haired princess to based on their comments. That's good news. I was wondering how we'd get that off the market. Bats was thinking along the same lines too. He was about to put the team on it when the reports of Bane's raids came to light. Dinah commented. For all that he's a steroid junkie, Bane's tactics have been nothing short of impressive. Still, is it safe for Ivy to be working with him like this? My guy has kept Pamela from actually interacting with Bane. Naruto answered. He took a swig of the soda before continuing. He's been organizing the pickups and drop-offs on her behalf. Luckily, Bane doesn't really care about the setup. As long as he gets his rival knocked off the market completely, he's open to business partners. In exchange, Pamela's now a very wealthy woman. Turning to Kagaya, he said, I was toying around with the idea of reintegrating with society as some well-off, eco-conscious debutante. That could work. Kagaya nodded slowly as her mind swiftly came up with ways to enact his plan. It'll take some doing, of course, but it's quite doable. And I'm guessing you have a way to keep her from reverting to her Queen of Thorns identity? Dinah asked, prompting a nod from Toe. She's just a regular human with a closer than normal affinity for all things flora. Her powers are sealed up tight, save that little connection she needs to keep her alive. He explained. If we go along with the debutante thing, then she'll have to rely solely on her brains to make her way in the world. We'll keep her under close inspection, of course. Kagaya continued. Her current warden can stay on as her personal bodyguard, allowing us to have eyes on her at all times. In addition, we could have Toad Sage Publishing agree to partner with her on doing some eco-friendly charity. That should give us plausible reason to become publicly close to her. Sounds like you two have this covered. Dinah nodded. Let me know if there's anything I can help with. Sure thing. Naruto nodded. Now, at the cost of my manly dignity, I've gotta ask. Can we please eat now? I'm dying here. Honestly, I was waiting for someone to reach out first. Dinah admitted with a laugh before turning to Kagaya. So, dear hostess, are we permitted to partake of this meal? Or are we destined to starve? I'm tempted to leave you to starve. Kagaya replied imperiously, turning her nose up at them for a few moments before breaking into a wide grin at the plaintive look on Naruto's face. I'm kidding. Have at it. The words were scarcely out of her mouth when she remembered that Cory's uniquely topped pizzas were among the stack. Wait, she cried as she lunged forward to prevent Dinah from taking the wrong box, the sudden jerky motion sending lances of pain jabbing down her left side. Those are for Cory. Noticing the way Naruto shuddered and recoiled from the boxes, Dinah asked what the problem was. Cory's got a, let's call it a unique taste in foods, he replied. What did she get this time? I'll tell you later. Kaguya answered as she gathered the marked boxes and turned to leave the room only to stumble as her ankle throbbed painfully. Naruto was instantly by her side, steadying her and asking what was wrong. Cory and I overdid it during our spar today and I guess I'm still suffering the effects of that. You know, you could have asked me to help with this. He chided gently as he took the boxes from her and helped her back into her seat, and then he picked up 2 boxes of pepperoni. You stay here, I'll have dinner with Cory. Massage after dinner. Please. Sure thing, my lady. He bowed playfully with a roguish smile before leaving. Kaguya, giddy at the prospect of receiving one of his heavenly body rubs, was utterly unprepared for Dinah's comment the moment Naruto was out of earshot. Well, glad to see that you two have finally gotten together. She immediately tried to deny it, however her mind was a bit too jumbled up to make any coherent rebuttal, so she ended up sputtering a bunch of words that made little to no sense until she dropped her head in resignation. Yes. Naruto and I have gotten together. Good. Now all that's left is for Wally and Artemis to buddy up and I'll be $300 richer. Wait, you gambled on us? The Hall of Justice? Every time the last son of Krypton walked into the hall, he couldn't hide the nostalgic smile that bloomed on his face. To many, the gleaming edifice was the birthplace of the Justice League, the place where the Earth's mightiest heroes had come together and swiftly decided to come together in a show of superhuman solidarity for the protection of the planet they all loved. It was laughable, however, that so many people didn't realize that most of the core members were actually against the creation of the League. The first time, they had only banded together to stop the Atlantean uprising because it was clearly a threat to their own cities as well as the world at large, and many had felt that it was better to only come together in times of such dire need. Coming together as a single organization, they feared, could lead to them losing focus on their own cities. If they banded together, how exactly would they work out the logistics of organizing such a diverse group of individuals? It had taken weeks of continuous arguments, going back and forth, sometimes spending hours arguing over a single point as each side tried to prove that they were right or tried to settle on a compromise with another side. They hadn't done any of that in the powerful-looking edifice the hall had become today. Back then, they had stayed in the only building in a city block that hadn't been demolished in the wake of the invasion. A simple warehouse. Tempers had flared, fists had been raised, and, in the end, they had birthed something that would far surpass each and every single one of them. The League of Justice, Wonder Woman had proudly proclaimed, a name that the Flash and Shazam had swiftly reworked into their current moniker. The Justice League. No, Kal-El couldn't hold back the proud smile on his face, a smile that grew just the slightest bit as he walked into the hall's training facility. While the original hall was no more than a simple warehouse, generous donations from Wayne Enterprises and Queen Consolidated had transformed the place into a sprawling complex, having bought up nearly half of that desolate city block in the name of the League. Now, in addition to an actual conference hall for the League's more ceremonious meetings, the press would not be denied their conferences. He knew via first-hand experience. The complex now boasted a number of state-of-the-art facilities that tended to the varied needs of its many members. The training facility was one of his usual haunts, even if he never actually utilized it. Both Diana and Bruce trained there in their spare time and, if their busy schedules ever clashed, they enjoyed an incredibly intense sparring session. He had learned exactly how intense their spars were the first time he'd stumbled on them sparring. Suffice it to say that he had thought they were possessed, so savagely did they fight. A trait shared by most of the other trained fighters on the League, resulting in his feet often leading him there without much conscious thought. Today, he was greeted with what should have been a familiar scene were it not for the one training. Share a hole. The partially amnesiac Thanagarian who had almost literally dropped in on them was going through the motions of a fight shadow sparring. Dinah had called it sweat glistening off her skin. She wore a baggy pair of dark yoga pants with a specially tailored gray tank top and a pair of sneakers, and, with her wings currently retracted, she seemed like a regular brunette woman practicing her martial arts. Then, she crouched and, in a sudden burst of motion, her wings erupted from her back, allowing her to launch herself into the air where she continued her battle with whatever unseen foes she had cooked up. She was in the middle of an impressive aerial maneuver when she caught sight of him patiently watching her. She dropped out of the air immediately, her wings pulled in close to her body before flaring at the last second, slowing her down enough for her to alight gently, her wings retracting into her skin as she did. I didn't think there was anyone else in here. I just got here myself, he said as she picked up a towel and began wiping off some of the sweat. You're pretty good at that fighting, I mean. Yeah, it's to be expected, though, right? She smiled sardonically. Like I said, I was a member of the Civil Defense Corps back home, so I had to learn to fight. I'm a lot better than my memories remember of my training, though, so, I guess I got better at it? It'll come back to you, he stated confidently, doing his best to sound reassuring. He couldn't imagine what she was going through. She remembered much of her life on Thanagar, up to her becoming a member of the police force. And then, nothing. Not even Jean's best efforts proved effective save for the fact that he had gotten a scope of just how much she was missing. Close to 7 years of her memories were simply gone. Likely as a result of whatever plastered over the watchtower's viewport. How have you been, Shiera? Fed, watered, rested and bored out of my skull. The brunette stated with a slightly annoyed scowl. I mean, I appreciate the hospitality you have shown me. You could have just left me to die. Not the way we do things, I'm afraid, he interrupted with a teasing smile that finally earned a little smile in response. Yeah, you guys prefer to drain the life out of your victims by leaving them to marinate in their own loneliness. He couldn't hide the feeling of guilt that flashed across his face when he heard those words. Yeah, not exactly our best impression, has it? It's just, we've had quite the busy month, really. Now that was an understatement. Between helping cities around the world with the reconstruction efforts, maintaining their presence in their own stomping grounds and dealing with their regular lives, each and every member of the league had been incredibly busy. Things are winding down now, though, so you'll definitely be seeing us a lot more. And I'll finally get to leave my poor tower. When she noted the bemused look he shot her, she explained, I've been reading whatever I could find and someone left a book of fairy tales so. Ah, Rapunzel, right? She nodded and they both shared a laugh at that. Well, you don't quite have the hair to create your own escape route, but I can assure you that we'll help you get acclimated to our little ball of mud as soon as possible. In the meantime, I've got some good news for you. Oh really? She arched an eyebrow at him. Impress me then. We were able to recover a few things from the crash site, he answered. I've got them in the main hall if you're interested in checking them out. Sure. The two left the training facility and walked in mutual silence until they arrived at the hall, just in time to watch another member of the league teleport in via the Zeta transfer. Diana? Kal-El, Shiera. It's good to see you too. The Amazon's smile was clearly more out of courtesy than any true joy at seeing them. As she approached them, though, it became obvious why. She was clearly both annoyed and exhausted, seemingly ready to take the head off whoever so much as looked at her wrong. As such, the man of tomorrow was left gaping when Shiera glanced at the woman and stated in a clear voice, well, you look like shit. He was left reeling when Diana simply replied, Lex Luthor is an asshole. Diana? No offense meant here, but are you okay? Because she clearly wasn't. While she was usually a very patient woman, when that patience was exhausted, her temper flared very quickly and often over the slightest of matters. Shiera's comment should have set her off. Instead she had responded in a manner that was very uncharacteristic of her. She had used a modern swear word. Something was clearly wrong here. His deductions were swiftly proven to be accurate when she replied, No, Kal-El, I am not okay. And, as I came here to rest for a few hours, the last thing I want to do is talk about it right now. Well, that was certainly quite blunt. Deciding to let her rest before talking to her about whatever was troubling her, he said, I understand. I'll see you in a few hours. To which she nodded and promptly walked away. Now then, Shiera, where were we? I was about to ask why you looked ready to run away screaming like a little child when I spoke to the princess just now. The brunette replied with a teasing grin. Might I have found one of the great Superman's weaknesses? Very funny, you. He rolled his eyes at her before directing her attention to a trunk about 5 feet away. Now, do you want to see what we found or not? Alright. She raised her hands in a gesture of surrender as he led her to the box. Let's see what all the fuss is, Ab. Her words died in her throat as she stared at the contents of the now opened trunk. A simple-looking yet extraordinarily well-crafted golden morning star. I take it you recognize this? Superman asked as he watched her almost reverently retrieve the weapon. Even to his untrained eye, she seemed to come alive the instant her hands touched it, as though herself and the weapon belonged one to the other. Of course she recognized it. Even with the gap in her memories, she knew that the weapon forged of nth metal by the best weaponsmiths on Thanagar. Her mind supplied almost reflexively had seen her through some incredible battles. It's mine, she said softly, her voice cracking due to the weight of emotions flooding her at that moment. It's been by my side since my induction into the Defense Corps. I'm sure I've been through battles with it. I've saved lives with it. Kal-El wasn't certain what made him say it. Her words, maybe, or just the wealth of emotions he could sense within her. Whatever the case, he simply smiled at her and asked, Would you like to help us save lives here? What? I mean, you don't have to give me an answer just yet, but I'll do it. Though her eyes still had a filmy sheen of tears over them, her voice was steely, determined. I joined the Defense Corps to protect the innocent and I'll gladly do the same here. I'm in. His smile widened. Welcome to the Justice League, Shiera Hole. Unknown to either of them, deep within the recesses of her mind, a single thought flashed across her subconscious. Phase 1 complete. Washington, D.C. The first thing she noted when her brain swam back into consciousness was that her hands were restrained behind her. By the time her brain was fully synced up with the rest of her body, she had a pretty decent idea of her immediate status. Captured, restrained, on my knees on a hard surface. Likely a bare, cemented floor judging by the tiny stings from my knees. Not much noise around and the air feels musty, so I'm likely being held below ground level. The analysis was complete before she ever thought of opening her eyes. When she finally cracked her eyes open slowly, so that she could swiftly get accustomed to the harsh light that shone from the ceiling, she noted that her initial guess was spot on. Save her mysterious captor, she was alone in a room, about 10 meters long and possibly the same in width. There were no windows and the only door was about 3 meters to her. Her thoughts were viciously cut off when a powerful surge of electricity coursed through her body. "That should clear your mind right up," a gruff-sounding voice stated. Even her body's spasms and her racking coughs, she retained enough presence of mind to note that the voice came from somewhere to her left. "Don't bother trying to mount an escape. Right now every nerve cluster beneath your neck is firing signals to the wrong body parts. You can talk, yes, but that'll be the most you can do for the next hour." The glare she shot at him was beyond glacial, but if he was affected, it didn't show. "Now that I know you can hear me, I'll give you a chance to avoid any lasting damage. Who hired you and what are their plans against Queen Perdita?" "Is that all you want to know?" she asked between greedy gulps of air, before baring her teeth at him in a macabre grin. "Well, I'm sorry to say that I can't help you." For all that she had expected the harsh rebuke, the pain was still jarring and her muscles locked up in agony until he finally relented.
Cheshire. In my experience, common sense isn't all that common.
The sound of approaching footsteps told her that her captor was on the move, a fact that was proven when he walked up to stand before her. He was utterly nondescript, from his pale blonde hair to his outfit. He didn't have bulging muscles, neither did he seem overly skinny. Were it not for his eyes, those dispassionate blue slats that bore into her like daggers, she would have dismissed the likelihood that he was a threat. After all, common sense would tell you to give me what I want so I can get out of your hair. Cheshire. Wake up, fuck KK. You. The curse was weak, drooled out of a slow-to-respond mouth. Not what I want to hear, girl. Her captor grabbed her chin harshly, fingers pressing in like miniature vices as he forced her to look at him. Your teammates are in no condition to even think of mounting a rescue and no one knows where you are right now. I would advise you to tell me what you know about this attempt on Queen Perdita or I'll be forced to resort to other methods. She mustered up the energy to hawk a wad of spittle at him. Ignoring the slimy mass making its way down his jaw, he shook his head. You brought this on yourself. His left hand shot up and clamped over her mouth and, right before her eyes, like something out of a horror movie, his cold blue eyes bled into an evil crimson shade that glowed with dark intent.
Hold still, he growled before her sight blacked out and her world exploded in agony.
Jade, wake the fuck up. Jade Nguyen jumped in shock only to be forced back into her seat by a nasty jerk that ran from her left hip to her right shoulder. Her hands moved on autopilot, reaching for and grabbing the curved daggers she wore beneath her tattered battle kimono before an arm smacked against hers, sending the blades clattering to the floor. Jesus Christ, Jade, calm the fuck down, you're fucking up my driving. Her panic-driven mind recognized the voice as a friendly well, as not an enemy's, and slowly, reason pierced the fog of fear that clouded her mind. Slowly but surely, reason reasserted itself in her mind and she remembered where she was, in a black limo beside Sportsmaster. You back here, or are you still stuck inside that empty noggin of yours? I'm here, she replied curtly, her brusque tone a testament to how shaken up she was by her flashback. How far out are we? Less than 10 miles. Lawrence replied gruffly, still pissed at nearly losing control of the wheel while he helped her snap out of whatever was going on in her head. Fuck just happened, Chesh? You're not one to lose your head on a mission. It was nothing. Bullshit, it was nothing. He fired back. You should have seen yourself. You looked like some 2-year-old after a nasty nightmare. I'm not sure why you care, old man, she replied coolly, without so much as a glance at him as she tried to calm her pounding pulse. So I had a waking nightmare. How's that your problem? It was a lot more than that, she knew. This wasn't the first time she was experiencing one of those flashbacks since being found comatose by another member of the Shadows. Whatever her blonde captor had done, it had scarred her psyche and she hadn't quite recovered yet. It's my problem when your little slip-up nearly had me drive into a truck. He fought back the snarl that threatened to mar his features, hidden as they were behind his mask. He knew that he had to maintain control of himself considering the passengers on the other side of the soundproof partition, but damn if she wasn't being particularly annoying now. You think our passengers would appreciate something like that? You have the situation well in hand, don't you? I do, and that's the only reason we're not in a shit ton of pain right now, so a little appreciation would be nice. Oh, you need to be appreciated now, don't you? A hint of venom slipped into her tone now, partly due to the realization that her hands were still shaking but mostly due to the fact that his words brought back the memories of the harsh life he had visited on herself and her sister. So what exactly am I appreciating you for? Being an abusive asshole dad or helping me get to where I am now? Silence was his only response and Jade scoffed. That's what I thought. For the next couple of minutes, the driver's cabin was filled with an uncomfortable silence as they drove through the early morning streets of Washington. Then, in a surprising move, The older man reached behind his head and unsnapped his mask, revealing the hard lines and rugged features of his face to her for the first time in 2 years. Here's a piece of advice, Jade. One of the first lessons I learned when I started out. In our line of work, we need to have someone to talk to. They don't gotta understand what you're saying, hell, they might be deaf for all it matters. The point is, it's easier to carry on when you've got an outlet for whatever's hurting you. Arching her eyebrows at the sudden, unexpected advice, Cheshire couldn't hold back the bitter sneer that crossed her face. Nice speech, old man. So what, I'm supposed to trust you? Fuck no, he grunted as he put the mask back on. If you trusted me with your problems, I consider you brain dead and kick your ass to the curb. Asterisk. Love you too, Dad. Though the words were devoid of any iota of sincerity, Jade wondered whether or not she had imagined the subtle undercurrent of self-recrimination in his words. Whatever. Just find someone to dump your shit on so you don't act like some whiny brat next time. You're decent at your job, but I'll gladly find a replacement if your problems try to screw me over next time. And there's the sportsmaster I know. With her hands no longer shaking, she reached down to pick her daggers. Please don't change. Watching you try to play nice is horribly disconcerting. Just get your head in the game, we're almost there and you're doing the talking. Cadmus, well, that's just about everything, Kennedy stated as he walked up to stand beside Desmond at the reception area. Vertigo's been me. The security team has been prepped and are standing by. Tara's with XX overseeing the genomes and the research division is prepping their books in the event that we need to make a full-on presentation of our projects. And Dr. Banerjee? The Cadmus head asked, nervously glancing down at his watch. Is she on site yet? No, according to Dr. Crane, she decided to check up on Valor's status on her way in. He replied. She should be with him within the hour or so. Depending on how long this takes, we might get an update on him. I should have thought of that. Desmond muttered quietly. The board members will likely want to know how Project Durzad is faring. Kennedy placed an arm on the man's shoulder. Hey boss, relax, alright? Sure, that part didn't occur to you. The important part's that if they ask, you've got someone on site to give the report. Well, that's true, but there's still so much I should have thought of, things I should have anticipated. And can you think of a single one now? What? Can you think of a single thing you should have done but haven't done yet? Kennedy prompted. When the older man frowned and shook his head, the head of security continued. Exactly. You can't think of any, so there's no point worrying yourself ragged over it. Besides, between me, you and Tara, I'm sure we can work out anything that comes up. Let us hope that you're right, Kennedy, Desmond said before exhaling and steeling himself up for the impending meeting. Right on cue, a sleek black limo parked in front of the building and a familiar figure got out of the driver's side. Wait, is that Sportsmaster? Kennedy murmured as he walked up to the door, Desmond a few steps behind him. They have Sportsmaster, and Cheshire, on chauffeur duty? Man, Tara would give an arm to see this? She's still upset about that spar? Desmond seemed bewildered by the thought. You both gave as good as you got. That may be true, but Tara definitely doesn't see it that way. He shrugged as they reached the glass doors. Plus, it certainly didn't help that Cheshire poisoned Tara and Sportsmaster left us both smelling like roadkill. He paused to watch Sportsmaster take up a guard position by the limo's door before squaring his shoulders and exchanging a glance with his boss. Looks like it's go time. Desmond nodded as he walked forward, allowing the younger man to hold the door open for him. Sportsmaster, Cheshire. Good morning, Dr. Desmond, Kennedy. Cheshire stepped forward and shook hands with the head scientist. I take it everything's ready? When Desmond nodded, she shared a glance with her partner and Sportsmaster tapped on the limo glass. It took every ounce of self-control he possessed for Kennedy's jaw to remain shut because, stepping out of the limousine, accompanied by a strange chess piece-like device with a floating brain, were two of the people his actual boss had tasked him to keep an eye out for. Lord Cobra and Clarion the Witch Boy. Well, shit. New York. While Desmond and Kennedy welcomed some of the world's most wanted criminals into the labs, Dr. Sumitha Banerjee was about to see the work of her hands after a month of its release from Cadmus.
As she had expected, the door to his apartment was open by the time she arrived there, undoubtedly thanks to his superhuman senses, allowing her to walk into what was arguably the cleanest, most organized apartment she had ever seen.
Dr. Banerjee. I had been expecting you since your call this morning. The dusky woman turned to him as he approached from the kitchenette, clad in a loose pair of blue shorts and a sleeveless white top and carrying a tray. It's good to see you again, T. Yes please. She asked with a teasing smile, keeping track of his expressions and body language. It's good to see you too, Durzad. Or is it, Valor, now? I am whatever the light needs me to be, he stated as he put down the tray on his coffee table and took a seat opposite her. Am I correct that this is not a social visit? Yes and no, she said, reaching for the kettle to brew a cup for herself. I mean, there are official reasons for my being here, checking to see how you're integrating into society, how you're feeling about your alter ego's popularity and the like, but honestly, I could have done that some other time. She paused, taking in the rich, malty aroma of the Assam tea before continuing. However, a few members of the light are expected to show up today and I don't know, I guess I got nervous. Dr. Crane will not be amused. Not be amused, he'd be downright vengeful, that's what he'll be. She snorted as she poured the tea into a mug. He can't do jack about it, though, so too bad for him. When she took her first sip of the tea, she visibly relaxed. Okay, I need to get out of the labs more often. God, I haven't had tea this good in weeks now.
I'm glad you like it, he replied. So, things have been busy at Cadmus. More than ever. She exhaled. Between Dalton, the director and I, we've had to work on the research and designs for the equipment to be used in the next phase of the plan. Another sip. The pressure is expected to taper off by the end of the week now that the Count will be taking center stage, though, so there's a plus for me. The two sat in amicable silence for a while until she spoke up. So, how have you been?
The integration process has gone well. He stated, his speech pattern defaulting to the emotionless tone he had utilized most frequently at Cadmus. There have been the occasional slip-ups when I responded in a manner that was incongruous with the pattern my stand-in had built up. However, I was able to play it off as a means of humor and conform myself to their expectations. Sumitha sat forward, a look of alarm visible in her eyes. And none of your coworkers, your friends, none of them have any pressing concerns about these slip-ups? None. So no one suspects anything, not even with your alter ego? None. Good. The scientist let out a deep breath, relieved at the answer. That's good. We won't need to make any adjustments to the overall plan just yet. She refilled her mug and sat back. Have you faced any challenges in your role as Valor? None, he replied. Then, he seemed to think better of the response. To clarify, I have faced no challenge during my time as Valor. Rather, a subset of the population seem interested in my direct manner and brusque demeanor. In a conversation at the supermarket, a coworker referred to Valor as being standoffish, and commented on how that could affect my perception in the eye of the public. Sumitha nodded slowly, understanding what his coworker meant. Fortunately, we predicted that something like this could occur and the director approved of my plan. Do I have permission to learn of this plan? Of course. In fact, you play a very important role in it. She put down her mug and sat up. What do you know of Leslie Willis? Durzad frowned as he tried to connect the name to a face and came up with nothing. The name does not sound familiar. I'm not surprised. Leslie Willis is a sophomore of the Communication Skills Department at LaGuardia College. She moonlights as a talk show host on the late-night segment at Word. A few taps on her phone brought up the young woman's profile, revealing a blonde with a cocky smirk. She's quite the ambitious one. She's always pushing to find a story that can really push her to radio show stardom. Unfortunately for her, her somewhat abrasive behavior tends to be quite off-putting to many people, resulting in a small, loosely associated social circle. A point that played heavily in her favor when I was looking through possible candidates for this. What role will she serve? Sumitha smirked. She'll be the Lois Lane to your Superman. While Gordon Godfrey has done a good job of publicizing you, Leslie Willis will bring your personal perspective to the world through her show. She wouldn't miss the chance to interview me, as it could be the Irchin for, Durzad said, understanding dawning in his eyes before being shrouded by doubt. But how will she meet up with me? Simple. You'll save her from what should have been a fatal accident. It didn't take a genius to understand what she was referring to, so in exchange for saving her life, she will carry my story to the world. Sumitha nodded. Between her core personality and her ambition, she'll see her saving her as the opportunity to gain the groundbreaking story that will be her career's launchpad.
What about her superiors at the radio station? Could they pose a challenge?
We're in the process of eliminating such a possibility, she interrupted. No member of staff at Word will pose a threat.
Understood. Good. The Indian woman exhaled. So, has anything else of note come up?
One other. The clone stated, his dark eyes staring unblinkingly at her. I met and interacted with my predecessor. You met your predecessor? What do you mean you? Comprehension dawned midway and she shot out of her seat in shock. You met Project Kerr? It could only have been Kerr. Durzad couldn't mean Superman, otherwise it would have said progenitor. As for predecessors, Project Match had never been given the green light to leave the facility, and the other projects between Match and Kerr had been disposed of. No, Durzad could only have met Project Kerr, otherwise known as the Superboy, and that just complicated things. Sumitha paused her worried pacing to ask him how the meeting had gone, and, the more Durzad revealed, the more relaxed she got. And you're certain he didn't suspect anything? She prodded again, just to be sure, and when he reaffirmed his predecessor's innocence, she sighed and fell back into her chair. This could work. She mused as she began thinking over how this new development could be spun in their favor. According to Durzad, a tentative bond had begun to form between the two clones, and so, with a little extra poking and prodding, she was certain that they could build that bond into something that could help further their cause. This is good. No, this better than good. If we work this out well, it might dovetail with something else we've been working on. Another phase. A longer-term one. She clarified. We can talk about that later. I'll need to call the director's attention to this, but I want you to focus on solidifying your relationship with the Superboy. We might have an opportunity here to either bring him back to the light or utilize him as an external resource. Understood. Cadmus. While Sumitha spoke to Durzad, the trio of the brain, Lord Cobra and Clarion the Witch Boy were sitting down to a meeting with the heads of the research facility. Before we begin in earnest, I have been tasked by the other members of the board to extend congratulations to you, Desmond, for your work here. The brain stated, its tone mechanical and bearing no inflection whatsoever. Asterisk. Aside from the debacle with the Justice League and their younger associates, you have managed this facility to a degree well exceeding our projections. I'll be honest. I did not expect you to take charge in the aftermath of that mess the do-gooders left, but you carried yourself pretty well for an old buzzard. Clarion smirked, giving a mocking, opera clap, as he spoke. Really, Desmond, from Tikal and I, well done. Needless displays of sarcasm aside, where's the regent of Vlatava? Cobra asked, his droll, monotonous voice a sharp contrast to Clarion's more boyishly excited one. We were assured that he had arrived. The Count is currently with 2 of our technicians on the 3rd sub-level. Desmond reported. He is testing a range of devices that will help amplify his innate abilities. Beneficial though that might be, you were told to have him ready for a briefing. The brain stated. His presence at this meeting was not a suggestion, Desmond. It was clear that the scientist hadn't expected to be called out so early into the meeting. His hands shook slightly and a sheen of sweat rapidly formed on his forehead. On whose orders did the Count move to the 3rd sub-level, Desmond? Mine. The admission drew every eye onto the speaker. The young brown-haired man who sat to the left of the Cadmus director. I diverted the Count's attention to its current course. He had expected the absolute worst when he spoke. Instant death, slow torture or myriad punishments. These were, after all, some of the most dangerous men on the planet. However, while the brain remained deathly silent and Clarion's boyish features grew demonic in his anger, Cobra seemed somewhat amused. It made no sense, but that was the vibe the brunette was getting from the dangerous cultist. So, you knowingly chose to defy the orders of your superiors. I would expect that you have a reason for this? The man's sibilant manner of speech, combined with his pale skin and sharp, yellow eyes, leaned a bit too closely toward another infamous serpentine enemy in the infiltrator's mind. He had no time to ponder such, however, as he immediately said to defending his lie. You commended the director on his efforts earlier. Thing is, the results of those efforts come thanks to a process that he implemented. He paused, seeking confirmation that he hadn't inadvertently pissed anyone off. Cobra understood and subtly motioned for the other 2 to stand down. Go on. Kennedy nodded. The way we do things here is simple. Whenever the director receives directives from the board, he shares them with Lady Markov and I. In doing so, we are able to break down these directives to understand the fastest, most efficient way to handle them. Because we are combining our efforts during this period, we are typically able to come up with suggestions and adjustments that often form the basis for many of our in-house contingency plans. He paused again, this time to gauge the mood of the 3 before him, and the blonde felt pleased that if nothing else the Lord of Chaos features had returned to their usual, more human form. The primary advantage of this method is that it allows us to come up with well laid out instructions for our workers. A more subtle advantage, though, is that it helps us keep a tight leash on our plans, particularly our contingencies. Because only Lady Markov, myself and the director know of these contingencies, we are able to stay ahead of the Justice League and their allies in the event of an information breach. Everyone employed by Cadmus goes through an intense vetting process. The brain stated. The probability of an infiltrator existing within our ranks is minuscule. But it is there. He argued back, tamping down firmly on any gloating thoughts. I will not try to compare my knowledge to your intellectual prowess, but the very nature of my job here demands that I prepare for threats regardless of how minuscule they might be. Sensing that he had them on the back foot, now, the brown-haired man sat forward. I have absolutely no experience working with the former regent of Vlatava, but if he could attempt to kill off his niece for a shot at the throne, then I have no reason to believe that he won't try to stab us in the back if he sees an opportunity to improve his lot. Better to take precautions now than have to scrabble a defense later. So, you don't trust old Vertigo, Clarion asked, a hint of amusement creeping into his tone. Interesting, and you approve of this assessment, Desmond? When in doubt, align with the most logical bullshit. The director thought before responding. Of the Count. Without a doubt, Lord Clarion.
The brain spoke up, directing his question to the only one present who had remained silent. You never presented such a process to us in your reports, Markov.
I deemed it unnecessary, she stated coolly. My directives were to ensure the smooth running of this facility and to report on any rising issues following the forced transition from Sumdak to Cadmus. Seeing as the director's process carried me along and worked efficiently, I saw no need to dosain for what seemed like an age's terror. Desmond and Kennedy did their best to present a united front to the powerful men on the other side of the table.
We have not gotten as far as we have by simply throwing out opinions that run at odds with ours. Cobra stated coolly. Your process is merit-worthy, Desmond, and your head of security seems beyond competent. We are in your house, so we will play by your rules.
However, should there be any lapse in implementing all that is laid out today, a thorough investigation will be carried out. The brain stated. Should the lapse be as a result of your process, the repercussions will be exacting.
Understood. Desmond said while Kennedy and Tara nodded. May we begin?
Indeed. Cobra gestured toward Clarion who, with a snap of his wrist, summoned a soccer ball-sized, amorphous orb of light into the room. This is the core of the ancient Nirvana platform, retrieved by our agents during the events of the Injustice League's public showing. Amongst the forgotten secrets of the now forgotten Nervit lies the key to our next phase, a key that we have now decrypted. The brain stated, as it projected a series of holographic images into the air. The knowledge we obtained from the core maps out the exact process of creating metahumans. If we're to have Vertigo running point on our first metahuman operation, then I feel it would be in our best interest to have at least 2 of our more dedicated associates keeping an eye on him. Tara stated as they pored over the documents the brain had provided. I would suggest Simone and Sportsmaster. I agree with Simone. He can keep an eye on his thoughts and help subdue potentially unruly metas. Sportsmaster, on the other hand, is more problematic. How so? The brain asked. Kennedy looked up from the sheaf of papers he was studying. Lawrence Kroc is one of our best enforcers. He needs to be mobile to best accomplish whatever tasks might come up. On the other hand, he's also one of our best tactical minds and his reputation give him a force of presence few can match. Having him on ground during the initial setup phase ensures that we don't have gaps in the security measures deployed, while his presence alone should be enough of a physical deterrent to keep the old man in line. So, we either tie down one of our best enforcers or we risk leaving Vertigo without sufficient supervision. Desmond frowned. Neither option is preferable as it stands. Another TTLE hiccup here, Clarion drawled. Simone also has to move around to complete tasks for us. Keeping him tied down is not an option either. Kennedy shook his head. That won't be a problem, Lord Clarion. Simone may need to move around, but it won't be nearly as frequently as Sportsmaster. In addition, his telepathic abilities will allow him to discern the details of whatever happened in his absence directly from Vertigo's head. True. What if we compromise a little? Tara asked, eyes narrowed in thought. To fully set up this operation, we will need to move a lot of stuff around. The Entobi * samples, for example. Carry on. Cobra nodded. Okay, so we need to move things around during the setup phase, and then we'll need a liaison between Vertigo, Hugo Strange and Amanda Waller when we finally get things up to the federal level. She reiterated. How about we put Sportsmaster on those jobs? It will allow us to keep Sportsmaster mobile at all times and have him maintain a constant presence at the Bedlam facility. Desmond nodded thoughtfully. And while he can't be the direct link to Waller thanks to his record, he can be on the security team of whoever is chosen to be that link. Well, that certainly ticks all the right boxes. Kennedy agreed. Speaking of which, how sure are we that this Amanda Waller will be willing to even hear us out? And even if she does, what kind of connections does she have? Neither of those will be a problem. The brain stated as it projected a holographic image of the woman in question alongside her credentials. While she currently holds the position of Director of Argus, she serves a secondary role. She is in charge of weapons acquisitions for the United States government. News of every newly developed weapon goes through her to the White House. So she has an official reason to hear us out, and she has the ear of the president. Kennedy summarized. Perfect fit for this job. What's our estimated timeline for getting the first batch of metahumans? Tara asked. Not more than 2 months. Cobra replied. Our projections point to a month, but we have factored in an extra month for revisions and adjustments to the process. What about Strange? Desmond asked. He's our connection to Waller, so his presence is crucial to the plan. Steps have been taken to ensure that he will remain in position until we require him. Excuse me, Director? Dalton Crane's voice crackled over the intercom. Dr. Banerjee is online too. She has information from Project Durzad that she would like to pass across. Thank you, Dalton. The Cadmus director stated as Tara punched the indicated number and the loudspeaker button. Sumitha, you're on with Kennedy, Tara and myself. Good morning, Director. Are the members of the board there too? They are. What's up? Durzad made contact with the Superboy. What? Desmond nearly shot out of his seat before forcibly maintaining his composure. How did this happen, and what effect could it have on our plans going forward? The details are a bit more complicated, but the summary is this. They made contact when the Superboy interfered with the actions of Bruno Mannheim's Intergon. They aren't exactly friends, but they do have an active relationship. Do you have any idea how this affects us going forward? Desmond reiterated. It's unlikely, sir. In fact, I believe this might be of use in the future. You are correct, Banerjee. The brain stated. Ensure that Durzad maintains this relationship with the Superboy. We will communicate this with the rest of the board and give further directives. Understood. Alright, this is getting boring, Clarion yawned. We're done with doling out the instructions, so I'm getting out of here. Tikal. The demon cat meowed and leapt onto its master's shoulders before they vanished in a plume of smoke. Well, that's one way of breaking things up, Cobra stated as he rose. Brain, I take it you can wrap things up here? Yes. Then I will see you later. The cloaked man gestured toward Kennedy and Tara. Markov, boy, walk with me. The two of them shared a quick glance as they moved to catch up with the striding figure of the crimson-cloaked man. I need everything you have on the one known as Maelstrom. Watchtower. When her mother had chosen her to be the ambassador to man's world, Diana had expected a somewhat easy task. The Mistiro was an isolated nation that no one could find, and the Amazons didn't need anything from man's world, so her task should have been a walk in the park. And, to a large extent, it was. The novelty of her appearance had long worn off, and most of the more ambitious nations had come to understand that the Amazons wanted nothing they had to offer, so her days were usually clear, allowing her to serve more often as a member of the Justice League than an ambassador. It was a setup that worked out well for her, as it provided enough time for her to keep up with her training and her little social life.
The only times she wanted more ambassadorial work were the few times when she had to mediate between two or more of her fellow leaguers.
Your habit of naively trusting everyone that wanders into your path is going to get you killed. The world isn't a giant version of Gotham. Bruce, get it through your thick skull that people can actually be good. That is enough. Both of you, she demanded as she strode into the room with a scowl on her face. Neither of those statements were called for, regardless of whatever you might be arguing about. Each man stared at the other, pros and cons of disregarding her interference before breaking off, Bruce with an angry snarl, Clark with a more controlled sigh. Their reactions mirrored their personalities. For all his vaunted control, Bruce could also be quite emotive at times. On the other hand, while typically very passionate, Clark also understood the need for patience. Good to see that you've both calmed down, Diana said with a somewhat relieved sigh. These two possessed some of the most stubborn egos she had ever encountered. After all, now, I came up here expecting to enjoy a bit of solitude before beginning my training. Having to mediate between you two was the last thing I could have expected, but since that's what I had to do, I would appreciate it if someone told me what this was about. Thanks to our great leader, Bruce snapped, his eyes glaring so intensely at Clark that she wondered if he might have lasered the Kryptonian if he could. We have a new member of the Justice League. Again, Clark? The Amazon would have been forgiven for so very dearly wanting to smack her head against a rock. This was not, after all, a first-time occurrence. First icon. Now who did he induct this time? The question was mostly rhetoric, though Bruce answered, Shayera Hole. The Amazon had guessed that it would be the winged woman. While Bruce had argued against simply letting Icon into their ranks a year and a half ago, his argument then had fallen along the lines of them taking the time to better understand the enigmatic hero rather than a decisive stance against him. Back then, she had sided with Clark. This time, though, she was entirely on Bruce's side. Clark, we know nothing of Shayera. We have neither seen her in combat nor do we have an understanding of her motives or her desires. We don't even know if we can trust her. Well, I believe we can trust her, okay, Clark replied, finally speaking up. She was a member of the Thanagarian Civil Defense Corps, a unit of their militia that served pretty much like the police here. She joined up because she wanted to help protect the innocent, just like we do. And your Kryptonian telepathy told you that? Bruce sneered, drawing an annoyed scowl from the Man of Steel. No, she told me that, and I chose to believe her. Bruce's sneer turned into a mocking, patronizing smile. Of course you did. Because you've never been lied to, never been tricked or deceived. She had no reason to lie, Bruce. She's stranded here on a world she knows nothing about. But one whose most common language she speaks fluently. Diana interjected, her tone brooking no argument. Both Jean and Icon are proof that other races in the universe have their own languages and, without taking the time to learn, they face difficulty communicating with us on Earth. Hal's ring acts as a universal translator, and even your cousin has revealed that Krypton had its own unique language. So, Clark, is it not strange that Shayera has been able to communicate with us without so much as a single misstep? Jean might have done something to help her understand us better, he argued weakly. He has done so in the past. That's a reach and you know it. Bruce rejoined before being silenced by Diana's glare. I may not like how he phrased it, but Bruce is right, she said. To begin with, Jean never tampers with a mind beyond what we ask him to. We asked him to scan her thoughts to be sure that she would be alright, not to implant knowledge of our language into her head. That aside, she's on a strange world she's never been to, but she doesn't seem overly bothered by her new surroundings or the fact that she seems to be stranded on said world. Doesn't that seem at least somewhat odd to you? Clark sighed, knowing that they had him there. Okay, maybe something's about her don't quite add up. That's not enough to think that she want to betray us or something. You are correct, Clark, Diana said as she placed a hand on his shoulder. She may not intend to lie to us or betray us in any way. However, Bruce is right as well. We cannot simply accept people we don't truly know into the League. We must be sure of what drives them, what they fight for. Like you were sure of Naruto Uzumaki? The accusation turned the already tense situation nuclear. Diana's hand dropped from the Man of Steel's shoulder as she directed a cold glare at him while Bruce visibly stiffened. Clark. No, Diana. Bruce cut in brusquely, never taking his eyes off the Kryptonian. Let him have his say. You want to hear what I have to say? Fine, Clark snapped. The two of you had no problems allowing a killer to interact with impressionable children, but here you are denying a decent woman a chance to fight with us. Hypocritical much? And look where your decision got us. The Joker is dead and his killer is in the wind. The members of the team are not children, Clark, Diana rejoined harshly. Save Miss Martian, Superboy and Raven, each of them had been involved in crime fighting in one way or the other for at least 6 months prior to joining the team. While not as experienced as we are, they have learned to work together far better than we have. As far as being impressionable goes, not a single one of them is weak-willed, neither are they gullible. They wouldn't simply cave into a new line of thought as you are implying. I placed Uzumaki Naruto on the team in order to keep a close eye on him, Bruce replied with a stony glare. And while he may have killed the Joker, he never once attempted to sway them to his line of thought. Well, I suppose he's a saint then, Clark scoffed. He's not, and I fully intend to bring him in to answer for the Joker's murder. Bruce exhaled tightly. It was somewhat difficult, but he slowly lashed his emotions into place with the supreme iron will he was known for. That being said, my opinion still stands about Share a whole. You're right, Clark. I made a mistake with Uzumaki, one that the Joker had to pay for with his life. So, if nothing else, I think I stand in the best possible position to tell you why simply granting Share a position within our ranks might not be the best choice. Why? If nothing else, she's not a killer. Clark's response was more level, less accusatory, perhaps because Bruce had calmed down. We can get to know her and keep an eye on her if she's one of us. That may be true, Clark, but we can't afford to simply trust blindly, Diana said. Aside from that, the League has its protocols for inducting new members. We can't just turn her away. We won't, Bruce stated. The arm of trust has been extended and there is no point pulling back. However, she will not join us on any missions for at least 3 months. During that time, we will interact with her and observe her actions. I'll work with Dinah to build a psychological profile on her to see if she deserves our trust. We'll discuss the possibility of her joining us on missions after the 3rd month. Clark took a deep breath in and slowly let it out, mollified by the suggestion. I suppose that's fair. And you'll work on an identity for her? I just need to clarify a few things with her first. Bruce nodded before smirking. Your apartment's big enough for 2, right? Yeah. Why? Diana understood what the Dark Knight's words implied much quicker than the Kryptonian and couldn't resist poking fun at him as she turned to leave. Don't worry, I'm sure Lois can explain it to you. Glad to have helped defuse the tense situation she had walked in on earlier, the Amazon strode out of the conference hall with a smile, heading toward the training center and just narrowly missing the Black Canary. Dinah glanced up in time to see the Amazon stride past with a pleased look on her face, a far cry from the stony look she'd had on a few minutes prior. A second glance into the glass-walled conference room showed that the two inside were also less tense. The blonde was happy for that. Whether they realized it or not, those 3 were the core of the League and whatever they felt trickled down to everyone else. However, she hadn't to alcove just to analyze them. She needed to speak to the Bat. Luckily, her target had just stepped out of the room and was now walking toward her with Superman heading someplace else, Dinah. She swiftly fell into step beside him. Good afternoon, Bruce. Good to see you 3 back on more amicable terms. You were listening, you weren't exactly quiet, she shrugged. Plus, you left the door to a soundproof room open. I think that absolves me of any blame here. So how much did you hear? Enough to know that you and Diana will be playing damage control for Clark. She answered as they walked into the elevator where she touched the number 1 on the glowing keypad. I also heard your stance on Naruto. Dinah, Bruce please. She pleaded, trying yet again to get him to see things differently. I know that he broke our code, but at least try to talk to him. Get to understand why he did it. You're asking me to condone murder? No, I'm asking you to not be so gung-ho about this. The elevator dinged and they walked out to the watchtower's reception/assembly point. Less than 150 meters away, the metallic Zeta tube gateway lay dormant. Bruce, Gotham has seen its lowest monthly crime rate in 10 years. The Penguin, Harley Quinn, Black Mask. They've all piped down in the last month. They're preparing for war. Dinah, Bruce fumed. Every single person you just mentioned is mobilizing whoever they can to wage war and gain the slice of Gotham that belonged to the Joker. The Dark Knight's angry outburst took her by surprise. How do you know? I've intercepted 8 shipments of munitions in the past month, Dinah. By my estimates, that only amounts to 2/5 of whatever they ordered for. He clenched his fists and exhaled. I don't think Uzumaki realized it and I have no idea how the news got out, but the death of the Joker has left a vacuum in Gotham's underground and people are ready to spill blood to fill it. Jump City, I'm serious boss. Chloe stated over the phone to a pacing Naruto. Word on the street is that Harley is trying to get her hands on whatever weapons she can to mount a defense of the Joker's turf, and Penguin and Black Mask are doing their damned best to cut her off any supplies. Plus, there's a new player in town. Asterisk. Oh great. So what's this guy's deal? Not a guy, a girl. she replied. And no one's really sure what her deal is, but most think she's going for Joker's stomping grounds. Just like everyone else really. Son of a bitch, he swore. Gotham's about to be ground zero for a bloodbath. Michael's already working on Pamela. He thinks she'll be ready to move in a week. And Paula? No luck, she stated. Honestly, that might have been underselling it. She's been pushing to get herself back to at least some degree of fight readiness. No, we think she might want to join the fight, against what's coming, I mean. Sweet Cammy. She's been in the business long enough to be able to sense these things, boss, and she's a mother. Damn it, how the hell did this happen? He yelled, nearly crushing his phone in his grip. How did the news even get out? I left both head and body on separate sides of the bayou, 6 feet below the deepest points of the swamp. We're not sure yet, none of my contacts have provided any leads. How about Michael? Anything from his end? Nothing. Whoever leaked this is being very careful to ensure that it doesn't track back to them. She responded. What do you want us to do, boss? He remained silent for a long time, trying to figure out what his next steps should be while his guilt-driven anger built until it erupted. I messed up, I forgot to look underneath the underneath. I didn't think of the effect killing the Joker would have on Gotham's criminal underworld. Boss, I get that you're feeling the weight of this, but right now we need to have a plan ready, so I'll ask again. What do we do about this? Naruto inhaled deeply. She was right, of course. He couldn't afford to lock up now, not with a war coming to Gotham. The only way out is through. He muttered to himself before exhaling. Keep an eye on things. Get Michael to let Paula know that he's ready to fight by her side if it comes to that, but he should keep working on getting her to leave Gotham as well. Either way, we're sure that at the very least she won't be going in alone. Understood. Anything else? Yes. Keep your finger to Gotham's pulse. I need to know the location of as many of the weapon caches as possible. You plan on destroying them? Yes. If nothing else, that'll keep these factions busy long enough for me to build up an actual plan. What about the Batman? He's still out for you, isn't he? Considering what he's about to go up against, I think he'll be willing to give me a one-time pass. He stated. If nothing else, I can present the locations of the weapon caches as a peace offering. Let's hope he accepts it, she replied. I'll do as you asked, boss. I should have something in 12 hours. I'm counting on you, Chloe. The conversation ended there, leaving the shinobi to his thoughts. Though he had pulled himself together to give those orders, it was still an immense struggle for him to come to terms with the fact that his actions had inadvertently led to the situation he now found himself in, and, for the first time since the act, he seriously wondered whether or not his action was the right one. It was a difficult question. He knew that the Joker deserved death. His swift glimpse through the man's mind had left no room for doubt on that matter. However, faced with the present reality of having Gotham become ground zero for a massive interfaction war for criminal expansion and control, things seemed a lot less clear. The situation brought up an old memory of his world, the time he had spent playing shogi with one of the most brilliant minds he had ever known. Honestly, Naruto, I can't understand why you're so hung up on being the Hokage. Shikamaru drawled as he shifted a shogi piece to counter his friend's move. Your move. The blonde eyed the board closely, trying to keep track of the 16 different plans he knew Shikamaru had set up while trying to outmaneuver the Nara. Being the Hokage is my dream, Shika, you know that. I do. I just can't see the appeal. The Nara sighed and laid back on the roof, enjoying the sight of the roiling clouds. It's not an easy job, you know? Ha, of course you'd say that. Getting out of bed for you is difficult enough. Har. Idiot. Nothing was said for a time until Naruto played and called for his attention, forcing him to sit up. Naruto, what's the most important duty of the Hokage? Protecting his people. The response was immediate. After all, it was something the blonde had thought over repeatedly, and the answer was absolutely spot on. The Hokage was the will of fire distilled and crystallized in human form. The Hokage was the flame that encircled the village, protecting and providing for those within and defending and consuming those that would threaten his people. You're right. Shikamaru made his move and called out as was their tradition. So, do you think that's an easy job? Of course it isn't. Being at the top means I'll have to take decisions that could make or break the village. My point exactly. Shikamaru swatted at a fly that buzzed too close to his face as the blonde played. Making those decisions is a lot more complex than you can imagine. For example, if this shogi board was a village, then you just killed it. A single move. That was all it took for the Nara genius to transition from the plans Naruto had foreseen to a completely different approach that ended the game. What how? On your third play, you chose to pick out a seemingly loose general of mine, the Nara explained. You didn't realize it that doing so left you overextended. I just chose to pretend like I didn't know so you'd widen the crack in your armor. It was such a simple tactic. Allow your opponent to slip up easing themselves further and further until they were in too deep and then casually deliver the killing blow. I'm never going to beat you, am I? Probably not. There was no need for false modesty between friends after all. But back to my point, Being the Hokage is like playing a million games of shogi against a million opponents simultaneously. Every decision is crucial because you never know which one's going to leave you open. The blonde slapped his hands over his face and groaned. You suck, you know that right, Shika? Talk about a buzzkill man. Oh relax. Shikamaru smiled as he dropped back onto the roof to watch the clouds. Why do you think I'm working toward becoming the next Jonin commander? If I left your stupid ass to do all the work, we'd have you bearing down on us in a week. Hey, I'm sure I could last at least a month before plunging us into a war. Plus, I'm sure you'd consider it too troublesome to even bother with. Though he had started with a scowl, the blonde ended his comment with barely restrained laughter. They both knew he wasn't anywhere near that bad, but what were friends for if they couldn't taunt each other? Gods, he missed that lazy bastard. For all that he had created his homunculi replica to act like his old friend, Naruto knew that the copy could never truly match up to the original. His version could only try to act like the original, and while it had worked quite well, the current situation left him longing for the Nara he had grown up with. Still, he couldn't afford to sink into a melancholic state of mind, not with Gotham teetering on the edge. As such, the blonde got up and walked around his table to the center of the study. The room was kept as bare as possible, having only the table, 3 chairs and a full-length bookshelf along a wall, so he was able to situate himself in the center of the study in mere moments. Taking a deep breath in, the blonde sat in the ancient meditative position the toads had taught him and allowed nature to flow through him, granting him a peace that few could ever understand. The voices of this world whispered, shouted, charmed and pleaded, but he silenced them all in a heartbeat. He needed to concentrate. In the Elseworlds The Golden Age miniseries, Sportsmaster seems to care for his daughter enough to commit crimes so he can see her again. He also dies trying to save a child. In this FIC, there is just the slightest hint that he actually gives a shit about his daughters beyond their impact on his representative, and the conversation between himself and Jade subtly reflects that. The only people that know that the Cadmus board is the same as the light are Desmond, Tara, Double-X, Sumitha and Dalton. Kennedy doesn't know because they don't trust him with the knowledge yet, and the same applies for everyone else in the labs. For anyone in New York, I know that word is now defunct. I just decided to use that as Leslie's station. Yes. The brain in YJ canon sounds like the stereotypical French villain. And I'm doing away with that in this FIC. For a literal brain stuck inside a high-tech garbage bin. The design always struck me as such. I think a flat, mechanical tone utterly devoid of any accents or inflections would be more fitting. Remember that giant starfish thing that Black Manta wrecked Atlantis for? Y'all didn't think the fallout from the Joker's death would end within the League, did you? Alright, here's chapter 25. Expanding on a few things. Hawkgirl isn't getting a free pass into the League, while setting up some others. Unfortunately, things in my country have taken a truly barbaric turn, so I can't exactly celebrate this chapter. Who'd have thought a simple protest to end police brutality would end in youths losing their lives? And by the bloody army? For fuck's sake. I was there. The Lekki protests were almost like a community gathering just with a focus on peacefully getting results, and they shot at us. So, yeah, this is me signing out. Later people. The Ethereal Lord. Pat Ree on the Ethereal Lord. Remember to remove the spaces please. P.S. I'm working on a new FIC with a fellow author, Mr. War. It's a watching type FIC involving the Young Justice cast going through the Marvel Infinity Saga, and is kind of a spiritual successor to Firestorm 808's Young Justice Watches Death Battle FIC. It's titled The Watchers MCU and is up now. Please let me read through it and let us know what you think. Gotham, hello sister dear. Jade smirked as she sat on the rooftop beside the blonde. Miss me? Like an annoying zit. Artemis retorted. Her voice lacked any heat, though, which would have been somewhat unusual even a month ago. But things had changed between the sisters. Keeping an eye on their mother and her new friend had forced them to spend time together, and they had burned through most of their shared animosity within the first 2 weeks. Now, they weren't quite comfortable in each other's presence, but they certainly had no urges to rip the other's throat out. So, anything new going on down there? Not particularly. Artemis shrugged, most of her attention on the house opposite them. Inside, her mother stood beside a younger man, both of them working their way through the dirty dinner dishes. They had dinner and now they're doing the dishes. Okay, this little romance is getting boring, Jade said, rolling her eyes as she laid back on the roof, training her eyes on the cloudless sky. I'm beginning to think I should just abandon this oversight committee of ours. Doors wide open, sis. Ah, and here I thought we were getting closer. We are. Artemis agreed, which is why I'm waiting for the other boot to drop. It was a sobering comment, one that had the dark-haired assassin recalling Sportsmaster's words from earlier in the day. We're just the model 21st century family, aren't we? Neither sister said anything for a while. Artemis' focus was on her mother and the strange young man she had never heard a word about, while Jade's thoughts were more fluid, shifting from topic to topic at random. So, how are things with Justice League Jr.? Any juicy bits of gossip to share with your loving older sister? Only if said sister would tell me why she's got sleep bags beneath her eyes. The blonde rejoined casually. What, taken one too many contracts recently? I wish. I mean, who'd have thought taking odd jobs on the side would be more difficult than going after a mark? Artemis wrinkled her nose in mild disgust. Please keep the sordid details to yourself. I'd rather not be an accomplice. Ah, well you're no fun. Mystery man's about to leave, she reported as she stretched languidly. Which means I should get going myself. Can you wait for a bit? Jade asked hesitantly, her tone quiet. I would like to talk to you. Artemis' first reaction was to shoot off a snide remark when she caught sight of her sister's face. Her sister was afraid. One of the first lessons their father had taught them, and one that Artemis had to an extent failed to truly live up to. Fear was weakness, and weakness was never tolerated in a croc. Jade, however, had always been the perfect croc. Tough as nails, always keeping her problems to herself and, above all, never fearing anything. As such, she was understandably jarred to witness such raw fear on her sister's face. Jade? What's wrong? Nothing was said for the first few moments as the dark-haired assassin fought to gather her thoughts, her father's words pinging around insistently in her head. It's easier to carry on when you have an outlet. Shouldering this hadn't helped a bit, and though she'd gladly fall on her side before admitting it, there was no one she trusted more than Artemis. And so, she told her sister of the man that plagued her dreams. The man with the strange eyes. Wilesia, Telanditile system. The things I do for the master. Desaad scowled as he walked into yet another dingy bar on the swampy planet, casually sidestepping a brawling duo as the other patrons of the establishment cheered on wildly. There were so many other things he could be doing, so many incomplete projects with a slew of new ones that he hadn't even begun yet. So much to do, yet the master had forced him onto what amounted to running an errand. A bottle of some borderline acidic alcohol whizzed past his deformed face as he walked up to the bar, judging by the sound. It had gone on to smash into another Patron's skull, followed by the crude utterances of hyper-aggressive, drunken fools. The god scientist scowled and turned to the walking tree manning the bar. Is it always like this? You must not be a local to be asking that. The Wilesian replied, its deep, rumbling words coming out in 4-syllable bursts as was its species trait when speaking basic. Night's not done till someone's dying. Let's see if it's not something in the local piss. He grunted, hating himself for having to descend to this barbaric level. The largest measure of the strongest swill you have. The Wilesian let loose a low, thrumming sound that rattled the glass around for a few seconds, a sign Desaad knew to mean that the tree was laughing. I'm afraid, I can't do that, he's already beaten you dead. Desaad turned toward the spot the Wilesian had indicated and, for the first time since the accursed task had been assigned, sighed in relief. He had found the target. Do you want to change your order now? The god scientist wondered briefly what the average Wilesian's pain threshold was. A predatory smile twisting his broken visage into something truly horrific. What do you think? The Wilesian released another hum, this time sounding almost reedy as a primal fear overtook it, long-forgotten instincts demanding that it flee the presence of this monster. It had faced down some of the most dangerous beings in the universe and had always remained secure in the knowledge that its status as one of the most informed denizens of the underworld would keep it secure. The robed, scarred figure that hobbled away from its bar had, with little more than a slight imposition of its presence, shown it just how little security that was. Desaad had already forgotten about the creature it had just traumatized, his attention locked firmly on the being lounging in the dark corner of the bar. Legs crossed on the table while a thick cigar despoiled the air with its acrid purple smoke. He stopped just outside the cloud of smoke and stared at the Zarnian, easily recognizing the famed bounty hunter's dark looks and wild mane. Keep staring at the main man like that and he might be tempted to use Ya for target practice. The bounty hunter's harsh tone rang clearly over the sounds of chaos that filled the bar. Ya, either step up or keep your wrinkled eyes to herself. Surely you can be civilized in the presence of a client. The god of torture snapped back, unconcerned by the broody scowl he received in return. I have a job for you. The least you can do is not ruin an old man's lungs. And if I snap an annoying old man's back? The god scientist simply flicked a data chit at the Zarnian, who snatched it out of the air and placed it onto his wristband's Omni sensor. A second later, his dark red eyes glanced at the scarred scientist. 20 mil just ta head ta the system. Ya must really want someone dead.
Not dead. Desaad corrected, knowing that he now had the bounty hunter's attention. The full details are on a separate data chit, but here's the important part. You will head to the designated planet, isolate the target and fight him. You will throw everything you have at him until I activate a recall transponder that you will have on you during the fight, after which the job will be deemed complete and you'll get your pay.
The Zarnian snorted. Again, sounds like you want this guy dead. Nothing survives the main man when he goes all out. We'll see, he replied simply, and the bounty hunter narrowed his eyes. The single catch to this, as you are about to ask, is simple. I record everything that happens during your fight. The Zarnian swung his boots onto the ground with a heavy thud that silenced all fights in the bar and rose to his imposing height of 6 feet 4 inches, his wild mane of dreadlocked hair swinging. Alright, you've got my attention. Where's the party at? Earth. Hey, y'all must be feeding your lil Earth spawn something good for domain man ta have 2 jobs on the same planet. Ignoring the way his client's eyes narrowed, the bounty hunter grabbed his booze and chugged it down in one go before chucking the mug at the Wylesian bartender. Put it on my tab, Terry. I'm going huntin'. Maybe I'll pay ya out of what I save on fuel. Knowing that his task was complete, Desaad pondered over the bit of information the bounty hunter had unknowingly or knowingly. One was never sure with the wildly irreverent types let slip. A second target on Earth? Who would hire him? And who could be the target? Gotham, this doesn't make any sense. The Dark Knight muttered yet again as he pored over the live satellite feed projected through his gauntlet, his dark form blending seamlessly into the shadowy alcove between the containers facing the harbor. Sionis would never do this. Master Bruce, you said that quite a number of times this evening. I don't see how that changes things. Maybe saying it over and over won't change anything, but it will remind us to keep our eyes open for any oddities. Robin suggested from his lookout, overseeing the southeast quadrant of the port of Camden Green. Batman's right. Black Mask is territorial and stingy as all hell. He's always looking for ways to cut down on his operation costs, so bringing in a shipment of weapons through a port on a rival's turf? And Cobblepot's turf? Way out of character for him? Be that as it may, Master, the source of this information is as close to 100% verified considering that it came from Roman Sionis's personal computer. Which is why Robin and I are here. Batman replied as he shut off the projector and switched his cowl viewfinder to infrared. The logs from his computer put the ship's ETA at 9:45, which means whatever's going to happen will begin in about 15 minutes. Ever the consummate professional, Alfred instantly understood his charges in spoken words. Radio silence it is, Master Bruce. I'll let you know if anything of notice comes up. The Dark Knight was just about to silence the two-way between himself and the Batcave when his nagging intuition flared up again. Retask SATA 6 and A9 to monitor Port Landell and Duran Harbor respectively. I know it's a little late, but if it will get you to rest easier, sir, then it is no problem. Thank you, he said, before silencing the connection to the Batcave. Robin, anything new? Nothing's changed, came the quick reply from his protege. Harley's band of leftovers are still prepping for their ambush. Which is yet another thing about this that doesn't add up. The Dark Knight frowned beneath his cowl. I only found out about this thanks to my Trojan picking up the shipping manifest yesterday, and the timestamp on the mail showed that it was a new delivery. So how the hell did Harley pick it up? Or, more accurately, how come only Harley picked it up and none of the others did? He was snapped out of his thoughts by his protege's voice over the comms. What happened to get things so messed up? And the question had the older man pressing his lips into a thin line, wondering whether or not to answer him. In the end, he decided that his protege deserved to know. The Joker's dead, Robin, leaving a vacuum in Gotham's criminal underworld. What you're seeing now is the result of nature trying to fill that vacuum. But with the Joker dead, you thought everything would simply become perfect, hold back the disdainful sneer, though he tried to. Is that what Uzumaki has been telling you? He hasn't told us anything, Robin rejoined harshly, and his mentor wondered why the normally calm boy seemed so incensed. None of us have heard a word from him since you and the League ran him off. He killed someone. The anger in his tone was audible even over the comms, though his tone remained even. We want him found and brought to justice. Well then, we shouldn't worry then. All he needs to do is claim insanity, wait in Arkham, and either Bane or Cobblepot will break him out sooner rather than later. It was a cutting statement, underhanded but somewhat true nonetheless. It didn't matter to the Dark Knight at that moment. All he saw was proof that solidified the fear that had worried away at his heart from the moment they had heard about the Joker's death. That Uzumaki's presence on the team had, in some way or the other, altered their young protege's ways of thinking. Clark was right. Putting a killer on the team was. Master Bruce, an emergency alert was just raised by a cruiser on patrol at Duran Harbor. Alfred's calm but urgent voice sliced past those thoughts in an instant, and the Dark Knight shifted back into full gear. Something about a firefight of some sort aboard a boat. Arrival or departure? Arrival, more likely. That's it, B. It's gotta be, Robin added. Should I follow or? No, I'll head over to Duran. He replied, already racing toward the cloaked batplane, a single tap on a section of his belt sending the plane into standby. Keep an eye on whatever's going on here. I'll inform Gordon of your position and have him send reinforcements. Anything happens, let me know. Got it. His protege's sharp response came just as he jumped into the plane, and, a few seconds later, he was on a direct path to the harbor. Alfred, what do you have on the satellite feeds? I've reversed the recordings. The feed should be showing on your screen now. The Dark Knight turned to the monitor on his left and watched the feed playback. Alfred, what are those two streaks? I'm uncertain, Master Bruce. Analysis shows that they were moving at over 300 miles per hour. I initially thought they might be speedsters, but the energy signature doesn't match any recorded form of speedster energy. When was this? 10 minutes ago. They boarded a ship 3.2 nautical miles off the coastline. And the police report? Not 2 minutes ago. Alfred, I need confirmation that they are still on that ship. He demanded as he pushed the plane harder. He wasn't certain, but he had a gut feeling that Uzumaki had something to do with whatever was happening on that boat. What do you have on infrared? They aren't giving off any heat signatures, Master Bruce. However, the motion paths of their energy signatures puts them both on the ship. One on the top deck while the other is making their way up from the bottom level. And the ship's crew? More than 85 heat signatures are still, sir, while the other 60 or so members seem to be moving toward either the top or bottom levels. Which gives me less than 6 minutes to catch up to them, he thought grimly. Gotham 40 minutes ago. Pamela Isley generally wasn't the kind of person who paced. She considered herself a highly efficient individual who had no time for wasted movements, activities or thoughts, and pacing was for those with excess energy to burn. Whenever she was agitated, and those were few and far between themselves, she preferred to sit still and mull over whatever it was that bothered her. You'll wear a line through the tiles if you keep up with that pacing, Pam. Michael smirked at the redhead from the couch he lounged on and ignored the poisonous glare she shot at him before she kept on pacing the length of the room. If you're so bothered by this request you have, why not just have me pass it on? One would think that upwards of a month in close proximity would have taught you a thing or two about me. It took all her will to effect a lazy drawl as opposed to a cutting response, but she was able to manage it. I prefer to talk to the boss, not the lackeys. You know, Michael, on the other hand, couldn't hide the shit-eating grin on his face if he tried. Which he didn't. I'd actually have felt that one if you weren't, still, pacing. The kinda sorta probably reformed eco-terrorist flat out huffed in annoyance and all but swore at her feet when she realized that nope, they still kept on pacing. Wanting to change the topic, she said, so when's your goddamned boss getting here anyway? He was kinda sketchy on the exact time, but he should be here soon. I thought you said that the barge was supposed to. A brilliant flash blinded her mid-sentence, forcing her to stop and blink out the spots from her vision. What the hell was that? Oh, that's just the boss showing up. The pseudo-human sent a lazy grin at his creator. I see her in the new threads we designed. They aren't bad. Naruto smiled as he bumped knuckles with the other blonde. The modified trench coat's a nice touch. That was all Shiho. Michael admitted. I worked on the seals while Chloe had the base outfit designs drawn up. Next time you want to let off a 1,000,000-watt light bulb, will you please call ahead? Pamela groused as she turned to the new arrivals. For God's sake, you're using my house as a staging area. The least you could do is not blind me. With her sight now clear, she could see that her warden was right. His boss had a new wardrobe. Gone were the dark pants and long-sleeved turtlenecks with armor plating. Now he wore a black bodysuit that stretched from his neck to his ankles, the lower half plain while the section from his waist to just below his clavicle had faint, burnt orange outlines that drew the eye to his impressive physique. Over that, he wore a dark orange coat jacket hybrid that clung to his arms from his wrists up to his shoulders where the material was pulled away from his chest, leaving the aforementioned bodysuit visible before flaring out from his waist downward, the hem adorned with black, flame-like motifs. Though she couldn't see it yet, the back of the jacket bore a unique, black tribal spiral just between his shoulder blades. The symbol repeated on the silver buckle of the belt he had strapped on. Aside the main clothing articles, he wore dark gray boots and black gloves that altogether added to the sheer aura of badassery that she would never admit that he projected. Choosing not to comment on her scrutinizing gaze, Naruto helped her over to the couch beside Michael. Kagaya is already at Duran and Corey's heading over to Camden Green now, so I need to know why. I thought you said that the shipment would be arriving through Duran, Pamela asked, a confused frown etched onto her forehead. So what's this about Camden? Michael exchanged a glance with his creator, a silent conversation carried out in that instant, before sighing. I'll make myself scarce. Thanks. Naruto nodded as the older-looking blonde walked away. Though he bore no secrets between himself and his homunculi, he nonetheless opted to deal with this one-on-one with Pamela. Did he tell you how we learned of the shipment at Duran? The question brought a frown to the redhead's face. No, he just told me that you were preparing to hit one of Black Mosque's ships, nothing more. The blonde-turned black-haired shinobi nodded. Sometime between the last cargo load of ammunition Batman intercepted and the 3 we stopped last week, Sionis got smart. He changed things up and had one of his most trusted underlings working to set up a deal between his crew and the Bratva. It took a number of back and forths and never through Sionis's usual channels, but they came to an agreement. Guns for cash and a slice of the Joker's territory when he gets it. I thought you said this never went through the usual channels? A baffled Pamela asked. How the hell do you know all this? My people are good at lied with a dismissive gesture. The point is that Nariz Sionis's guy set up the deal and sent confirmation 5 days ago that the shipment would be coming in today. So what's that got to do with the Camden Green port? That's Cobblepot's turf, not Roman's. Well, it turns out that Roman Sionis is a cunning bastard. He knows how much the Penguin hates the Joker and especially Harley, so 4 days ago, he waltzed into the Iceberg Lounge with a proposition. Sionis leaks information to Harley that he's got a shipment coming in through Camden Green. Harley's getting pretty desperate without the Joker's representative opening doors, and her crew have been whittled down to the clown's most extreme loyalists. They'll ambush her. Once again, it took considerable willpower for her to mask her emotions lest they bleed through her voice. Because she's desperate, she has no choice but to try to ambush the false shipment without realizing that she's being played. Exactly. Naruto exhaled. Sionis manipulated Cobblepot into sending a considerable number of his men on this job. Done right, Harley gets wiped out. Cobblepot loses a decent chunk of his manpower, forcing him to pull out of this turf war, and Sionis ends up being owed a favor by the Penguin for the opportunity to wipe out the last of the Joker's crew. Loath as he was to admit it, even to himself, Naruto knew that it was a shrewd play by the Black Mask. Whether Harley lost or somehow managed to wiggle her way out of there, she'd be a non-factor after the ambush, and since he had sent enough men as well, he would easily fool the Penguin into believing what he wanted. He's a cunning bastard, but... You plan on interfering, right? The shinobi paused and stared at her piercingly, trying to figure out what she wanted. Her emotions were carefully guarded so that reading her felt like watching a tranquil lake, and he couldn't sense a hint of falsehood around her. I have people in place, yes. Good. I want Harley. He couldn't help but arch an eyebrow at her simple demand. Sure, you can see her in. For the second time in as many minutes, she cut him off. I want Harley. Alive, unmaimed and conscious. In exchange, I'll teach you everything I have learned about the green. She's not lying, he thought as he focused on all that he was getting from her. Her emotions remained as calm as before, even after he probed a little deeper. She's ready to make that exchange. It was a tempting offer, it really was. However, one of the key things Anko and Ibiki had taught him about making trades was the power of leverage. The one who had it held all the cards and could make the other dance to their tune. In this case, it went both ways. He had the power to deliver Harley to her, and she had the information he desired, making them evenly matched at least at first glance. The truth, however, was not quite as clear-cut as it seemed. While he had Harley, he didn't know how valuable she was to Pamela. It was possible that Harley possessed something that increased her value to Pamela far more than the knowledge he desired was actually worth, which would mean that, in the long run, he'd actually be the loser of their trade. In fact, the longer he thought it over, the more likely it seemed. After all, why else would Pamela offer him exactly what he wanted if not that she'd be getting something either equal to or greater than what he'd be getting? What he needed, he decided, was more information. Why do you want her? Pamela, however, was no stranger to the information game. She has managed to piss off just about every major player in Gotham. Why do you think I want her? It was a simple response that both answered his question yet did nothing to help him ascertain exactly how much Harley was worth. Looks like you've got a point, he admitted, getting her to smile victoriously before he countered with another question. Let's try that again, shall we? What do you want with her? Bargaining power. The redhead responded with a lazy roll of her eyes. If something happens to you and I get tossed out to the cold Gotham streets, I'd like to have something to keep me from getting turned to an attraction at the lounge. She sauntered over to a bar stool and took a seat at the little island that separated the kitchenette from her living room. I present Harley to Cobblepot, get him to feed her to old Brutus in the basement, and voila! A nice place to lay my weary head. And pissing off Sionis, the slight upturn of her lips transformed her from casually beautiful to seductively enchanting, and the shinobi just knew that she had reeled in more than one poor sap with that exact look. Honey, that's just the bonus. It was a decent line of thought, somewhat callous but perfectly in line with what he had come to expect from her, and completely false. She was good, he would readily admit that. Were it not for his empathic abilities that helped him detect lies and falsehoods, he would never have seen through her ruse. But he had those abilities and he had seen through her ruse. The tranquil lake of her emotions had spiked when she first referred to Harley as a bargaining chip, and again when she had talked about having the blonde fed to the Penguin's great white. You care about her, don't you? He mused as he watched her exercise the little degree of control he had released to her to have a vine deliver a chilled bottle of wine from the fridge. You care enough to want to get her out of trouble, but not quite enough to admit it to anyone. Armed with the knowledge he now had, he thought over what to do before her prodding, well, galvanized his thoughts. No. Whatever else she was expecting, a flat-out negative response was the last thing on her mind if the way she froze was any indication. I didn't think you'd shy away from such a simple request. Trying to play on my ego, Well, let's flip the table, shall we? My problem isn't with the request, it's with the payment. You were the one requesting for help understanding the green, weren't you? I was. He admitted freely, a cleverly spun lie waiting to be presented. The problem here is this. I don't need your help anymore. What? It's true, he continued as he walked over and took she wine out of her suddenly frozen fingers. When you chose not to teach me, though, I decided to go above you, so to speak. It took less than a second for her to come to the conclusion he wanted, as proven by the way her hands suddenly clenched into fists. He could have left it there, but his lessons with the heads of T and I back home had included a little anecdote about pressing one's advantage. I spoke to Yggdrasil, had him present me before the Council of the Green. I'm not close to your level yet, but, for the final nail in the coffin, he channeled a bit of wood-styled chakra through the polished wooden surface of the island, and a little green sprig crept its way up until a glistening white bud swelled, a moment or two away from bursting open. If her abilities weren't hampered by his seal, his bluff would never have worked. She'd have sensed that he wasn't using the green to bring that little bud to life, and that would have put the power firmly on her end of the table. As it was now, she was finished, and they both knew it. Now that he held all the cards, though, Naruto knew that it was time to reel her in. Taking a seat opposite her, he reached out and placed hand on hers. Why were you willing to go so far for her? He wasn't sure why her emotions were so pronounced all of a sudden, maybe because I'm touching her directly? But he felt as though he was completely submerged in her heart. Her reluctance to tell him what he wanted to know, her fear that things would change between them, her longing for her friend, and it took considerable willpower for him to tear himself away from the simmering pot of emotions that almost consumed him without withdrawing from her physically. It's not the contact, he noted absently as he regained his mental equilibrium. She just let down her mental walls. Oblivious to woe sight her had just gone through, Pamela drew in a deep breath before speaking. A few years back, Gotham held one of its ridiculous support the wildlife galas. I saw it as a chance to get my hands on a few items I needed. The problem was that I needed distraction. As luck would have it, I discovered that the Joker was stuck behind bars and his little blonde pet was left in the lurch. It seemed like the perfect chance to do what I needed and have the ultimate fall girl, so I approached her with my proposition. The lake representing her emotions gradually leveled out and Naruto felt the pressure ease off. I could go on talking about that first meeting, but the point is simple. The crazy, smash-a-head, Harley is the Joker's doing. He twisted her sense of self, made her so dependent on him that even the mention of his name had her pining like a fucking puppy. He could feel her anger building, the pressure returning to his senses even as he noted the sudden agitation of the plants in the room. Whenever he was locked up, she was almost sane. She was a genius at understanding the human mind. You know, she was a few steps away from being an Olympic-level gymnast before she chose to further her studies over her potential career. She wanted to help people with unbalanced minds. Instead, that piece of shit. He didn't flinch as the plants in the room lashed out, smashing the many pieces of furniture in the room to so much kindling. He was too focused on the rage she radiated like heat from an inferno. There was no falsehood here, no deception. She truly hated what the Joker had done to the blonde villain. Except she's not really a villain, is she? He thought as he felt the redhead's struggles to rein in the anger that threatened to consume her. Between what she told me about how Dr. Quinzel became Harley Quinn and what I'm feeling now, there's next to no possibility that this is some elaborate ruse, which means that while Harley is guilty of committing those crimes, the root cause of all this is the Joker. He was grateful for the greater degree of emotional control he had compared to his youthful days, otherwise Gotham would have had a bigger problem than a pissed-off poison ivy to deal with. So what do you want to do now? The question was enough to divert her attention from the former topic and, after a moment to get her thoughts in order, she spoke in a soft, nostalgic voice. In her lucid moments, Harley taught me quite a bit about the human mind and how it works. She always said that no one was truly insane, that their minds were just unbalanced and, with understanding and care, one could help them regain their sanity by helping them find the balance again. Here, her tone hardened, emerald eyes glittering with intense determination. I want to do that for her, help her regain her balance and give her the same thing you're offering. A chance to be more than she used to be. Noting the look he directed at her, she continued. Your lackey Michael told me that you were considering ways to reintroduce me to the public without the whole poison ivy thing hanging over my head. I want that for Harley too. For the first time since her initial admission, he sat back, creating a bit of distance between them, though he made sure his hand remained on hers. That's not going to be easy. Unlike you, Harley's erratic. Because of the Joker, regardless, he cut off her protest, she isn't exactly stable, and I know that, on some level, you know exactly what I mean by that. He paused for her to contest that, but when she remained silent, he continued, how do you expect to keep her in line? She doesn't need to be kept in line, she's not a criminal. She's currently engaged in a turf war with 3 rival gangs. And the Joker excuse would hardly hold up now that he's dead. He rejoined dispassionately. He understood that she wanted to protect her friend, but he needed her to understand that the possibility always existed that said friend was too far gone to be saved. He only needed to look at the relationship between his godfather and Orochimaru to remember that himself. Whether you want to admit it or not, there's always a chance that the Harley you saw glimpses of is too far buried beneath the Joker's manipulations. So what are you going to do if that's true? But she yanked her hand away from his and balled it up into a fist, the plants around shifting almost nervously. I can't. He was about to speak when he felt a mild tug on his chakra. A moment of concentration, and he knew that it was Kaguya's way of reminding him that other things were already in motion and he needed to go. Standing, he reached out and placed a hand on her shoulder. Think it over, Pamela. I'll need your answer when I get back. And, Harley? I'll need a satisfactory response first. It was a cagey response, one that put all the power in his hands. Harley would be safe, yes, but even if she did provide the response he wanted, there was still a chance that he wouldn't agree to handing the blonde over. Fine. Though she knew that she wouldn't be getting a better offer, the words tasted like ash in her mouth. He nodded before vanishing in a burst of golden light. Duran Harbor. 20 minutes ago, Duran Harbor was the oldest port in Gotham, having been around since the Second World War. It had grown, expanding from its humble beginnings as a simple fishing community's efforts but never quite becoming the ever-busy madhouse that was the port of Camden Green. Instead, it catered, more commonly, to fishing trawlers, public transports and privately owned vessels whose cargo weren't quite as valuable as those heading to Camden. All in all, it was something of a quiet place whose biggest attraction was its lighthouse.
It was upon that very lighthouse that Naruto appeared, crouching beside Kagaya well before the light of the horizon had even begun to dim in Pamela's bunker.
The white-haired princess didn't even flinch at his reappearance. You took longer than expected. Ah, is my Tasuki Haim-chan getting jealous of the seductive, mature redhead? He smirked as he crouched beside her, keeping as much of his silhouette hidden by the tower's archaic roof spire. He may have capitalized on the lighthouse's light overpowering the flash of his teleportation, but there was no need to go about tempting fate. You know I only have eyes for ramen? Kagaya rejoined with a smirk of her own as she scanned the waters for Black Mosque's barge. Like her partner, she had opted for a wardrobe change, though hers wasn't quite as radical as his. She had ditched the metal plating of the anbu gear they had initially used but kept the long-sleeved, skin-tight black bodysuit that stretched from her ankles to her neck. Around her waist she wore a mid-thigh length black skirt with flared ends and two brown belts, one wider than the other, were wrapped about her waist. Both slanted at angles to form an X over all this. She had a gray haori resting on her shoulders, a jagged, white sliver embossed on the back. One of these days, your ramen will forsake you. You realize that, yes? Never. We were joined in broth and are bonded by the noodles of destiny. None can break our love. He cried dramatically, though his voice was low enough to be masked by the sounds of a busy Gotham night. I am dating an idiot. Kagaya sighed with an amused smile. Mother would be horrified. I'm sure I could win her over, he replied with a confident grin. I won you over, didn't I? He counted the ensuing silence and dusting of pink on her cheeks as a win for himself. Unfortunately, they had a job to do and so there wasn't much time to keep poking fun at her. Pamela wants us to keep Harley alive. She thinks she can help Harley break past whatever the Joker did.
Though she would not profess to knowing everything about her blonde boyfriend, and that was something she was still getting used to. Having a boyfriend, Kagaya had learned quite a bit about him, and so she knew that he wanted her opinion of what he had just said. P gone from playful teasing to mission mode.
It took a few moments for her to review all that she knew of Harley Quinn, her past as Dr. Quinzel, her crimes as Harley, before considering whether or not Pamela's thoughts on Harley's possible sanity were worth pursuing. What makes her believe Harley isn't simply too far gone? They've worked together in the past, multiple times, in fact. According to her, Pamela initially intended to simply use Harley for her own gain, but over time she claims to have seen hints of the woman Harley could be without the Joker's influence on her life. It wouldn't be a return to the Dr. Quinzel of old, but she believes it would be a damned sight better than what we've got right now. Something about how he responded, the slight hesitance, perhaps, or the guarded tone drew her attention and, after taking a few moments to puzzle out what those meant, she came to a conclusion. There's something you're not telling me. She didn't need a verbal confirmation. The barely perceptible spike in his chakra was proof enough. Naruto, I need to know whatever it is so I can. I think she loves Harley. The blurted response was so far out of the myriad other possibilities she had considered that the ex-goddess was struck mute. Luckily, Naruto didn't notice that. For all that he had matured as an individual, he was still somewhat stunted in the area of dealing with emotions, whether they were his or not, and so tended to revert to an old childhood quirk when forced to face his emotions. He rambled. I mean, I'm not sure if she realizes it. I was mostly carried along for the ride when her guard dropped and I felt the full force of her emotions, but I could definitely tell that she cares strongly for Harley and she'd go out of her way to protect her. I think she thinks it's just a strong sibling-type bond, and there are elements of that there, but I'm also pretty sure that Pamela really does love Harley in a romantic way. Of course, she's probably suppressed those feelings for so long that because she's afraid the wrong person would make that connection and use it against her, that now that she might be able to express those feelings she doesn't. Naruto. Breathe. She reinforced her gentle command by locking her hand around his and squeezing softly as he obeyed. For a few moments, the top of the lighthouse remained quiet save the occasional whisper of the salty night breeze as it blew past. Kagaya took that time to regain her mental balance, having lost it when he had blurted out his answer to her question. Pamela loves Harley. A woman in love with another woman. Taboo. Forbidden. Punishable by death. That was what she had been raised to believe in her youth, a truth that was as immutable as the rising of the sun. She had, on some level, known that the traditions that she had long accepted would hold little to no sway now. She was, after all, Millennia passed her time and on a different world to boot, yet the idea that two women could be in love was still enough to casually brush aside her mental footing. The matter of Corey's kiss had been tossed aside quite easily as an alien quirk when the girl had told them about her people's ability to learn languages through such methods, but there was no such quirk to hide behind now. I can come to terms with my traditional hang-ups later. We're in the middle of a mission and Naruto needs my opinion. She knew that pushing it aside wasn't healthy, but logic dictated that such dissections could come later, so, without taking her eyes off the horizon, she replied, "As much as I want to believe that Pamela really is concerned about Harley, you must keep in mind that she is a criminal herself. Having admitted that she has worked with Harley in the past, is it possible that this is some scheme to help her get out of her pseudo-prison?" He finished before shaking his head. When her guard came down, I was inundated by her emotions. Heck, for a few seconds, I nearly lost myself in her. There wasn't a hint of deception in her. Could she have used the deluge of emotions to hide something from you? That's assuming she even knew I could sense her emotions. We had to consider every possibility. She rejoined simply, knowing that he would acquiesce. It was why they brought ideas to each other, after all. The other person would force you to face those little possibilities that hid in your blind spots. As she had expected, he sighed and said, "It's not impossible that she weaponized her emotions. Extremely unlikely." He shot a pointed look at her which she promptly ignored, "but possible. Which means bringing Harley in close proximity to Pamela for an extended period or even short periods but at frequent intervals creates a possible flight risk for both of them." The white-haired princess thought it over multiple times, her mind going over the situation as though she were solving a Rubik's Cube. "I want to give Harley a chance," but she stopped midway through her statement when she saw an object move into her Byakugan's range from the waterfront. Ignoring everything else for the moment, she focused on the ship that was making its way toward the harbor, looking in on the transport from her perch 6 kilometers away. 163 men, armed. 6 containers with various forms of firearms and ammunition. She couldn't tell exactly what kind of firearms the men wielded as they hadn't prioritized guns very highly on their things to learn about list beyond the "this end spews super fast metal slugs at you. Avoid at all costs, bet." "Looks like we're tabling the discussion for another time?" he asked as he stood up before turning and offering a hand to help her. "We are." She took the proffered hand and he pulled her to her feet. "However, I think we should, at the very least, hold on to Harley. If nothing else, you get to keep her off the streets." "Got it. Now, what are we looking at?" The barge is approximately 500 meters long and measures 320 meters across. There are 4 levels, including the deck with an elevated enclosure serving as the bridge. Enemy unit placement, 10 in the bridge, the rest spread evenly along the north, south, east and west quadrants. She paused to mentally reorient herself so she was now looking into the ship from its side, rather than a top-down view. Their numbers aren't so even along each level. The top and sub-level 2 decks have 60 and 39 respectively, while the first and fourth sub-levels have 31 and 29. "Patrols, give me 5 minutes." Naruto nodded and stood back, allowing her to focus on the ship in the distance while he cooked up a plan of attack. Unless those guys are completely inept, there's an 80% chance that they'll raise an alarm before we can subdue them all. Best case scenario will be for us to take out at least a third of them before the alarm is raised and we have to fight our way out of there. Guns are linear weapons, so I'm certain I can get out of their path fast enough, and Kaguya's bone armor should provide adequate protection from them. Even with all these, Naruto knew that his plan would have to remain bare bones. There were simply too many variables to consider, as Kaguya's 5-minute study of their movement patterns was just too short to provide a truly detailed motion map of the people on that barge. 6 minutes later, they took off toward the ship, a pair of shadowy blurs that raced down the lighthouse and then out over the water, their steps silent as a graveyard. 4 feet away from the barge, Maelstrom took Shard's arm and dived into the ocean, leading her forward until they were mere inches from the hull of the barge before activating the Mangekyo Sharingan and calling upon the intangibility Obito was so famous for. A few moments more and she was inside the ship, hidden in an alcove that she had spotted as a good entry point. Pulling down his mask, he gave her a chaste kiss on the forehead before sliding out of the ship into the water again. Without wasting a second, he channeled Chakund him and used it to propel himself out, sending him flying 6 feet into the air before he attached himself to the hull of the ship. Another moment to extract every drop of water from his clothes, because leaving a wet trail on the deck would be a dead giveaway to his presence, and he sprinted up until he was just a few inches from the edge of the deck. Here, he froze until he heard the sound of approaching footsteps. The instant the guard got close, he launched himself over the guardrail and slapped one hand around the guy's mouth while the other jabbed at multiple nerve clusters around the man's neck so that the muscular gun hand was unconscious before he even realized that he was under attack. Dragging the unconscious man behind a crate, Maelstrom swiftly bound him with a spool of ninja wire he had brought along for that exact purpose before taking off, positions of his next 3 targets already locked in his mind. While he didn't have the all-seeing Byakugan advantage his partner had, his heightened perception and experience-honed danger senses clued him into the slightest of movements in his targets, allowing him to make adjustments on the fly to compensate for those motions and always strike with minimum wasted movements.
It was also thanks to these senses that he was able to note the slight tension in his next target's shoulders as well as how the man's free hand had shifted to rest on the butt of his rifle, to connect those two details to the call that the mercenary had just received via his walkie and deduce the most likely outcome.
They know we're here, he thought as he appeared before his target in a blur of motion, grabbing the man's head and driving it into the nearest wall twice in rapid succession before trussing him up in ninja wire. Knowing that the gig was up and the mercenaries knew of the additional presence on the ship, he moved on to the offense, hand seals blurring as he sped up to a trio of men that he could sense coming up from the lower level. The moment he arrived at the stairwell, he blasted them with a powerful burst of water that sent them tumbling ass over tea kettle before using a medium-powered lightning technique to knock them out. He was just about to move on when he heard a faint metallic click. Turning toward the location of the sound, he saw another trio leveling their assault rifles at him. He was just about to duck when a thought struck him. He had never really gone up against the prevalent form of weaponry of this world, leaving him with something of a gap in his knowledge base. Might as well rectify that now, he thought as he focused on the muzzles of the weapons just as the men pulled the trigger. For the first time since his arrival on this world, Naruto found himself feeling absolutely underwhelmed. These are the weapons that so many people are afraid of, he thought with a hint of disgust as he casually sidestepped the metal slugs, watching them push through the air as though they were moving in slow motion. I mean, I get the danger to civilians and genin, but any chunin that gets clipped by one of these would have to get his ass tossed back to the academy. It wasn't so much that the bullets were slow, they were moving faster than the average jonin could after all. Rather it was the fact that they were too linear. As soon as they left their muzzles, the bullets were confined to a straight line motion path whereas shuriken could be thrown along parabolic arcs. And though kunai generally had the same problem of being stuck to linear paths, even skilled genin understood the principles behind altering the thrown dagger's paths by having them ricochet off each other. Most chunin could do it in their sleep. As it was, the shinobi was so bored that he decided to up the difficulty of the game, as it were. He closed his eyes and willfully chose to ignore all that his ears heard while shrinking the radius of his active sensory sphere to a single yard. Now forced to react to the bullets when they got within a yard's distance, he reviewed his initial opinion. While dodging a single shot would be easy, at this distance, most B-rank and a few of the non-frontline A-rank asterisk jonin would be hard-pressed to dodge the bullet hail he was facing without either getting tagged or using a chakra enhancement of some sort. An S-rank shinobi getting tagged by one of these would lose their S-class rank on principle. Unless they had a damn good reason for it. He amended as he shifted into the path of a bullet and braced himself for the possibility of pain. Nothing happened. Looks like Michael's impact absorption matrix is working perfectly. He smirked, sparing a glance at the unmarred skin where the bullet had bounced off without so much as a tingle. Now that tests are over, let's get back to this. Deciding to screw with his would-be assailants a bit, he performed a sealless replacement with a barrel from a quartet that was just behind them, leaving the men befuddled as they stared at the barrel they had just destroyed. Steadying his breathing, he held himself still behind the other barrels while listening to the perplexed sounds coming from the mercenaries as they approached the stairwell. He waited until one of them lifted his walkie to his mouth before leaping over the barrels in a burst of motion that carried him into their midst, his fist smashing into the nearest man's jaw and sending him into La La Land. As the other two fumbled for their guns, he delivered a low, spinning kick that took their legs out from under them, allowing him to get close and dig stiff fingers into the nerve clusters at the juncture between their shoulders and their necks before taking off again. 5 minutes after receiving Alfred's call, the cloaked batplane swung into the airspace above the administrative building of the Duran Harbor, sensors sweeping as far as they could into the sea to see if they could find anything that was out of place. According to the satellite feed, the fighting on the ship had died down to where there had only been 2 firefights in the past 4 minutes, leading him to believe that the off-worlder duo were about to make their getaway. The Dark Knight was just considering moving to hover over the ship when the sensors picked up something. The ship was moving. No, the bat frowned as he quickly analyzed sensor readouts. The water beneath the ship is moving, carrying the ship along. It wasn't very obvious due to the fact that it was nighttime, but there was one major clue that had helped bring him to that conclusion. The ship had just gone from a near total stall to over 30 knots in about 3 seconds. The ship in question simply wasn't capable of that kind of acceleration, and the fact that Uzumaki, a skilled manipulator of the elements, was on board only increased the probability of his suspicion being accurate. Rather than jump in, however, the Dark Knight chose to stay aboard his ship, monitoring the situation from above. At that speed the ship will definitely crash into the harbor if he doesn't slow it down. Better I let him bring it to a stop by himself. Having made that decision, he the Batplane's communication system and keyed into a specific police channel. Commissioner. You know, I was beginning to get worried when the ship went silent. James, Jim, Gordon's voice, hewn rough by a lifetime of harsh yelling at criminals and lazy recruits alike, crackled through the cockpit. I'm guessing you plan on stopping the ship before it rams into the... I'm not on that ship. He interrupted, the faintest edge of irritation bleeding into his tone and making him sound a tad harsher than he wanted. That's why I'm calling in. I've been tracking their movement since they arrived on the ship, and I have reason to believe that at least one of the two that assaulted that vessel is the Joker's killer. Oh. The Batplane's knife futuristic audio equipment made it easy for him to pick up even the slightest nuances in the commissioner's tone, and his eyes narrowed. Are you sure about that? Yes. Well, that complicates things. You want us to apprehend them? When the Dark Knight remained mum. The commissioner sighed wearily. Well, that's not going to happen. Not if I had to tell my boys why we're suddenly slapping cuffs on costumed vigilantes. Explain. The cockpit was filled with the sound of quiet commands and then rustling clothes before the commissioner spoke up again. Ever since news about the Joker's death cropped up, the whole department's practically been of one mind on the matter. Half of my guys think they're heroes, and the other half that doesn't consider them heroes are willing to give them a free pass for taking care of the clown. Nothing was said for a moment as the Batman worked his jaw tersely, trying to hold back a snarl, before growling, "And you?" The commissioner exhaled again, and Bruce could almost see the conflicted look on the older man's face. I hate to say it, but I'm with the second group. No, the honest truth is that I'm relieved. Look, I know it goes against just about everything I've ever stood for, but for the longest time, I always feared getting a call, rushing out and seeing Barbara strung up by that bastard, or watching her laugh herself to death. For the first time in years, I've been able to sleep without seeing Barbara's face frozen in a deranged grin. The commissioner's voice bore a strange mix of guilt and relief, as though he felt guilty that he was relieved. It's probably not too far from the truth. The detective in the Cape Crusader thought as the man continued to talk. Jim has a strong moral compass, but he loves his daughter more than just about anything. The fact that the Joker's death makes Barbara's life just that little bit safer is a... Wait, something's going on. The commissioner's call pulled him out of his thoughts as the cockpit was filled with the sound of rustling clothes and indistinct shouts, and the Dark Knight watched the proceedings below with laser-like intensity. The ship had been carried 50 meters into one of the docking bays when the waters around the hull crystallized with a sharp crack, forming an icy block that held the cargo vessel still while creating a frozen stairway into the ship. 6 GCPD SWAT teams moved in slowly, guns out and ready to attack, yet nothing happened. No sounds of gunfire from the ship, no masked figures popping out. If one could physically yank the palpable tension out of the atmosphere, it would have seemed more like a rookie training exercise than an actual, potentially dangerous situation. Anderson, this is Gordon. What's going on up there? The commissioner's voice rang out through the plane's speakers, the communications tab on the man's radio still active. There's nothing here, sir. I mean, there are bodies, but they're all unconscious.
All right, sweep the deck and move to the... Wait, we've got something on the wall. There's a message here, sir.
What is it? It's a Bond reference, sir. From Russia with love. Great, so we're dealing with comedians. The commissioner sighed. Look, sweep the deck, see if you can find anything else, and then move to the lower levels. At this point, the Dark Knight's attention was elsewhere as he cast his plane's sensors to sweep the area around the ship. He wasn't certain, but he suspected that his target wouldn't stay aboard the ship, awaiting discovery. No, if his assumptions about the blonde were correct, then Uzumaki Naruto had used the nature of the ship's arrival to draw attention while he slipped away in some other manner. He had scarcely finished that line of thought when the sensors picked up movement 543 meters away from the ship. 2 forms had just emerged from the water and were racing inland, toward the harbor. Got you. The Dark Knight scowled before giving chase. Kaguya. I see him. The white-haired princess confirmed as they raced past towering stacks of cargo containers, the cloaked form of the Dark Knight's jet visible through her dojutsu. I take it you want to do this on your own?
He won't stop until he has me in chains for murder. The shinobi spat the last word with an unhealthy dose of venom. Like his passive methods don't amount to an even worse crime. I might as well confront him now before he does something unexpected. Confident as he was in his abilities, Naruto knew that the Batman was not one to be underestimated.
Kaguya nodded, understanding her partner's line of thought. I'll head over to Camden to check on Corey then. I'll see if I can wrap this up quickly so I can meet up with you. If you finish up first, then wait for me at our backup spot, he said as they moved onto the service lane that led out of the Duran harbor. Alright then. I'll be off. Wait. He didn't need to see her face to picture the arched look she was giving him. I almost forgot. At Camden. How did you almost forget that? She asked a tad incredulously. Hey, I've been busy, he replied, sounding almost petulant. Anyway, S been working on crowd control with Corey while the GCPD teams work on rounding up the rabble. I'm guessing the police have had their hands full? Not since I took Harley off the playing field. He shrugged. She's been transported to a black site with Shiho to keep an eye on her until I have another discussion with Pamela. Well, that certainly makes my job easier. She noted the position of the Dark Knight's jet before plotting a course that would quickly and easily get her out of the way. I'll be leaving now. See you later. With that, his partner vanished in a series of shunshin jumps, swiftly making her way toward the port of Camden Green. At the same time, He altered his trajectory just a bit, bringing him into a collision course with a multi-story building until he raced up its side to get to the wide, flat roof where he simply stood, waiting. He didn't have to wait long. Not up to a minute after settling on the rooftop, the Dark Knight glided in. His features hidden beneath his cowl as usual yet radiating an almost primal rage, thinly masked by an icy demeanor. Maelstrom. Batman. He inclined his head by just the slightest of degrees, enough to acknowledge the man's presence but not enough to denote respect. Not by a long shot. You killed the Joker. I did. He admitted freely. There was no point denying what was now, for all intents, public knowledge. The Batman's glare grew even colder and a heavy, palpably tense aura settled on that rooftop. You committed murder. Depends on where you're standing, the shinobi replied with a simple shrug. You say I committed murder, someone else says I avenged the innocent lives you damned. He noted the slight flare of something that bubbled up when those words were uttered as well as how ruthlessly that feeling was crushed by the Caped Crusader. The shinobi chose to remain mum for the moment. While yet another says I saved the lives of many more innocents yet unborn. So, which line of thought do you believe is correct? Do you think this is some kind of a joke? The Dark Knight asked. His heated tone at odd with the frosty glare he yet maintained. You broke the law. Let me ask you something. He interrupted. A rabid dog is on the loose, infecting many, causing pain and generally being a nuisance to society. All attempts at curing it have failed. This is not a philosophical. You will listen. Maelstrom cut in, his tone laced with enough killing intent to temporarily shut the Batman up. All attempts at curing the rabid dog have failed. What are you expected to do? You don't give up. The Dark Knight responded, shrugging off the foreboding aura the shinobi was giving off. You lock it up tight and keep trying to find a cure. Maelstrom couldn't help arching an eyebrow at the man. Even when it repeatedly breaks loose, wreaking havoc and spreading chaos at every turn? Especially then. The response was sharp, born out of utterly unshakable conviction. You don't have to become a monster to fight monsters. Then you're too broken to understand what everyone in Gotham clearly does. Ed harshly, a sneer visible on his face. You project your desire for redemption on scum and damn the innocents while hiding behind a mask of justice. We don't operate like the people of your world did. Then maybe you should. He rejoined, his eyes growing cold with the anger he felt at the Caped Crusader's words. Maybe you should consider facing the reality of your actions as opposed to the idealism behind them because the reality of your system is that it is flawed. You think I'm a monster because I have killed? Well then so has every last member of the Justice League. We would never. 3 guesses what I learned from Cyborg about the Apocalyptian invasion. The shinobi's words were like a bucket of chilly water thrown over a flame, dousing the Dark Knight's impassioned denial in a flash. There was no need for an explanation, as the Dark Knight himself had discovered on his little trip through the Boon Tube. Every parademon they had fought was a horribly warped human. Every dead parademon was an enslaved innocent, forced to do the will of the dread Lord of Apocalypse. Superman's punches, Wonder Woman's sword slashes, Canary's cries, his explosive batarangs, they had all unwittingly stained their hands in the blood of innocence. You never truly thought it over, did you? Maelstrom continued, driving his point home. Tell me this, Batman. I won't blame you for the parademons you killed before your trip to rescue Superman, but why didn't you try to save the parademons after your return from Apocalypse? When you fought to keep the creatures at bay while Superman and Wonder Woman battled against their master, why did you kill them then? Was it because of the lives they had taken? Because of the carnage they had caused? Convince me, Batman, because I can't quite rectify your decision to keep on sheltering the Joker, and make no mistake, you were sheltering him with your actions against Darkseid's slaves. Silence. The Dark Knight had nothing to say. Knowing that he had driven that point home, the shinobi turned to gaze upon the city below, watching the cars speed by as people went on with their lives. You're a vigilante, Batman. You've chosen to exist outside the law, to seek justice and stand against evil outside the system that governs the common man, and there is no going back on that. Black Mask, the Penguin, Killer Croc, your enemies don't play by the rules, so it is folly to keep on trying to apprehend them by rules that they don't follow. He turned to the man even as he mentally locked onto Kaguya's position. I am not your enemy, Batman. I hope you remember that. And with that, he vanished into the night.